Volume 8, Chapter 354, 75th Floor, Wandering Planet, Part 1. In theory, if one defeated another immortal, they could also seize their powers. It was possible for a mortal to hold multiple immortal powers. It was truly a ridiculous notion. The power of an immortal was the essence of everything they had accumulated in their life. To seize it, especially as a mere mortal, how absurd. Or is it? The ghost reconsidered. It wasn't strange for a mortal to possess a skill like soul ascension. What was unusual was that, despite possessing such a skill, this individual still remained immortal. Perhaps he's absorbing power as he seizes it. In many ways, he was an anomaly. At least, that was beyond the ghost's comprehension. Taesan checked his remaining skills. A skill he acquired while standing at the threshold, beyond the boundary. Special activation skill, beyond the boundary cost. Mastery, 1%. A person at the edge between mortality and the beyond can wield a fraction of the power beyond the boundary. It can be used in conjunction with an attack or skill. The power from beyond, it seemed like a skill he would understand better if he tested it directly. You activated beyond the boundary. Suddenly, Taesan was enveloped by a peculiar sensation. It was as if he were floating, drifting in midair. He felt a strange sense of distance from the world around him. Taesan gathered his mana. You activated Frozen World. Crack, cold energy surged within the labyrinth. Frozen World was an intermediate magic spell Taesan often used. He had a perfect grasp of its power and mechanics, but this time Frozen World felt different. The raging frost began freezing everything. Taesan was no exception. From his fingertips to his arm, the cold spread, freezing his body. His entire body became rigid with frost, and a biting chill pierced his lungs. This Frozen World was qualitatively different from the one he usually used. Taesan canceled its activation and created distance. Crack. Even though Taesan cancelled it, Frozen World continued to expand as if it defied his control. The force contained within this version of Frozen World is entirely different. Even if he used all his skill overlays and forced amplification, it couldn't match this level of power. The power was indeed overwhelming. No ordinary mortal could withstand it, but the risk was also clear. Control is difficult. Because he was summoning power from beyond the boundary, it was challenging to wield it as he wished. If misused, it could backfire on him. Dangerous, but useful. Though control was difficult, it wasn't impossible. Thanks to his utmost restraint, he avoided taking damage. It could be considered an ace up his sleeve, slightly more stable than standing at the boundary. That was a reasonable way to interpret it. Finally, everything was confirmed, just as Taesan was about to descend to the 75th floor. A dark portal opened, thick black energy spread throughout the labyrinth, paving a path for its master. Taesan halted his steps. He addressed the one who appeared. It's been a while, demon god. A figure appeared, resembling a young girl. The demon god smiled as she approached Taesan. Thanks to you, I saw something quite entertaining again. Were you watching? I didn't interfere, but I was observing. The demon god smirked. It was an exceptionally rare sight. Even the ones outside were probably astonished, and they'll be even more intrigued by you, although I have no intention of yielding. The demon god murmured softly. I appeared this time because I have something to convey to you. A black chair materialized behind her. She sat and spoke. On the 76th floor, the guides of sin will come to fight you, and unlike before, their numbers will not be limited to just one. Several then, Taesan nodded. It was an anticipated development, so he remained emotionally unmoved. The guides could no longer face Taesan alone, thus they resorted to numbers. It wasn't unexpected, however, there was another question. Even so, they won't be able to defeat me. True, in your current state, you'd likely win no matter how many of them come. The demon god acknowledged this. I lifted the restrictions on them because the fights were no longer balanced. Until now, the guides were overwhelmingly stronger than Taesan. Watching a one-sided battle wasn't entertaining, so the demon god placed restrictions on the guides. The same would apply to the opposite situation. Taesan, I intend to place a restriction on your level up. Level up? In the labyrinth system, leveling up restores all your states. Health, mana, even mental power, all were fully restored. Taesan had won several battles using that mechanism. The restriction I'll place on you is that you won't recover upon leveling up during battles against the guides. Leveling up would no longer restore his state. Taesan asked. Is it mandatory? No, unlike those fools, you can choose to accept or decline my restriction. It's entirely your choice. However, if you accept, I'll give you an appropriate reward. Taesan's decision was quick. He nodded. I'll accept. For the demon god to impose such a restriction on him implied he still had a reasonable chance of victory. If he could gain additional rewards, there was no reason to refuse. The demon god grinned. Good. Then I'll look forward to it, grow stronger, and one day, with those words, the demon god vanished. Taesan resumed his steps toward the 75th floor. 75th floor quest started. Complete the world in under an hour. Reward. A ring forged from the core of the world. Secret reward. What's this? The ghost looked pleased after seeing the quest requirements. So the 75th floor quest is still this one. It's been so long, but it hasn't changed. How nostalgic. It must be a quest you've cleared before too. Yeah, I told you before, there's a floor that requires you to complete the world in under an hour. This is that very floor. Taesan stepped onto the 75th floor. In the room on the 75th floor, there was a distorted space that seemed endless. As he entered, the space shifted. Taesan arrived on a desolate planet. You activated Larrage's territory detection. Dark energy spread across the ground. What he could sense was that there was no one else here. As he looked up, he saw the vastness of space. This planet had almost no atmosphere. There was nothing visible in space. This planet was truly abandoned. It was an environment where life could not thrive, a world that had ended in a different sense than Hafren's world. So I just have to complete it without any specific conditions. The size of the world didn't seem that vast. Judging by its visible radius, it was much smaller than Earth. Even for other adventurers, as long as they were prepared, it seemed manageable to complete. It can't be that easy, can it? No sooner had the ghost finished speaking than the system window appeared. Complete the world in under an hour, overcoming all obstacles. Slowly, a presence began to manifest across the entire planet. So this is what they mean by obstacles. Taesan nodded and kicked off. The worlds will rose to block Taesan's path. This tiny, wandering planet had been devoid of anything from the beginning. Abandoned in a corner of the universe, unable to belong anywhere, it was destined to drift through space, cold and fading. Normally, a planet like that wouldn't possess any will, but this wandering planet was unique. As it drifted through space, it passed by countless planets teeming with life, and perhaps because of that, it gradually began to develop a faint will. The first emotions this sentient, wandering planet felt were anger and hatred. Why was it abandoned like this? Why did it have to disappear lonely and desolate? Why couldn't it harbor life? Emotions resonated throughout the entire planet. But there was no life to feel those emotions. Although it had gained a will, it didn't have the power to sustain life. So this wandering planet continued to roam the cosmos, endlessly burning with rage. The fact that it developed a will was the greatest misfortune for the wandering planet. After countless eons adrift in space, destined to continue like this forever, someone arrived on the planet. You really found a place like this, Balbabamba. I'll have to praise you later. The man who appeared by leaping through space muttered to himself. The eternally enraged planet paused as it sensed a living being in its world. A living creature. The wizard who would one day create the labyrinth smiled and waved. Nice to meet you. As soon as those words reached it, the planet showed its intent to kill. The anger accumulated over eons had long since twisted into hatred for all living things. The ground rose to crush the wizard and the atmosphere transformed into poison. The wizard sensed all this killing intent one by one. So this much, not bad. Once he grasped its power, the wizard clapped his hands. Instantly, the raging ground subsided. The air, which had turned to poison, quickly calmed. The world had slipped from the planet's control. Just as it was about to panic, the wizard spoke. Do you hate all living things? Although it was spoken language, the planet could understand the meaning within. The planet stirred, affirming the question. Its feelings were severely distorted, having never communicated with anything before, but the mage understood easily. Then, would you like to make a contract with me? The wizard proposed to the planet. If it connected as a floor of the labyrinth, adventurers would periodically come to visit it. It didn't matter what it did with the adventurers. It could kill them or ignore them. But if an adventurer met the conditions, they would move on to another place. Although the planet didn't fully understand the contract, it accepted willingly. Life would come to this abandoned land. And it could do whatever it wanted with those lives. There was no reason to refuse. Thus, the planet became the 75th floor of the labyrinth. Countless adventurers visited. The planet tried to kill them. Some couldn't endure and died, while others barely survived and returned. The planet wondered about this new life. How much of its power could they withstand? The will of the planet smiled quietly. At some point, tormenting and killing adventurers had become the purpose that sustained its will. First, gently, the planet gathered its power. Rumble, the ground formed a massive wall and surged toward Taesan. Not only did the weight of the earth bear down, but the planet's will was embedded within it, making it incredibly difficult to withstand. This wouldn't kill him. The planet, now the 75th floor, had an overall grasp of the adventurer's strength. Sure enough, Taesan emerged from the earthen onslaught, but it was different from what the planet had expected. It thought he would emerge, but with some wounds. Every adventurer had been that way before. However, Taesan emerged without even a speck of dust on him. Despite throwing various forces at him after that, Taesan took no damage. As things weren't going as planned, the planet irritably summoned a gust. The winds swirled into a massive storm. It was the planet's ultimate storm, the power that had killed the most adventurers. Normally, it would toy with them for a while, only using this storm just before they reached their goal. But in its frustration, it unleashed it immediately. This time, the planet was convinced it could inflict significant damage on Taesan. Facing the raging storm, Taesan clenched his fist. Boom, the storm dissipated with a single punch. The planet paused, Taesan dusted off his hands. It's not very difficult, is it? Chapter 355, 75th Floor, Wandering Planet, Part 2, Rumble, a bolt of lightning struck down. The wind transformed into a violent storm, and the earth shattered as if it intended to swallow Taesan whole. Taesan stomped his foot, crushing the crumbling ground beneath him. He dodged the lightning and punched away the storm with his fist. Taesan quickly assessed the situation. Clearing this level wouldn't be difficult. In that case, rather than obsessing over an immediate clear, the right answer was to identify anything valuable he could obtain. Taesan began to explore his surroundings instead of heading to his destination. You activated labyrinth territory detection. You activated concentrated detection. Using the power of detection continuously, he scanned his surroundings. He gathered comprehensive information from the depths of the earth to the high heavens, but nothing appeared. This place was truly empty. Absolutely nothing here. It's a place where life cannot exist. There are times when you can find something in such a space, but it doesn't seem to be the case here. Taesan moved to explore a wider area, and the abandoned planet became immensely irritated by Taesan's actions. The planet, filled with rage, struck down a lightning bolt. Taesan raised his sword. Clang, the lightning collided with his sword and scattered in all directions. Nothing here either. Taesan paid no attention to the planet's attack. The planet grew even angrier at his indifference. With its emotions, a powerful will surged forth. Rumble, the ground split and collapsed. A vast city-sized area sank, creating a massive hole. Rumble. Lightning poured down furiously, scorching the ground. The storm hurled the shattered debris of Earth through the air. It was, in every sense, an apocalypse, yet Taesan stood on the crumbling ground without a single tremor. With the help of his special continuous activation skill, balancing, he could maintain his posture with ease, unaffected by this level of tremor. The Earth continued to collapse under the planet's will. The ground, which had been breaking apart, rose with the planet's intent, attempting to engulf Taesan. In that instant, Taesan activated a skill. You activated Earthquake. The ground, which had been trying to swallow him, was neutralized by the earthquake Taesan triggered. He escaped the collapsing terrain in an instant. The planet was left frustrated like a dog chasing chickens in vain. It's much weaker than the world of Hafren. That place is unique. In the first place, it's nearly impossible for a star to wield power at an immortal level. Immortals were, as the name suggested, beings without death. They had no lifespan. They continued to exist until met with physical or mental annihilation. However, planets all had a lifespan. From a human's perspective, it may seem unfathomably long, but conversely, it meant there was an inevitable end. Thus, planets could never achieve the power of an immortal. Hafren's world breaking that rule is a very rare exception. Not that this planet is weak, though. Floor 75. The fact that this was a quest in the deep floors said it all. Ordinary adventurers would not be able to overcome a planet's will, but Taesan was far from an ordinary adventurer. Let's keep looking around to see if there's anything worthwhile. Completing the floor wasn't an issue. Taesan intended to push the limits of exploration to see if there was anything valuable to obtain. The planet, watching Taesan, was losing its mind. The planet ceaselessly tormented the adventurers who gathered here to clear the 75th floor. But the outcome was always the same. Either the adventurers succeeded and returned to the labyrinth, or they perished and disappeared here. In the end, nothing remained beside the planet. It was all so empty. Unable to bear it, the planet developed a particular worldview. Mortal beings. Adventurers were nothing more than toys to it. Living beings were weak and fragile. Even a slight whim from it would leave them broken and defeated. Compared to those insignificant creatures, it was far stronger, larger, and superior. Yes, life was unnecessary. Life was nothing more than a toy for expressing its perfect self. This was the planet's absolute belief. Twisted emotions had even robbed it of the admiration and envy it once felt toward life. This belief became the pillar supporting the planet's psyche. Yet now, the planet found itself unable to do anything to Taesan. It was undeniable, no matter how much it wished otherwise. It felt with certainty that Taesan was stronger than itself. The planet let out a furious roar. The emotions surged and everything began to fall apart. Until now, the planet had never unleashed its full power against an adventurer. Cleaning up afterward was also challenging from the planet's standpoint, but this time it had abandoned all restraint, determined to kill Taesan. What a mess, yet still it couldn't touch him, Taesan murmured, unleashing his power. He blocked the planet's attacks of darkness and magic swirling like a storm. The Earth, unable to withstand the force, began to collapse. At this rate, it would take at least several hundred years to recover. If things went poorly, its contract with the wizards could break, and it could be expelled from the 75th floor. But the planet only thought of killing Taesan. This reaction is so different from my time. The ghost let out a bitter laugh. Though he had been strong, he was nothing compared to Taesan now. When he cleared the 75th floor, the planet had mocked and toyed with him as it attacked, and he had barely survived by risking his life. But against Taesan, the planet was showing all its emotions, intent on killing him, and Taesan lightly blocked every single one of its attacks. The time was almost up. It was nearly time to finish. Taesan launched himself forward, accelerating and using his skills to swiftly break through the planet. Realizing Taesan was about to clear the floor, the planet hurriedly mustered even more power, but it couldn't reach him. It couldn't respond properly to Taesan's sprinting speed as he carved a path forward. Taesan was nearing his destination. In the end, the planet couldn't hold back, shriek. With a deafening roar, the ground in front of Taesan collapsed, revealing a pure white will within. Having seen it before, Taesan immediately recognized it. That white will was the will of the world itself. The will gathered power and burst forth. The strength of the world itself condensed, intending to crush Taesan. But compared to the power of the destroyed world of Hafren, it was ridiculously weak. This much could be broken through. Taesan swung his arm. You activated magic overlay. He layered the starlight arrow 3 times, then he detonated it. You activated magic release. You activated forced amplification. The starlight arrow was fired. It collided with the force of will, turning the world white. Rumble, the planet was shocked. Even after revealing itself and using its power, it was being shattered by Taesan's starlight arrow. The planet made a decision. Having come this far, there was no turning back. Even if it meant collapsing, it would kill Taesan. With that resolve, it moved its true form. Boom, the planet began to disintegrate, its shell cracked and its core twisted. The ground rose up. The air trembled and the atmosphere crumbled. The scale of this attack was fundamentally different from before. Literally everything on the planet was attacking Taesan. The weight of the continent crashed down on him, and the planet's atmosphere compressed to swallow him whole. In terms of sheer physical force, it was beyond anything Taesan had ever faced, but it wasn't something he couldn't overcome. He braced himself and charged forward. You activated Gale Sprint. You activated skill acceleration. He moved with the force of a storm, crushing the advancing ground beneath him. Taesan stomped. You activated Beyond the Boundary. You activated Magic Overlay. He layered the earthquake and directed it towards the advancing ground. You activated Magic Release. The advancing ground shattered like a wall. It scattered like broken pieces of a ruined cube, clearing a path. Thud. Taesan stomped his foot. The planets will exploded in a fit of rage. Taesan swung his sword. Crash. Power clashed and shockwaves spread in all directions. Taesan forced the planet's power back with his sword. At the end of his charge, the planet's will was directly visible. The will trembled violently. The power surged madly, expressing emotions so intense Taesan could even sense them. How could this be? It was a massive star, a planet. To it, humans were less than dust. It had unleashed power with the intention of its own destruction. This speck of a human should have been crushed to death under its force. But Taesan had broken through and was now right before it. This was impossible. With an overwhelming wave of denial, it gathered its power. The ripples of its emotions shook his mind, but Taesan easily brushed them off with a shake of his head. Black and golden colors overlapped on Taesan's sword, forming a shade of gray. The planet didn't stop either. And the moment he crossed the boundary line, the planet's power warped. Crack! Taesan's sword pierced through the planet's will. The gray color burst forth, painting the world. You, Balbabamba could not finish his sentence. Taesan sat calmly in front of him. If only you had cleared it like everyone else. Finally, Balbabamba couldn't hold back and spoke. It was something a labyrinth manager should never say, but he couldn't help but voice it. The core floors, 74th and 75th, had been changed because of Taesan. It was unprecedented for 2 deep floors to change in such a short period. It's me who designs the locations and concepts fitting for each floor. Do you know how hard that is? Balbabamba spoke in an exhausted tone. He was already extremely busy creating new core floors, and now an additional floor had been added to the pile. Moreover, it was the 75th floor. Since the creation of the labyrinth, it had never changed until now, when Taesan forced them to find a new one. I'm sorry, but I couldn't just go easy on it. I understand, it's just a complaint. I went through so much trouble to find that planet during the labyrinth's design phase, and now it's useless. So it was such an old floor. Taesan was a bit surprised. He knew it had been around even in the Ghost's era, but he hadn't realized it was a quest set up since the design stage. What will happen to the planet now? Just before the boundary pierced its will, a completion message for the quest had appeared. Thanks to immediately returning to the labyrinth, Taesan didn't know the outcome. Balbabamba responded. It wasn't annihilated, but it suffered damage that will be hard to recover from. Its consciousness is likely broken. At the very least, it can no longer function as a floor in the labyrinth. The abandoned planet could no longer remain as part of the labyrinth's floors. This story had little relevance to Taesan. He had only defended himself against the planet's attacks. Well then, good luck, I need to quickly go investigate. Muttering grumpily, Balbabamba departed. In any case, Taesan cleared the 75th floor. He received his rightful reward for it. Ring refined from the core of the world. Health plus 25, mana plus 500, attack power plus 150, defense power plus 150. A ring crafted by compressing and refining the world's core. The craftsman was very inexperienced, so much of its power was lost, but the strength it contains is still immensely powerful. Staff of one who contracted with the Demon King. Dark magic plus 330, magic power plus 500, chance speed plus 15%, a staff once wielded by one who contracted with the Demon King of the Demon Realm, who was once one of the mightiest. It said those who contract with demons meet a miserable end, though this didn't apply to the Demon King's contractor. The ring simply offered high health, mana, and attack power. Its effects were straightforward and its performance was solid. The secret reward, a staff for dark magic, wasn't particularly special. It could be sacrificed as an offering to the demon god, but these weren't the only things Taesan gained. Even though there had been nothing on the abandoned planet, he had acquired something. Special continuous activation skill, opponent of the world. Proficiency 1%, one who battled against the world itself. When opposing the will of the world, enhances personal rank and all stats. Additionally, it allows a more direct reading of the will imbued in a planet's power. It seemed like an upgrade of the immortal opponent skill he obtained on the 74th floor, applied to a world-level opponent. I'll be able to use it in the world of Hafren. Even Taesan couldn't guarantee he could conquer Hafren's world yet, but by obtaining skills related to it and gradually becoming stronger, he would one day reach that level. Taesan headed to the 76th floor. The beginning of the 76th floor, and the demon god had said they would be waiting here. Taesan brushed past the shopkeeper and entered the 76th floor. There, he felt numerous presences. Why are there so many? Murmuring, Taesan walked toward where he sensed the presences. There numerous guides of sin awaited. You encountered the Black Twin. You have encountered the White Twin. You have encountered the Fist Saint Altiar. You have encountered the Lord of the Abyss Cliff. You have encountered the Master of the Echoing Valley. Estevan, you have encountered the Starlight Flash Floria. You have encountered the Warrior of the Great Saint Gloria. You have encountered the Most Noble One Helia. Chapter 356, 76th Floor, Guides of Sin. Part 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 8 guides stood before Taesan. Well, familiar faces, the ghost muttered. The guides also looked at the ghost. Hello, hero, 2 women spoke. Apart from the fact that one had black hair and eyes while the other had white, they had perfectly identical faces. The black and white twins, Cliff, there are quite a few of them. The ghost, observing each one, soon spoke in a chilly tone. Society isn't here, she refused. As if representing the others, a young man with platinum blonde hair stepped forward confidently. She said she would find her own path. Helia. Were you the one who led them? I couldn't stand to watch a lowborn creature running wild any longer. Helia cast a disdainful gaze at Taesan. Even one with a noble lineage like you has fallen so far. You crave revenge, clinging to someone whose origins are unknown. No society, no Ambracia, no Lion King. All the ones I wanted to see aren't here. Do as you please, Taesan, the ghost muttered, not paying much attention to Helia's words. Seeing this attitude, Helia frowned and tried to say something, but a muscular man stepped forward. It's enough. As he said, he's already a dead man, no need to mind him. HMPH, Helia composed himself and looked back at Taesan. Then die lowborn. At Helia's signal, the guides lunged, surrounding Taesan completely. There was no way out, a perfect encirclement. The muscular man, Fist Saint Altair, opened his mouth. Gods are fickle beings by nature, don't be too discouraged. I too have experienced this. To the gods, mortals are mere toys. Taesan understood. The guides of sin believed that Taesan had been abandoned by the demon god. The reason was easy to guess. With an expression not remotely sympathetic, Altair spoke as though he pitied him. A restriction on recovery. Honestly, it seems a bit harsh. The demon god appeared to them. At the sudden appearance of the demon god, they were shocked, thinking she was there to change her decision, but the demon god's following words widened their eyes. The demon god announced that Taesan would not receive any recovery effects from leveling up, even if he defeated them in battle. They couldn't understand. In battles between adventurers, especially in 1 versus many battles, leveling up was crucial. By somehow defeating one, leveling up to restore to peak condition, and then defeating another to level up again, without this method, victory was impossible. Yet the demon god had blocked this. At that moment they were convinced. The demon god had abandoned Taesan. If not, there was no reason to impose such a restriction. The guides' faces were full of confidence. They were certain they could defeat Taesan. Don't blame us. If you must, blame the demon god. With those words, the various powers of the guides surged. Not blaming anyone, Taesan muttered, there's no point. The gathered powers were difficult even for Taesan to fend off. A frontal confrontation would most likely end in defeat, but of course it didn't matter to Taesan. Watching the surging power, Taesan raised his sword. You have activated Forced Duel. For 12 seconds, no one but Floria can deal damage to you. As the energy reached Taesan, it vanished. What? Huh? The guides, who had been anticipating and countering Taesan's movements, paused. Their powers were erased. Taesan responded to only one thing: Floria's attack. Forced Duel, bring it on. You have activated Apostle Transformation, Darkness and Chaos. You have activated Incarnation of Nature. You have activated Vessel of the King. Your enemy of those who tread upon your depths has been triggered. Taesan stomped his foot. The guides recoiled in terror, leaping back. Why you? A tall man with blue hair, Floria, jumped back in horror. In an instant, his body accelerated, putting distance between himself and Taesan. But Taesan followed Floria. Floria was undoubtedly fast, but not fast enough to shake off Taesan. You have activated Strong Blow. Kang. As their swords clashed, Floria let out a groan. An overwhelming weight coursed through his sword, making it hard to bear. Floria shouted desperately, "Do whatever it takes." Even if you say that, the other guides were also desperate. Various powers stormed through the 76th floor. Yet none of it reached Taesan. You have activated Forced Duel. For 12 seconds, no one but Floria can deal damage to you. Forced Duel activated again, erasing all the other guides' powers. Only Floria's power could reach Taesan. What kind of skill is that? Altair shouted in disbelief. The effect of Forced Duel appeared as a system message. They understood what was happening. Impossible, how can such a skill even? Attack nullification, absolute judgment, endurance. They were aware of Taesan's unreasonable skills, but they hadn't anticipated a skill like Forced Duel. What was it? Did it mean their numerical advantage was utterly meaningless? Altair, with an expression of denial, swung his fist. A powerful wind engulfed Taesan. Even Taesan would need to move to block this attack, but it vanished the moment it touched him. In the end, Altair let out a hollow laugh. I see. Helia barely contained his surprise, twisting his face in frustration. So, he wasn't abandoned by the demon god. The existence of a skill like Forced Duel made it possible for him to manage even with the restriction on recovery. They had devised a plan to bring Taesan down with the strength of their collective. However, Forced Duel had completely disrupted that plan. Change of plans. Helia quickly made a decision. They were adventurers from the depths who had descended through countless variables and absurdities. Even amidst confusion, they could find solutions. Group attacks are impossible. Fight him one-on-one and try to drag this out as long as possible. Drag it out, we're trying to wear him down. The other guides also understood. Taesan couldn't recover any strength spent during the battle. They wouldn't give him a chance to drink a potion. In other words, if they kept attacking, they could exhaust his stamina, mana, and even skills with cooldowns. In this way, they'd force him to use up his resources one by one, increasing the chances of victory for the next one in line. They knew it was the right answer, but none of them were pleased. How pitiful, Altair laughed bitterly. They had come here discarding their pride, gathering a full group of 8 to kill Taesan. And yet they had to throw away even their pride and almost abandon victory simply to stall for time. Their pride as those who had ventured into the depths was shattered. Helia's lips twisted. Victory is more important than pride. There's no need to follow my orders, fight however you want. While they reached this conclusion, Taesan and Floria continued to clash. Damn it, Floria also realized that no one could interfere except for himself and Taesan. Gritting his teeth, he gripped his dagger tightly. Don't mock me. Taesan was undoubtedly strong, but he was also an adventurer who had ventured into the depths. He had arrived here after repeatedly triumphing over unreasonable and unbeatable odds. A system message appeared before Floria's eyes. Your opponent is an impossible enemy to defeat. Your fair duel has been activated. Your battle lust has been activated. Your relentless has been activated. As the skills to counter formidable foes activated, Floria's entire body accelerated. Floria placed his hand on the ground. It was the moment when Taesan accelerated to drive his sword into Floria's throat. Floria has activated designated mark acceleration. Floria's body vanished. It was literal, no warning, no indication of power. Floria reappeared behind Taesan and stabbed at him. Your first attack nullification has been activated. Taesan quickly turned, swinging his sword, but Floria wasn't there. Floria has activated designated mark acceleration. Floria moved behind Taesan again. This time, Taesan didn't allow it. He twisted his waist, swinging his sword at Floria, who was stabbing with his dagger. Floria's body blurred, leaving an afterimage. Floria has activated Erase Shadow. Taesan's sword barely grazed Floria. Floria's sword pierced Taesan. Your second attack nullification has been activated. Floria has activated designated mark acceleration. Ultimately, Taesan permitted a hit. Floria, who had retreated, bared his teeth. You are indeed strong, but strength alone isn't the answer in a fight. Floria knew Taesan's abilities. Taesan didn't know Floria's. That difference was significant. Against a deep adventurer with unique abilities, it was impossible for Taesan to respond perfectly to him. But that was all. Taesan stomped forward. Floria gritted his teeth and responded, "Ka ka ka Kang." Floria barely managed to block the swinging sword. He was slower than Taesan. Considering the overwhelming stat difference, this was only natural, yet Floria wasn't easily overpowered. Floria has activated designated mark acceleration. Floria's body moved to the edge of the room. Taesan kicked off the ground to follow, soaring through the air, and Floria appeared directly below him. Your third attack nullification has been activated. Floria quickly widened the distance. Good, he had exhausted all of Taesan's attack nullifications. Taesan didn't fully understand his own strength. He could win. At that moment, Floria felt a surge of confidence. I think I understand. Taesan hadn't mindlessly used up his 3 attack nullifications. He had been analyzing Floria's skill, designated mark acceleration. It's not teleportation. There was no cooldown on his movements. The cost didn't seem significant either. Even limited blink magic had a cooldown of 10 minutes, indicating that spatial movement was exceedingly difficult. It didn't seem likely that it could be used so freely. Moreover, Floria only moved along the ground. Taesan could tell by how Floria had intentionally appeared beneath him, even though Taesan was in midair. As he continued to fend off Floria's attacks, Taesan observed closely. You have activated focus detection. You have activated reconnaissance. The power of detection spread out. Through it, Taesan realized there was something inscribed on the labyrinth's floor, marking for position. Movement was possible only to designated locations. Taesan gathered his dark energy. You have activated Dicarabia's twisted flora. Kugugugung, roots pierced through the space, appearing and restricting the area Floria could move to. Floria's face hardened. Taesan closed in on him in an instant. Kang. Floria was unable to escape this time with designated mark acceleration. As expected, he moved to designated marks. It wasn't spatial movement, but a form of physical movement so fast it only looked like teleportation. Therefore, as long as the space was blocked, restrictions could be placed on him. Ka Kang, Floria was quickly pushed back. Taesan was also predicting the strategy of the guides, to stall for time and exhaust Taesan's resources. Thus, Taesan aimed to quickly analyze his opponent's hand and counter it, ensuring victory with minimal expenditure. Taesan had countless cards at his disposal. No matter what his opponents used, he had a card to counter it. There was no problem. Taesan infused power into his sword and Floria was flung far away. Chapter 357, 76th Floor, Guides of Sin, Part 2, Floria did not retreat. Even knowing he had no chance of winning, he kept moving, searching for an opening to secure victory. But of course the impossible remained impossible. Boom! Gah! Floria was smashed into the ground, his entire body covered in wounds. As he writhed in pain, Taesan brought his sword down upon him. Gritting his teeth, Floria activated a skill. Floria has activated designated mark acceleration. You have activated restricted blink. This is getting tedious. As Floria accelerated, Taesan teleported above him. He had already figured out the locations and situations where Floria would move. Floria tried to raise his sword too late and Taesan's sword pierced through his chest. Crunch, I didn't expect this ending. You have defeated Floria. Your level has increased. Your level has increased. By the terms of the Demon God's contract, level up recovery is restricted. Floria had been defeated, however it wasn't easy. Taesan had tried to block Floria's movement with Dicarabia's twisted flora. And Floria used every piece of equipment he had to break through it. As a result, Taesan had to continuously activate Dicarabia's twisted flora. While he hadn't lost much health, nearly half of his mana was depleted. Boom! As Floria fell, a surge of force followed, as if determined not to give him any chance to recover. Taesan raised his sword. System start, you have activated Force Duel. For the next 12 seconds, only Gloria can damage you. Your Force Duel proficiency has increased by 1%. System end, the attacks targeting Taesan vanished. Warrior of the Great Saint, Gloria was the next target. Taesan charged at the golden-haired woman clad in golden armor, her expression stealing as she raised her sword. Light heed me, Gloria has activated Saint's Blessing. Gloria has activated Chosen One. Gloria has activated Holy Avatar. Light enveloped her. Taesan recognized it as divine power. Gloria, wielding her sword and shield, confronted Taesan's attack. Clang, the impact struck Taesan. She withstood it, Taesan grimaced. His stats now surpassed 20,000, far above even Li Tion's. In terms of strength, Gloria shouldn't have been able to hold her ground, yet she was holding her own against Taesan. Clad in divine light, she swung her sword fiercely. Slash. Gloria has activated Divine Sword's Retribution. The air tore as swords of light rained down indiscriminately. Despite Taesan's attempt to evade, Gloria's onslaught triggered his attack nullification skill. I am a warrior of the divine. Creatures crawling on the earth cannot reach me. Gloria charged at Taesan with a cry full of faith. Although Helia had instructed her to buy time, she had no intention of following that advice. Taesan had expended considerable energy fighting Floria. She believed she could win if she poured everything she had into it. Taesan analyzed as he blocked Gloria's attack. It wasn't her pure strength. High divine power was enhancing her strength and speed. In that case, how could he counter the divinity of another? Taesan had experienced this in the spirit world. Sheeing, a radiant light burst from Taesan. It was similar to the golden light surrounding Gloria but denser and more potent. Gloria, who had been charging fiercely, hesitated. Divine power emanated from Taesan. Why? Before she could finish her question, Taesan's divinity overwhelmed her. Crash, the golden light surrounding her shattered like glass. Divine protection vanished. How? She looked at Taesan in shock. The entire room was enveloped in Taesan's divine power. It seems it works after all. Taesan murmured as he deduced that divine power could be countered with divine power, and the divinity Gloria wore wasn't her own. It was given to her by another. In contrast, Taesan's power was his own divine energy. The quality difference allowed him to break through Gloria's divine barrier. Taesan leaped forward. Gloria, panicking, raised her shield. Boom. Unable to withstand the impact, Gloria slid back. What followed was an overwhelming battle. Without the divine power that had been her greatest strength, Gloria had no means to resist. What? The other guides watching this let out a groan. Breaking Gloria's divinity? How is that possible? Gloria's strength wasn't all that extraordinary. Her speed was average, and the skills she had gained while traversing the labyrinth weren't particularly special. But her faith was unmatched. She believed that no one could match her devotion to the divine, and indeed, none among the devout could rival her divine power. When she clad herself in divinity, even the other guides couldn't easily break through. She was an impenetrable wall, a fortress unlike shaman's walls, but now that barrier was shattered by Taesan's divinity. It doesn't matter, it's natural that he's stronger than us. Helia spoke coldly, though a smirk tugged at his lips. With this battle, he's used his divine power. With that level of divine power, Taesan wouldn't be able to use it again. In the end, we will win. As the battle dragged on, Taesan would continue to deplete his strength one by one. In the end, he'd be left fighting with all his cards expended. Grr. Even with precautions against absolute judgment, Gloria continued to recover and endure. But that was all. Crunch. Taesan's sword shattered her armor. She coughed up blood as she fell. "O divine, answer, your level has increased." In this battle, he had used divine power. Now he could no longer use boundary line or boundary repel. His damage potential was considerably drained, having used the blade of resolve and copy to finish her in a single blow. There was no time to rest. His next opponent was Cliff, the ruler of the dark abyss. Cliff wielded a bottomless darkness. Boom, endless deep dark shadows emerged. Taesan summoned his magic. "You have activated Frozen World." It was a frozen world stacked with layered magic. The power it held was undoubtedly at the edge of mortality. However, as soon as it touched the beastly darkness, it was swallowed up and vanished. Magic and dark magic alike are certainly divine powers, but they are wielded by mortals. "They cannot touch me." Cliff, clad entirely in black, spoke as he gathered more strength. Darkness blanketed the world. Everything was dyed and devoured. This time, Taesan activated dark magic, but it too was swallowed as it approached Cliff. As he withstood the assault through attack nullification, Taesan thought, neither magic nor dark magic is effective. It was a power entirely separate from his own. The force Cliff wielded devoured all of Taesan's power. After exhausting all three attack nullifications, Taesan realized it. The power Cliff wielded was the power of destruction. It was a force similar to that of a demon lord, consuming and annihilating everything, bestowed upon one tasked with the mission of destroying the world. That was why neither magic nor dark magic worked against it. Taesan didn't know how an adventurer in the labyrinth had such power, but he had a counter. If his opponent wielded the power of destruction, he could use his own. "You have activated the Spark of Calamity." A fiery wolf emerged, possessing the power to burn the world. Cliff sneered, "The trivial power of a mortal cannot reach me." Taesan was indeed strong. The process of defeating Floria and Gloria had been remarkable. But, in the end, it was still the power of a mortal, impressive but nothing more. On the other hand, his power was destruction itself, unreachable by mortal hands. If he still had his divine power, he might have been a threat. Divine power was the strength of the gods. It could certainly contend with his destructive power. But Taesan had already used his divine power in his battle with Gloria. He had exhausted all his cards to block Cliff's strength. Confident, Cliff unleashed his darkness. The ferocious flames clashed with Cliff's darkness. "What?" Cliff's expression hardened. Taesan gathered his power once more. "You have activated the Call of Destruction." The demon lord's power, which had annihilated the spirit world, manifested. Cliff's darkness was trampled and vanished in an instant. Frantically, Cliff gathered more strength. "Don't be ridiculous." He was the sole survivor of a world devoured by endless darkness. After wandering through a destroyed world, he absorbed the remnants of the destruction that had swallowed the world. Thus he possessed the power of destruction itself. To defeat him, one had to either endure until he exhausted his power or target his mind. The high energy cost meant he couldn't sustain prolonged battles, which was his weakness. But now Taesan was pushing back Cliff's power with his own. How can a mere mortal wield the power of destruction? Boom, power erupted, tearing open the space. You have activated acceleration. You have activated skill acceleration. Taesan dashed towards Cliff. Cliff quickly gathered his strength, but Taesan used restricted blink to appear behind him. Move, power surged toward Taesan. Taesan planted his feet firmly and swung his sword. The blade pierced through the darkness, striking Cliff's neck. Gah, the approach was successful. Cliff's movements were unremarkable, likely because he had descended into the labyrinth relying solely on the power of destruction. The moment Taesan closed in, Cliff's chance of victory vanished, and he began to be pushed back rapidly. You had the power of destruction too, no matter, you've also expended that in this battle. Helia barely managed to suppress his shock. Divine power and the power of destruction. Unexpected, but it changed nothing. Taesan had once again drained his strength. If he continued to deplete his power, they could win. That belief hadn't faded. Next was Esteban, the master of the echoing valley. He moved his hand, his expression grim. The space opened and countless beasts emerged. Esteban has summoned a biting wolf. Esteban has summoned a dreadful beast. Esteban has summoned a rat hidden in shadows. A host of twisted beasts charged at Taesan. While Taesan fought with the other guides, Esteban seemed to have finished all his preparations. The summons were endless and each beast was incredibly powerful, not ones Taesan could easily defeat. You're personally moving to fight. Isn't that quite a primitive approach? Is that so? Then Taesan responded in kind with his own summons. You have summoned Minerva, the spirit king of wind. You have summoned Barkaza, the shield of many colors. A blast of wind sent the charging beasts flying. Minerva grinned. Straightforward enough. Boom, the wind whipped around violently and Esteban's expression hardened. This is beyond expectations. Minerva, now significantly stronger after absorbing the power of the fire spirit king, was much more formidable than during the battle with Cheyenne. Wind and beasts collided with explosive force. Esteban gritted his teeth and reached into the air. Esteban has summoned the master of the valley. A colossal serpent appeared beyond the space. Its power was on the edge of mortality. Esteban's lifelong companion, undefeated and unwavering, it was the very symbol of Esteban himself. Ho! Minerva's eyes blazed with the thrill of the challenge as she gathered more strength. They clashed. The body of wind and the serpent collided, sending out immense waves of power. Minerva was undeniably strong, but the master of the valley was Esteban's trump card, reserved for deep-level adventurers. It wasn't easily overpowered. Boom. Power clashed. Minerva and the valley's master gave it their all, while Taesan also didn't stand idle. Taesan charged toward Esteban. Esteban opened the space. Countless beasts poured out in succession. A giant gorilla struck with its fist, and a wolf-like beast aimed for his throat. There were far too many to take down one by one. You have activated magic overlay. The stacked frozen world surged forward. Taesan gathered his power once again. You have activated forced amplification. Crack, crack, the entire space was engulfed in frost. The beasts screamed and resisted furiously, but the frost froze their every attempt. In an instant, a frozen space was formed. You have activated starlight arrows. Arrows shot toward Esteban. Startled, he opened the space again, calling forth more beasts. He incinerated all the endlessly emerging beasts with his magic. Esteban's trump card, the master of the valley, was locked in combat with Minerva. The remaining beasts were strong, but they couldn't match Taesan. Shriek. Not a chance. The master of the valley tried to move in Esteban's defense, but Minerva unleashed a blast of wind, pinning it down. The battle continued. Helia could no longer claim that Taesan was depleting his strength and that they could win. He simply watched the fight, his expression hardened and silent. Taesan trampled over the beasts and pierced Esteban's chest. Esteban spat blood and shouted, "It's your victory, but I won't go down quietly." You monster! Esteban has activated forced recall of all summoned beasts. Boom. In an instant, Minerva and Barkaza's forms distorted. All summoned beasts within the designated space began to be forcibly unsummoned. Minerva spread her power to resist, but Esteban's final energy, which enveloped the space, relentlessly pressured her. I can't fight any longer. I must return. Be sure to win, master. I understand. Minerva and Barkaza vanished. Taesan raised his sword. Next, Chapter 358 76 Floor Guides of Sin, Part 3, 4 remained, Fist Saint Altair, the twins of Black and White, and the Noble One Helia. Haha, Fist Saint Altair, a muscular man, let out a hollow laugh. You possess a wide array of powers. Taesan wielded divine power, black magic, the power of the Spirit King, and the strength of destruction, using powers of all kinds. and not a single one of these powers was inferior to their own. How is this even possible? Altair couldn't accept it. He had spent his entire life with his fists. Since birth, he had wielded his fists and had not rested a single day. He trained and trained, focusing on nothing else. Eventually, he became the fist saint. The other guides here were not much different from him. Only those with exceptional talent, who obsessively focused on their own strengths, could barely reach this depth. That was the nature of the abyss. No matter how talented, one could not reach this place if they neglected their own gifts or looked elsewhere. But now Taesan possessed multiple powers. Ordinarily, compared to those who focused on one path, each of Taesan's powers should be weaker, but he was different. Each of his powers was either on par with or superior to the powers held by the guides. He was quite simply on another level. Altair realized that such a being was truly worthy of conquering the labyrinth, but even so, I can't give up. Altair clenched his fist. Taesan watched him as he took a combat stance. When Taesan did not initiate a forced duel, Altair frowned. What are you trying to do? It's getting tiresome. Taesan swung his sword. Come at me, all of you. No matter how strong you are, that's too arrogant. Altair's expression hardened. The aura from the black and white twins intensified and Helia's face twisted. You may be strong, but you're not at a level to defeat all four of us. Taesan had only been victorious so far by forcing one-on-one duels. If even one more opponent joined the fray, victory was not assured. Moreover, Taesan had already expended significant energy, while all four opponents remained in top condition. Yet Taesan did not initiate another forced duel. Altair shook his head. If that's what you want, I doubt you're lying. I told you, all of you come at me. In that case, the Fist Saint clenched his fist and shouted loudly. I am the Fist Saint, abandoned with nothing, yet I conquered the world with my fists alone. Altair has activated his first declaration. The black and white twins raised their hands. The ladies walk by the hidden lakeside. It was an incantation, a preparatory process to use a special power. The echoing footsteps merge. In the end, the two become one. The black twin activated two as one. The white twin activated two as one. Their bodies began to dissolve. That's quite a skill. It's a special skill only twins can possess. It's been a while since I've seen it. The dissolved bodies merged into one. The left side was black and the right side was white. Their layered voices rang out together. We'll kill you. Helia raised her sword and in a slashing motion cut his own forearm. I'll make you regret your arrogance. Slosh, instead of red, blue blood flowed out. Taesan muttered. You're not human, correct? I am not an ordinary human like you. I am one who inherits the blood of a god. Blue blood began to spread throughout Helia's body. His muscles swelled and his veins bulged. Helia has activated physical burden transfer. Helia has activated mental burden transfer. Helia has activated force divine blood. In the name of the gods, I will kill you. Your target is me, it seems. The demon god desired Taesan's victory. The gods desired their death. Thump, the three guides charged at once. Taesan raised his sword. Kuang power collided with power. The first to rush in was Fist Saint Altair. Sword and fist clashed. A fierce wind grazed past Taesan's head. Living up to the title of Fist Saint, he was an opponent who put everything into his fists. You have activated acceleration. Kagakakak, sword and fist met again. Altair was incredibly fast and strong. He could easily match Taesan's speed. You have activated flow. Altair's fist, which collided with the sword, deflected. It wasn't just once. Every punch he threw twisted off course. Taesan continuously deflected each attack with precise timing. You have activated counter. Taesan's sword moved to pierce Altair's chest, ignoring his attack. Slash, a sharp slash surged forward. Taesan escaped using limited blink. The twins, now one entity, charged forward with sharp claws like a feral cat. Kagakakak, they were fast and powerful. Even though the twins used only their 2-as-1 skill, they matched Taesan's speed. Moreover, their movement was beastly rather than human, making them difficult to counter. With an explosion, Helia's body leapt forward. Taesan blocked her descending sword. Kang, Taesan let out a small groan. While his continuous combat skill allowed for prolonged battles, it didn't mean he was immune to fatigue. Fighting strong opponents still took a heavy toll on his stamina. Having battled four guides, Taesan's movements were somewhat slower compared to his peak condition. However, his base stats were high enough that he wasn't at a disadvantage against the guides of sin. Yet Helia's power was now slightly surpassing his own. The buff is extremely high. With a buff at this level, there was bound to be a time limit. The duration might be very short, but he couldn't be certain he would endure until it wore off. You have activated Magic Overlay. You have activated Frozen World. You have activated Starlight Arrow. You have activated Frozen World. He condensed his mana and detonated it. You have activated Magic Release. You have activated Forced Amplification. The unleashed magic engulfed the space. Light and frost combined, destroying everything. Fist Saint clicked his tongue and retreated, while the twins also swiftly created distance. Yet only Helia did not back down, swinging his sword fiercely. Kagakakak. Amidst the thunderous sounds, the frost infused with light was being consumed. However, he couldn't block them all. The aftereffects washed over Helia. Keying, the blue blood covering Helia's entire body grew even thicker. As light and frost shattered, Helia charged at Taesan once more. You have activated the arrow of the storm of misfortune. The arrow traced a line, piercing through Helia. Helia hurriedly swung his sword downward. Crunch. Grrr, the arrow and Helia's sword clashed in a tense standoff. Taesan's brow furrowed. She blocked it. The arrow of the storm of misfortune was among the highest-tier intermediate black magic Taesan possessed. He had even opened a pathway to use it, making it nearly impossible to block. But Helia was stopping the arrow. The blue blood enveloping her entire body grew even darker. Kang, with a tearing sound, the arrow bounced away. Helia let out a wild laugh. Weak, so weak. His eyes were bloodshot as he charged toward Taesan in a half-mad state. You have activated the shield of the White Rune's guardian. Quoom. The shield clashed with his sword and shattered in a single blow. Ha 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 ha, a burst of laughter escaped him. Taesan blinked away and swung his hand. Numerous spells and black magic manifested. Even with magic overlay, Helia was not brought down. Instead, he charged toward Taesan, piercing through the intermediate spells with his body. The Fist Saint and the twins quickly joined in, pressuring Taesan. Your first attack nullification has been activated. Using attack nullification to create distance, Taesan quickly gathered mana. You have activated precision detection. Keying, the power of detection spread over the guides of sin. But the moment it touched them, it bounced away. It wasn't effective. Helia sneered. Detection can be countered easily if you have prepared measures. It seemed he had prepared a countermeasure for detection by observing Taesan's earlier battles with other guides. It didn't matter much. If detection didn't work, he would confirm it with his body. Kakak, the battle continued. He dodged and blocked, gathering rough information about the guides and identifying their types of powers. Divine blood, the blue blood enveloping Helia didn't just make him stronger, it repelled most of the force exerted on him, giving him resistance. But it seemed to place a heavy burden on him. The thicker the blue blood grew, the more his body reddened and his eyes turned crimson. There were two methods to respond: endure until he self-destructed. Helia's skill gave him power beyond what his body could withstand. His mind and body would inevitably collapse if sustained too long, but the enemy would know this as well. Therefore, he would likely aim to bring down Taesan before he self-destructed, and he had sufficient power to do so. The three guides charged at once. Taesan planted his feet half a meter. Taesan blocked and endured their attacks. He chanted spells to create openings, even attempting counters, but the sheer number advantage was overwhelming. His attack nullification was fully expended. One by one, wounds appeared on Taesan's body and his health waned. You were arrogant, you overestimated yourself and now face death. Such is the limit of a commoner, Helia sneered. He was certain of victory. Even as Taesan was pushed back, he hadn't revealed any other tricks. It meant he had no more aces up his sleeve. Even if he activated Force Duel now, he was at a point where victory was no longer assured. Altair, however, wore an uneasy expression. From his perspective, Taesan was not someone who would make the mistake of overestimating himself. Let's finish this quickly, Altair urged Helia and the black and white twins. Taesan replied instead, shall we? Keying, with a faint voice, his wrist guard activated. A massive wave washed over them. Altair hastily threw a punch to dissipate the wave. Honestly, fighting separately could have been dangerous. So far, Taesan had defeated 4 guides. They had not fallen easily. They exploited every opening in Taesan's defense, buying time. As a result, by the time all 4 were defeated, there was little time left for the Apostle Transformation. Since Apostle Transformation boosted spiritual power, he couldn't guarantee victory once its duration ended. The ring that reset cooldowns had yet to finish its 1-month cooldown and was thus unusable. So, Taesan had made a decision to finish his analysis before Apostle Transformation's duration ended. The wrist guard, which had absorbed materials, groaned as it expanded. The twins, realizing the abnormality too late, lunged forward, clang, but they couldn't reach him. The energy emanating from the wrist guard repelled them. I've analyzed everything. You have activated partial world transformation. Altair's pupils widened. This is the power Taesan had used against the Fire Spirit King, transforming the world itself into his domain. So you could still use it. Until now, Taesan had refrained from activating partial world transformation. Though he was being pushed back, he hadn't used it, leading them to believe it was restricted by a cooldown. It requires quite a bit of preparation. Partial world transformation alters the laws of the world. For maximum effect, one must analyze the opponent's power and rank. In battling the 3 guides, Taesan had analyzed all their powers and recorded them in his wrist guard. That was why he hadn't initiated forced duel. The world transformed. The laws governing the guide's powers weakened, while Taesan's domain solidified. What does that matter? I inherit divine blood. A lowly commoner's domain is no match for me. With a battle cry, Helia charged at Taesan. Taesan flicked his hand. You have activated Starlight Arrow. It was the Starlight Arrow he had repeatedly used. Until now, Helia had blocked every one of them with his sword. Confident it would be no different this time, Helia swung his sword. Clang, gah! With a scream of agony, Helia was sent flying, crashing down. Staggering to his feet, he gasped. How? Cracks appeared in the blue blood covering him. He had been struck with more force than his divine blood could withstand. No other guide of sin had achieved this. Altair and the twins hurriedly moved. The power in their attacks could not be disregarded, even by Taesan. It was their all-out strength. But they couldn't touch him. Taesan swung his sword. Altair's fist split open. He immediately kicked the twins away. Grr, Kaya, it was completely different from before. Taesan was overwhelming them completely. Sorry, but I've recorded too many laws, so I can't hold on for long, so let's wrap this up quickly. You have activated Beyond the Boundary. An otherworldly power enveloped Taesan. You have activated Magic Overlay. The frost layered. The twins shuddered and backed away. Their fingertips trembled in the biting cold. An adventurer who had braved the abyss now shivered in the cold. This wasn't simply due to a drop in temperature. They had to stop him. But how? The twins swiftly lunged at Taesan, thrusting their claws into the frigid barrier. Crunch, but from the tips of their claws, their entire bodies began to freeze. Kaya, the twins screamed and retreated. It was a convergence of frost so intense that even those who touched the threshold of mortality could not approach. The world was literally freezing over. Taesan instinctively realized it. This was a spell created directly by the god of magic, the true power of the frozen world. Try to block this. You have activated magic release. You have activated forced amplification. Taesan flicked his fingertips. The guides of sin gasped and lunged away. The condensed frozen world enveloped everything. Chapter 359, 76th Floor, Guides of Sin, Part 4. The guides resisted the oncoming chill. The black and white twins channeled each other's powers by holding hands. The black twin activated an unchanging bond. The white twin activated an unchanging bond. A powerful wave surged from the black and white twins. It was a force they could wield only together, crushing and trampling everything in its path. Hup! Altia took a stance and threw a punch. Altia activated the primordial fist. Though it was an ordinary punch, it contained a power that no one could underestimate. It embodied all the essence of martial arts Altia had gained before and after becoming a martial sage, condensed into a single fist. Helia hardened the blue blood, encasing his entire body even further. The skills they were activating now were everything they had accumulated in the labyrinth. It was the power that symbolized who they were, crunch, but at the moment of impact with the ice, it shattered to pieces. The severe chill engulfed their emotions. The icy force broke Altia's punch, filled with everything he had, and overwhelmed him. Crack, crack, and the blue blood surrounding Helia's entire body began to break. This can't be, it can't be, he shouted in denial, but the chills swallowed him up without a care. Crack, as the chills surged, silence filled the room. Taesan exhaled. The apostle transformation and partial world alteration ended simultaneously. As the overwhelming power and vigor left his body, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. The freezing air that blanketed the world started to pierce through Taesan's entire body. What a power, the ghost groaned. The domain's energy had been fully invested in the frozen world. A power from beyond the boundaries of mortality had been summoned, further amplified by magical overlays and forced intensification. As a result, the guides of sin engulfed in the frozen world were left on the verge of death. Crack. The ice shattered, revealing the black and white twins. Both collapsed with pale faces, no longer capable of continuing the fight. Ha ha ha, Altia, frozen from the waist down, let out a hollow laugh. He wasn't much different from the black and white twins. Continuing to fight was impossible. He was, in fact, slowly dying. You're a monster, truly a monster. He alone had defeated the 8 guides of sin. Even though the forced duel created a one-on-one scenario, it was thanks to Taesan's strength that he managed it. With such a complete defeat, there's nothing more to say. The victory is yours, adventurer. Altia accepted it calmly and closed his eyes. Taesan pierced his chest. You have defeated Altia. The black and white twins also did not resist. They acknowledged their defeat and quietly met their end at Taesan's hand. Only one remains, the noblest one, Helia. His condition was even more pitiful than Altia's or the black and white twins. The blue blood covering his entire body had gone berserk, leaving his limbs broken. I cannot accept this, he spoke, staring blankly into the void. I cannot accept this, he cried out in denial. I have received the blood of the gods. He was fundamentally different from mere mortals. He poured out the pride he held deep within his heart. Someone like you, someone of your kind could never defeat me. Taesan raised his sword. You've lost, just die quietly. No, I haven't lost, Even as he was dying, Helia continued to deny it to the end. Taesan's sword pierced his chest. I haven't lost, and he died. A case of total denial to the very end. He was arrogant more so than any other guide, even more than me. The last of the guides had fallen, Taesan had won. It felt as though a satisfied chuckle was echoing from beyond the space. You have reached the optimal state. The restrictions on recovery were lifted. The exhaustion and fatigue that filled his body vanished in an instant. Taesan leaned against the wall. Leveling up restored both physical and mental fatigue. Yet somehow he still felt tired. Taesan closed his eyes, trying to take a brief rest. Are you settled? More or less. Taesan opened his eyes. The ghost chuckled softly. As I remember, there were about 20 leaders of the guides. You've defeated 11 of them. The majority had met their end at Taesan's hands. In essence, the guides of sin as a group are finished. For an incalculable amount of time, they had held their place in the labyrinth, controlling and managing adventurers who entered. Now they had been obliterated by Taesan's hand. The rest would either flee from fighting Taesan or find their own way. I hope she neither runs nor gives up. The ghost murmured. Taesan had defeated the guides, not just 1 but 8. The reward for that was considerable. Level 155. Shield 15,800/15,800. Health 173,277/173,277. Mana 18,641/18,641. Magic energy 1528/1528. Strength 33,245. Agility 34,685. Intelligence 30,141, attack power plus 8695, defense plus 6052. The subject is in an optimal state. Taesan couldn't hold back a laugh. All his stats had surpassed 30,000. He lifted his sword and swung it. The sword, cutting through the air with a sharp whoosh, was clearly much faster than before. It would now be difficult to find an opponent superior to him in terms of speed and strength. With stats like these, there was practically no situation where he'd be outclassed physically. Of course, this didn't mean he was the strongest. Pure stats alone could be overturned by various factors in battle. If there was a significant difference in rank, high stats would mean little. The gap in rank would play an even more crucial role, so it was hard to say he had become purely stronger simply due to increased stats. Still, stats were undeniably an important metric. Since they represented his base physical abilities, the higher they were, the easier it was to gain an advantage in combat. However, the most crucial aspect wasn't the stats, it was the skills he'd obtained through Soul Ascension. The opponents he had defeated numbered 8. Soul Ascension had granted him 8 skills in total. Special Activation Skill. Designate Mark, Proficiency 1%, Mana Cost 500, designates a mark at a specific location. Currently up to 3 marks can be designated. Once set, a mark cannot be reset until a day has passed, and there are limitations on travel distance. As a standalone skill, it was useless. However, when combined with other skills, its value increased exponentially. Special Activation Skill, Designated Mark Acceleration. Proficiency 1%, Mana Cost 5. Uses the Designate Mark skill to accelerate movement to a designated mark. You can choose which mark to move to. Has a cooldown of 1 minute after activation. He had acquired Designated Mark Acceleration, a skill used by Floria. Taesan tried it out himself. He designated 3 marks and activated the skill. You have activated Designated Mark Acceleration. His body accelerated. In an instant, Taesan moved to the designated mark. It's pretty fast. Even with a proficiency of just 1%, he moved at a speed that his usual self couldn't catch up with. To a low-level opponent, it might even appear as though he had teleported. Additionally, the cooldown was only a minute, making it highly useful in multiple ways. Of course, there were limitations. Unlike a random, restricted blink, this was merely a movement skill, so if a space was blocked, movement was restricted. Nevertheless, it was still a decent skill. Special Passive Skill, Faith Deeper Than Anyone's. Proficiency. 1%, an intense collection of near-madness-like faith, continuously restores one's divine power. The skill of the Great Saint's Warrior was obtained by defeating Gloria. Its effect was the recovery of divine power. What Taesan possessed was technically his own divine power, so it was ambiguous to call it divine. Initially, he wasn't sure if the skill would activate, but upon testing, it was recovering correctly. It's quite fast. Even though the amount of divine power Taesan had wasn't insignificant, it was recovering at a very rapid pace. With this, he could use divine powers more frequently, even without direct faith. Divine power was a crucial force for future battles. Once expended, it took a long time to recover. This skill, which helped in that regard, was highly valuable to the current Taesan. Special Passive Skill. Child of Destruction. Proficiency 1%, a fragment of destruction obtained by absorbing remnants of destruction, allows for freer control over the power of destruction. Taesan had two skills related to destruction: Embers of Calamity and Call of Destruction. Both were powerful, but because Taesan hadn't mastered them, he hadn't been able to utilize their full potential. This skill allowed him to wield those powers more freely and strongly. That's how he interpreted it. The next skill was acquired after defeating Esteban. Special Activation Skill Forced Recall of All Summons. Mana cost 1000, Proficiency 1%, forces all summons within a certain range to return, doesn't differentiate between friend or foe, and summons strong enough can resist. It was the skill Esteban had used to reverse summon Minerva in the end. For now, with a proficiency of 1%, the effect might be limited, but considering it even reverse summoned a Spirit King, it seemed worth investing in. Special Activation Skill Mental Burden Transfer. Mana cost 300, Proficiency 1%, for 30 minutes partially transfers mental burden to the body. It was easy to understand. While his powers related to darkness and divinity placed stress on the body, the mental burden was even greater. This skill seemed useful for critical moments. The skills used by the core of the guides would be significant in both quantity and quality. As expected, each skill of the Deep Adventurers was immensely valuable. Taesan checked the remaining skills with satisfaction. Special Activation Skill 2 as 1. Mana cost 1000, Proficiency 1%, fuses two equal entities into one. A brief description. That alone was enough for Taesan to realize it was a skill he couldn't use. The twins had used this skill to fuse and become one. As a result, without needing to use other skills, their strength and speed increased enough to match Taesan. There was no cooldown, risk, or even duration. As pure reinforcement, it was an almost perfect skill. It was undoubtedly an excellent skill, but the conditions were far too demanding. Creating two equal entities was close to impossible unless, like the twins, they were born that way. But Taesan quietly analyzed the skill. Two equal entities, that was the one condition. Therefore, it wasn't entirely impossible. Chapter 360-76 Floor Guides of Sin, Part 5. Taesan stared at the ring, a ring of black and white. The rings were born as twins from the very beginning, like black and white twins. If so, could this pair of rings be used by two people as one? Taesan could tell it was possible, but not at the moment. Although the rings were twins, their power wasn't equal. The black ring contained offensive power, while the white ring was imbued with divinity and grace. It was uncertain if the skill conditions were perfectly met. Moreover, Taesan had not yet fully mastered the rings. So first he decided to clearly understand the skill conditions. Then he planned to find Hafren, who created the pair of rings, to seek assistance. There's much to do. It seemed that a lot of preparation was needed. The next acquisition was the special continuous action skill of the Fist Saint, Fist Saint's martial arts. However, as Taesan was an adventurer wielding a sword rather than his fists, the skill merged into Arak weapon technique and ability sword. The proficiency of Arak weapon technique increased by 5%, finally reaching 54%. It was a skill that was difficult to progress. Despite activating in almost every battle due to its nature, it hadn't even reached 60%. Thinking about it now, it's quite stubborn. He was now on the 76th floor, and Anjar's destination was the 78th floor, the library of all things. Only 2 floors remained. Would he achieve his goal, or would he still wander aimlessly? It wouldn't be long before he found out. After defeating the guides, he finished reviewing the rewards he obtained. Overall, they enhanced and supported his existing powers rather than granting entirely new ones. It might seem like a minor gain, but it wasn't bad. Especially since Taesan already possessed an overwhelming variety of powers. Instead of acquiring powers he couldn't fully utilize, strengthening his existing abilities was far more beneficial. And that wasn't all. Upon entering the deeper levels, Taesan acquired a title that boosted his skill proficiency growth. While fighting the 8 guides, he used numerous skills. As a result, many stagnant skills underwent changes. The first to change was Ability Sword. Advanced Swordsmanship Ability Sword, Proficiency 62%, a unique swordsmanship created by a labyrinth adventurer based on the labyrinth system. It is built upon the swordsmanship used by the Prince of the Destroyed World. It allows perfect integration of various skills with swordsmanship. The proficiency of Ability Sword reached 60%. Although the skill's description didn't change significantly, many related skills were affected. Special Activation Skill Reconnaissance, Proficiency 82%, an evolved form of insight, provides extensive information about the target. Condition. Advanced Swordsmanship Ability Sword. If the target uses a sword, their swordsmanship's traits, weaknesses, and principles can be analyzed in detail. When Reconnaissance reached 80% proficiency, the effects of Ability Sword were added. Reconnaissance provided general information but couldn't delve into finer details. Now, against sword-wielding opponents, it could offer even deeper insights. Skills like acceleration, strong blow, and flow skill, which could continuously activate with proper timing, also evolved. An additional effect was added. The more successful activations, the stronger the effect. Skills already difficult to counter became even harder to deal with. Special activation skill conversion, mana consumption. 1000 allows adjustment of offensive and defensive stats. The maximum adjustment value equals the sum of offense and defense stats. This skill can only be used once a week and stats revert to normal immediately after the attack. Condition. Advanced Swordsmanship Ability Sword. When attacking with a sword after adjusting offensive stats through conversion, an additional 20% boost is applied. Oh, a skill that enabled a single all-out attack conversion. The additional effect from Ability Sword was simple yet powerful, increasing adjustable stats by 20%. This meant that converting 5,000 defense into offense would yield an attack power of 6,000. It was straightforward yet immensely impactful. Taesan was satisfied. Special activation skill Forced Descent, mana consumption 20, proficiency 7%, temporarily reduces the opponent's stats by a certain percentage. Condition. Advanced Swordsmanship Ability Sword. When clashing swords with an opponent increases the weight of their weapon, this effect can stack. Weapon's weight, the effect didn't seem particularly compelling. Against beings with monstrous stats, increasing weapon weight felt insignificant. He couldn't imagine how it might be advantageous. Still, since it was an effect unlocked at 60% proficiency, it was bound to be useful in some way. That concluded the changes brought by Ability Sword. The focus then shifted to regular skills. The proficiency of Frozen World reached 40%. Intermediate Magic Frozen World. Mana consumption 30, proficiency. 40% summons frost that freezes everything, brings forth a fragment of the power to freeze the entire world. The Frozen World skill had already reached 40% proficiency. Repeated use of magic overlays seemed to have significantly contributed to its progression. You activated Frozen World. Frost enveloped the world. The power of Frozen World manifested through the conduit of mana. It had certainly grown stronger. Even without using magic overlays, defending against it would be challenging. But, though it was a potent power, Taesan felt it lacked something. The partial world-shifting effect, utilizing boundaries beyond, was included when he activated Frozen World in the fight earlier. Its contained strength was a force surpassing mortality itself, created directly by the god of magic. Compared to that, it felt far too inferior. Someday, without relying on external assistance, he would fully wield that power. Taesan calmed his emotions and examined other skills. Numerous skills had changed. Vital Point Designation, Synced Eye, Essence Analysis, Counter, Forced Duel, and Acceleration. Additionally, various continuous action skills proficiencies had increased. After checking them one by one, Taesan was satisfied. But it wasn't over yet. The space split apart. Dark, thick yet familiar shadows flowed out and the figure of a girl appeared. With the sound of applause, the demon god appeared. Well done, Taesan. Were you watching? Of course. With a feast before me, why would I look away? The demon god smiled mischievously. You accomplished it more easily than expected, which is a bit disappointing, but it's all thanks to the strength you've built up. I'm satisfied. The demon god's rewards were granted. Darkness engulfed Taesan. You acquired intermediate black magic Zephar's Black Storm. You acquired intermediate black magic Asmodeus's Chains of Decay. You acquired the special continuous action skill Return as Darkness. The special activation skill Apostle Transformation Darkness and Chaos. Evolved into Apostle Transformation Pitch Black Chaos. 2 intermediate black magic spells. Additionally, a continuous action skill and an evolution of Apostle Transformation. The exact effects remain to be seen, but this alone justified the effort of fighting while limiting his recovery. Thank you. You fulfilled my request. As a god, it's only natural to reward you. The demon god spoke cheerfully. Instead of leaving immediately, she gazed at Taesan. You know where you are now, don't you? Yes, Taesan stood on the boundary between mortality and what lay beyond. Until now, I thought you weren't ready, so I left you alone, but now they may start approaching you in earnest. Taesan realized what the demon god was implying, the masters of black magic, the demons. They intended to approach Taesan. I have no intention of interfering, everything is your choice. Understood, Taesan nodded. The demon god laughed pleasantly and vanished into the darkness. Special continuous action skill. Return as Darkness. Proficiency 1%, restores a portion of the magical energy Magi consumed while using black magic. This skill returns some of the magic energy consumed when using black magic. Magic energy was more taxing to use than mana and harder to replenish. Though minor, this skill was helpful in reducing its consumption. Apostle transformation also underwent significant changes. Its duration increased from 2 hours to 3, and Magi consumption during activation was halved. After reading the descriptions of the 2 intermediate black magic spells, they seemed quite useful. He planned to test their actual effectiveness in battle. Phew! Finally, everything was organized. It felt like the longest time he had spent reviewing skills since entering the labyrinth. What Taesan had accomplished was significant. Instead of standing up, Taesan spoke. "Come out. You noticed." A frivolous red-haired man appeared from thin air, smiling awkwardly. "I tried my best to hide. I knew from the moment you snuck in." While Taesan had been reviewing his skills, Ambracia had hidden himself and entered the room. Taesan had considered attacking but decided against it since there was no hostility. "Is that so?" Ambracia scratched his head. Despite putting all his effort into hiding, Taesan had known from the beginning. This signified the gap between them. "Wow, so much has changed." Ambracia was the first to meet Taesan. Back then, Ambracia had casually blocked his attacks and thrown him aside without much effort. It wasn't long ago, yet now their positions had reversed so quickly. Ambracia chuckled bitterly. "I've never felt this way before, but you feel like a wall." "What do you want?" Taesan gripped his sword. Ambracia stepped back. "I don't intend to fight you. Unlike those who died at your hands, I don't have a death wish." Some had outright refused to engage in combat with Taesan and chose to hide. Ambracia was one of them. "Then why are you here?" "I was curious about the outcome of the battles." "Boredom and curiosity, I suppose." "Well, you were always the most curious of the guides. You were also the most adventurous among them." The ghost spoke. Ambracia looked at the ghost with a conflicted expression. "Ghost, well, I don't know what to say. I hold no grudges against you, so let's leave it at that." The ghost spoke calmly. Ambracia scratched his cheek. "Anyway, I don't intend to fight you, but if you try to kill me, I will resist." Ambracia raised his hand, and it was a small key. Taesan stared at him expressionlessly. Ambracia swallowed quietly. "Fine." Taesan lowered his sword. "I don't plan to waste my time." Taesan remembered how Ambracia had used a similar key to transport him from the lower floors to the 70th floor. It meant the reverse was also possible. If Ambracia had multiple similar items, defeating him could take an exceedingly long time. While Taesan was strong, he wasn't yet at the level to swiftly subdue someone of Ambracia's caliber who was determined to flee. Starting a chase would likely consume too much time. Ambracia exhaled in relief. "Thanks, really." Ambracia had confidence in his ability to escape, but if Taesan truly pursued him to the end, he wouldn't survive. The fact that Taesan was letting him go was something to be profoundly grateful for. "It's a stretch to call it a repayment, but I'll give you some information." Ambracia increased the distance between them as he spoke. "Most of the guides have made the same choice as me. Those who decided to fight you are already dead. However, there are 2 guides who have chosen a different path." "Who are they?" the ghost asked. Ambracia answered. "The Lion King and the Ashen Lady Society. Both are waiting for you deeper in the labyrinth." "Just 2, huh?" Their numbers had significantly dwindled. Taesan felt a bit bored, but the ghost clearly did not. "They haven't fled Society. It didn't seem like they ever planned to," Ambracia muttered. The ghost chuckled softly. "Good, very good. Well then, goodbye." Ambracia raised the key. "Let's hope we never meet again." With those words, his body disappeared. He had used the key to move to another floor. With just 2 more to defeat, no more guides of sin would block Taesan's path. This also meant the day the ghost's wish would be fulfilled was approaching. Taesan stepped forward. A previously ignored altar came into view, one he had overlooked while battling the guides, clearing Maria's trial. That was the quest for the 76th floor. "You have discovered Maria's altar." The goddess of choice, Maria. It wasn't their first meeting. As Taesan placed his hand on Maria's altar, a powerful presence began to descend upon the labyrinth. "It's good to see you, child." Maria's presence filled the labyrinth. Facing the voice filled with a hint of laughter, Taesan replied, "It's been a while." "A while, you say? Not enough time has passed to justify those words." "But it was a fruitful time nonetheless." Maria laughed. "Watching your choices was delightful. You brought life to dull moments." "Do I need to pass Lady Maria's trial?" "Yes. For someone like you, I shall grant a trial." Maria's power enveloped Taesan. "Subquest initiated. Maria wishes to test you as you stand before her altar. If you accept, the trial will come to you. Overcome it and you shall be rewarded." Maria's area of influence has diminished. "Maria offers you an enhanced trial." Taesan nodded. "Subquest initiated. A being of divine blood wishes to become an offering for the Emperor amidst despair. Assist his journey and allow him to choose for himself. However, physical interference with the being of divine blood is forbidden. Reward: Maria will determine your reward based on your performance." Chapter 361, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood. Part 1. Maria spoke. "Your destination is the god of order, Hore. He is in a world ruled by his apostle called Arbosia. Stay by the side of the one who bears divine blood and make your choice there. That is your task. Can transcendence intervene?" a world with the apostle of the god of order. It was possible that a transcendent might directly intervene. Maria shook her head. They will not. Horai's order binds even himself. That's why he hasn't entered the labyrinth. Maria's voice carried a hint of mockery. I respect the choices of all beings, even if it leads them to death. As long as it's their own will, that's enough. But sometimes there aren't even choices to be made. That is something I cannot tolerate. Maria smiled and waved her hand. Taesan's body began to move against his will. Taesan closed his eyes and prepared for the transition. The sensation of the world turning upside down engulfed him. When it settled, Taesan opened his eyes. A vast forest stretched before him. The rustling grass tickled his ankles and the scent of greenery filled the air. The god of order. The world ruled by Horai's apostle, Arbosia. He was now there. First, reconnaissance. Taesan gathered magic energy and activated Larage's territory detection. Information about his surroundings flooded in. He sensed countless small lives and nature. This isn't a particularly special world. It seemed Arbosia was just an ordinary world found anywhere. The first objective of the quest was to find the one with divine blood. She placed you right next to them. By a tree, a small child was curled up, sleeping. The child looked to be no older than 12, though they seemed exhausted. There were no visible injuries. The child lay without any shelter, sleeping on the forest floor. They occasionally shivered from the cold, likely because their campfire was dying out. Taesan tended to the fire, rekindling its embers. This quest offered little information. The state of the one with divine blood, the nature of the trial, and the identity of the emperor, all these were things Taesan had to uncover himself. Instead of waking the child, Taesan asked the ghost, "What exactly is divine blood?" The first thing to understand was what divine blood actually was. The only person Taesan had seen wield divine blood was Helia. He had forcibly activated his divine blood to gain overwhelming speed and strength. It wasn't an ordinary power. The ghost spoke with a vague tone. "I don't know much about divine blood either. Those born with it are so rare and most are persecuted to death." Persecuted? I'll tell you what I know. Rarely, some are born with blue blood instead of red. This is called divine blood, and those born with it are called the bastards of gods. Are they really descendants of gods? Probably not. The ghost wasn't confident. I can't be sure. After all, the bastards of gods cannot pass on their powers. On the contrary, even if their parents are ordinary humans, they might suddenly be born with blue blood. So it's unclear. The only certainty is that there's no consistent rule for the birth of godly bastards. In other words, it couldn't be definitively proven whether they inherited divine blood from gods. Taesan asked the ghost another question. Why are they persecuted? Don't they gain great power from having divine blood? Not necessarily. Divine blood isn't as convenient a power as you might think. The ghost refuted Taesan's assumption. Of course, they're extraordinary. They're born with talents that defy comparison, but that's it. They're no more special than that. They're still fundamentally human. That's why they're often killed as demon spawn or exiled for being cursed. Only a rare few who understand their abilities live revered as noble beings. Helia was one of the latter. Now that he thought about it, his skill also forcibly activated his divine blood. It was a power so difficult to control that even adventurers of the deep levels struggled with it. Taesan looked at the child sleeping fitfully. Then was this child also persecuted? Most likely, it's a sad story. To think that just being born this way would lead them to choose death. The boy seemed to have despaired from suffering inflicted by others and had given up on life. That's how it appeared, but something felt off to Taesan. He couldn't put it into words, but he had a gut feeling that wasn't the case. Taesan stoked the fire. Hours later, the child woke up. The child rubbed their eyes, looking groggy. As they dusted the dirt off themselves, they noticed Taesan sitting by the fire. "Who are you?" Still half asleep, the child asked in a dazed voice. Taesan replied, "An adventurer." "A mercenary?" The child glanced between the fire and Taesan before bowing their head. It was a gesture of respect that had likely been taught to them. "Thank you for tending the fire, but please leave." "Why?" Taesan asked. The child looked downcast as they answered, "I'm a cursed child." And, "Pardon?" The child was startled by Taesan's response as if they hadn't expected such a reaction. "I'm a cursed child." "So?" Taesan looked at the child with a questioning gaze as if to say, "What of it?" The child grew even more flustered. I'm a cursed child, so." "I don't care." Taesan had to stay close to the child anyway. The child's face was filled with confusion. They seemed to want to say something but couldn't find the words. The child began to walk. Their shoes were so worn that they were practically barefoot. Watching them for a moment, Taesan raised his hand. Creak, a tree by the path twisted. The tree began reshaping itself into something smaller. The child's eyes widened in shock as the transformation unfolded. Soon, the tree had turned into a pair of shoes perfectly fitting the child's feet. Taesan handed the shoes to the child, who accepted them in a daze. "Are you a magician?" "I didn't hear you cast a spell." "Something like that." Of course, it wasn't magic. Taesan had completed the spirit god's quest and through a contract with the spirit king could exert a strong influence over nature. If it were an unresisting typhoon, he could quell it with a mere gesture. Carving a tree into shoes was a simple task, but the child couldn't comprehend this. They assumed Taesan was a remarkable magician. Thank you. But even so, you must leave me. I am a cursed child. I told you it doesn't matter, Taesan responded nonchalantly. The child hesitated before putting on the shoes. Walking again, the child seemed noticeably more comfortable. This won't be an easy quest. The god of choice always presented him with trials involving the most challenging situations for him. While Maria favored him, she wasn't the kind to coddle him like the demon god. The condition of the quest was for the one with divine blood to make a choice. What that choice would be, even Taesan didn't know. Moreover, the child showed no visible injuries. They were dirty but physically unscathed. If they had truly been persecuted, as the ghost mentioned, it seemed unlikely. For now, gather information, Taesan followed the child. The child occasionally glanced back at him but continued moving forward. Stop! A group of bandits blocked their path. The bandits grinned as they shouted. This is the territory of the Claydon bandit gang. If you want to pass, pay the toll. The bandits drew their swords. The child cautiously stepped forward. I'm sorry, but I have nothing. May I pass? If you've got nothing, offer up your body. Where do you think? The leader of the bandits, a rough-looking man, shouted angrily. However, a burly, bald man behind him hesitated and whispered. Hey, isn't that kid, you know? What, you know, the cursed child? The bald man whispered something further. The leader, who had been silent, spoke quietly. The cursed child, they look just like the rumors. Damn it, the leader waved his hands in panic. Everyone move aside, let them pass, don't touch them. Yes, sir. The bandits immediately obeyed the order as if they feared being cursed by touching the child. They scrambled out of the way, creating a clear path for the child to walk through. With a bitter but accustomed expression, the child passed them. See, this is why you shouldn't follow me, you'll be cursed. The child spoke softly to Taesan. Taesan didn't follow further. The child seemed relieved and staggered forward again. Once the child disappeared from view, the leader let out a sigh of relief. Phew, that was close. Do you think we'll be cursed just for that? I heard slight contact is fine, but it still feels unsettling. Damn it, should we go to a temple and ask for a blessing? If it's the cursed child, even they might refuse in fear. If we bribe them, they might do something. But the leader hesitantly glanced at Taesan. What about you? Who are you? Taesan didn't answer his question. He simply watched the departing child and muttered to himself. Does divine blood come with traits like that? I don't know either. There's so little information on divine blood. It wouldn't be surprising if it had traits I'm unaware of. I'll have to figure out exactly what it is. You don't think this one's cursed too, right? They said there's only one cursed child, so it's probably just a coincidence we crossed paths. Then this works out. The leader raised his sword again, his greedy eyes scanning Taesan's attire. You look like you've got some money. Pay the toll or I'll take your arm. That's my line. There was no need to use magic. Not even the slightest manifestation of will was required. A minuscule fraction of his power was more than enough. Taesan snapped his fingers. At that moment, a massive pressure crushed the bandits. Gah-erg, they couldn't even scream. They couldn't exhale the breath they had inhaled, and their entire bodies began to tremble. Taesan spoke leisurely. Answer my question and I'll let you live. Chapter 362, 76 Floor, The Child of Divine Blood, Part 2. The bandit struggled to stand somehow. He tried to shake off Taesan and flee, but it was impossible. Forget fleeing, he couldn't even get up. Even breathing properly was difficult. What on earth? The man was horrified. They weren't weak. The fact that they openly demanded tolls in broad daylight meant they had the skills to escape even if someone came to subjugate them. But against Taesan, such strength was meaningless. Don't be too scared. If you answer properly, I'll let you go. Taesan spoke leisurely. To them, that relaxed voice sounded like the voice of death. Taesan began questioning them. They answered his questions with great enthusiasm. As a result, Taesan gained quite a bit of useful information. So they call you the cursed child, a bastard child of divine blood. The child was widely known as a being that was cursed by all things. The reason was simple. Everything around the child would break and deteriorate. If the child stayed in a village, the village would collapse. Buildings would crumble and people would die without a trace. If the child stayed in a forest, the forest would wither. Lakes would dry up and vegetation would shrivel. And through all of this, the cursed child wouldn't sustain a single injury. When everyone was afraid and curious, the emperor himself decreed an oracle. He said that the child, cursed by all things, would destroy the world simply by existing. The emperor, the ruler of the Holy Empire who has governed this world for a long time, he is also an apostle of the God of Order. He is beyond human comprehension. The face of the bandit showed reverence. It wasn't just respect for a ruler, it was akin to worshipping a god. The emperor is the ruler of the world, his words are law. That's why we call the child the cursed one and keep our distance. Hearing the explanation, Taesan thought for a moment, then he asked the bandit again, "This curse, does it take a day to manifest?" "Yes, yes." So far, whenever the cursed child stayed in one place for more than a day, the curse would take effect. What if someone followed the moving child? That, we have no information on. No one would dare to follow the cursed child. The man glanced nervously at Taesan. What he had just said was considered common sense. But Taesan acted as if he was hearing it for the first time. While the man was pondering Taesan's identity, Taesan waved his hand. "That's enough. Now scram, thank you." Not sure if he'd really be spared, the man ran off in a panic. The remaining bandits quickly followed after him. Does the Lord of Divine Blood also possess such traits? I don't know. There's too little information. It doesn't seem impossible, but could the Lord of Divine Blood really remain unscathed? The ghost seemed uncertain. For now, Taesan decided to confirm things firsthand. He stomped his foot. The child hadn't gone far. Taesan caught up in just 2 steps and stood in front of the child. "Huh?" The child's eyes widened as they saw Taesan blocking their path. "Didn't you leave? I heard about you from those guys earlier." "So you didn't know about me?" Finally, the child made a face of understanding. Since Taesan was unaware of the curse, he had stayed nearby. That's what the child concluded. "I cause suffering and death to everything around me just by existing, so please stay away." The child said this and continued walking forward, and Taesan followed. "Where are you headed, Huh?" The child stammered in surprise at Taesan's question. "In the vast forest, I'm going to Lekresin. Then I'll go with you." "Huh?" The child was taken aback. "If you stay near me, you'll be cursed." "Please stay away, I'm strong," Taesan spoke calmly. "At least in this world nothing can curse me." The child didn't seem to believe him, but Taesan was confident. "In combat, maybe it might cause some issues, but curses could be easily shrugged off. So let's go together." The child desperately tried to shake off Taesan. They tried reasoning, hiding, and moving away stealthily, but nothing worked. Taesan didn't listen to the child and found every hiding spot immediately. In the end, the child gave up. "Even if you're cursed, don't blame me." Taesan and the child walked together. The child kept as much distance as possible. The path was wide enough that there were plenty of passers-by. The cursed child. Those who recognized the child backed away in fear. It was the look one would give a monster, not a fellow human. The child accepted those gazes calmly. The child kept walking until night fell. Eventually, they staggered into a forest. The child lay down on a patch of soft grass. As they tried to fall asleep, a loud rumbling sound came from their stomach. Their face turned red with embarrassment. Watching the child, Taesan entered the forest. The child almost called out to Taesan but stopped themselves. If he left, it would be for the best. Convincing themselves of this, they lay back down. But soon Taesan reappeared. The child's eyes widened. In Taesan's hand was a deer. Taesan tossed the deer down and waved his hand. Flames engulfed the deer and the meat began to cook with a sizzle. The child stared blankly at the deer. Their body was weak and slow. They couldn't catch swift wild animals. Most of the time they filled their stomach with grass or fruit. The only meat they had was fish. Now freshly cooked meat was in front of them. As the child stared, Taesan spoke. "Eat, really? I brought it for you. Thank you." The child buried their face in the meat. Startled by the heat, they quickly backed off but didn't give up, blowing on it before taking bites. Taesan waved his hand. A breeze surrounded the meat, cooling it to a more edible temperature. The child devoured the meat hungrily. Finally, full sleep overtook them and they collapsed. The child fell into a deep sleep. Taesan gathered wood and started a fire. A gentle breeze ensured the child could sleep comfortably. Their face became noticeably more peaceful. The next morning, the child woke up and saw Taesan looking perfectly fine. Until now, every place the child stayed for more than a day had been devastated. But even after staying by the child's side for more than a day, Taesan was completely unharmed. "How? I told you I'm strong," Taesan spoke calmly. "Your curse doesn't work on me." The child was flustered. It was the first time they had experienced such a thing, leaving them utterly confused. But life began to return to the child's eyes. As they walked again, the distance between the child and Taesan was noticeably closer than the previous day. The child continuously spoke to Taesan, and Taesan responded appropriately. "So, back then, I was so happy to have caught a squirrel and eaten its meat, but suddenly the baby squirrels appeared. I was so hungry but had no choice but to let it go. Honestly, I still can't really tell which mushrooms are edible or not. It's hard to distinguish. How long do you think it took to build such a big road? A lot of people must have worked really hard, right?" The child's words didn't stop. It was as if they were releasing all the conversations they hadn't been able to have for a long time. They kept talking while walking along the road. They continued on their journey until it was night again. The child kept nodding off, trying hard to stay awake. "If you're sleepy, why don't you sleep?" "No, I can't. I still have so much to talk about." The child desperately tried to stave off sleep. They wanted to share all the things they'd experienced while wandering the world alone, everything surprising and noteworthy. Unlike Anicha, the princess of Vekveta, this child was different. While Anicha was also a child, her education as a princess had made her realistic and composed. But this child was simply a child. That's why they hadn't been able to properly push Taesan away. Once they realized their curse didn't affect Taesan, they quickly opened up to him. Taesan asked, "Why are you risking your life for this?" The child closed their mouth at Taesan's question. "No," the child shook their head. "I am a being that shouldn't exist in this world. Devoting myself to His Majesty the Emperor is the only way I and the world can be saved." Their voice was full of conviction, as if there were no other choice. Taesan spoke again. "Why are you offering yourself to the Emperor? Because only His Majesty can suppress my curse." The child replied bitterly, "I even visited a temple to understand my curse. They said His Majesty prayed directly to the god to figure it out. I was cursed from birth, and I can't even die as I wish." If the child were to die, their curse would scatter across the world and torment all existence. But even while living, the curse devastated everything around them. "Only His Majesty can resolve this. I shouldn't exist." The child clenched their fists, their thin arms trembled. "This journey is for him." The child fell asleep with a sorrowful expression. Taesan poked at the campfire. "Choice, huh? What kind of ending did the god of choices desire?" Taesan gazed at the night sky. A vast expanse filled with countless stars spread above him. While staring blankly, Taesan spoke, "Go away. You have activated the declaration of rejection." Crunch, with the declaration, the space distorted. The force of the gaze directed toward them was crushed and blocked. The suppressed force carried emotions of anger and confusion. No more gazes were felt. Taesan stirred the campfire. "We've arrived." The child murmured while looking at the vast forest. It was a remarkably beautiful forest. With a melancholy face, the child stepped inside. The vast forest, Lekresin. "Do you know what kind of place it is?" "No idea. It's a very beautiful forest. For a long time it's been home to countless plants and animals, and people love it, but I—" The child clenched their fists and walked deeper into the forest. As they ventured into untouched areas, the path became rougher. Eventually, a sharp leaf cut the child's arm. Ouch! Blue blood spurted from the child's arm. With a gloomy expression, the child moved further inward. Taesan picked up the leaf stained with blue blood and stored it. "When I declared that I would offer myself, an oracle descended. To become a sacrifice, I must pass trials. I must clearly realize what kind of being I am and how horribly twisted I've become." Reaching the center of the forest, the child sat down. To stay in Lekresin for a day, that's the first trial. If the child stayed in one place for a day, that place would inevitably be cursed and devastated. The child spoke with a sorrowful face. "Please leave. I don't know why you're unaffected by the curse, but this time it really won't be okay." The child didn't know why Taesan remained unharmed, but this time was different. Every place they had stayed longer than a day had been ruined. There was no reason for this time to be any different. "No," Taesan shook his head. The child, though conflicted, was simultaneously grateful for his decision. "Thank you for staying with me." The child lowered their head quietly. Time passed. The child dozed off intermittently. They nibbled on the meat Taesan brought and silently closed their eyes. And so a day passed. Birds chirped and the sound of flowing water filled the air. The scent of grass wafted strongly and the leaves swayed in the wind. The forest was serene. "Huh," the child's eyes widened. Chapter 363, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood, Part 3. The child was struggling to process it. Looking around repeatedly as if the peaceful surroundings felt strange, the child muttered, "Why is the forest?" Whenever the child stayed in one place for more than a day, a curse would manifest. Springs dried up and the land withered. The only unaffected being was the child. But now, even after a full day had passed, Lekresin showed no changes. Life was thriving and vibrant. See, could it be that Taesan Nim did something? No, Taesan shook his head. He had watched over the child all night, but nothing happened. The child's divine blood didn't run wild, nor did the land collapse. What's going on? The child was visibly flustered. Then what happens to the trial? Well, the trial was just to stay here for a day, so it should be cleared. The child stammered, managing to explain. The child couldn't calm down. However, since the trial was cleared, Taesan began moving with the child again. As they walked, the child kept muttering, Why didn't anything happen? Could it be that your curse is broken?" "That can't be." The child trailed off, denying Taesan's words. Looking at their arm, the cut from a leaf yesterday was scabbing over, not in red but in blue. "I still have blue blood flowing within me." The child's curse wasn't broken. Taesan didn't know either. Despite expanding his senses the previous day to detect changes, nothing happened. "Let's head to the next trial for now." Why yes." The child stammered, nodding. Walking along the path, the child continued muttering, "It's strange. Just days before meeting Mr. Taesan, the curse activated." The child explained that during a long journey, they had fallen asleep for an entire day in a cave due to exhaustion. When they awoke and left the cave, all vegetation around them had withered and died. "So why?" The child looked confused. They continued their journey and night fell. The child leaned against a tree, still muttering. Why didn't the curse activate in Lekresin? Not sure. Taesan handed some rabbit meat to the child. Though puzzled, the child devoured it eagerly. Exhausted, the child soon fell asleep. Taesan watched the sleeping child for a moment before pulling out a leaf from his belongings. The leaf that had cut the child's arm still had traces of blue blood. What exactly was divine blood? He needed to figure that out first. You have activated focus detection. The detection power focused on the blue blood on the leaf. Information began flowing into Taesan. Taesan frowned. The information about divine blood was reaching him, but he couldn't analyze it. It was like a text file scrambled with random characters, making it impossible to interpret. Taesan tried using focused magic and attempted detection again, utilizing reconnaissance and essence identification. But nothing changed. The information remained indecipherable, scrambled as before. Though he hadn't obtained anything, this was in itself a piece of information, a power beyond what Taesan could currently analyze. It implied that it might be a force above his rank. You have summoned the spirit king of wind, Minerva. Gotcha. The wind quietly coalesced, forming the figure of a woman. Landing on the ground, Minerva looked around in surprise. What kind of world is this? Such an intense power dominates this place. She narrowed her eyes and muttered, "It's stronger than me. You can feel it. I am a being of nature. There's no spirit king here. In such a world, my detection range is exceptionally vast." Closing her eyes, Minerva expanded her senses and realized something. Ah, it's a world ruled by the apostle of a transcendent. No wonder the power is monstrous. What level is an apostle? Taesan had encountered apostles a few times. However, most of them weren't in their true forms. The apostle he met on the battlefield of gods was one forcibly endowed with powers, while the forgotten goddesses' apostle had lost their memories. The apostle of Pavsha, Maelstrom, had descended using Taesan's body. The only true apostle he had fought was the apostle of the ancient god in his previous life, but since the ancient god was a distorted existence, it was hard to compare. They vary greatly. Weak ones barely cling to the edge of mortality, while the strongest, known as the Fingers, can surpass most immortals. On average, Minerva looked at Taesan. About your current level, master. That's strong. Apostles are created by gods expending their own power. How could they possibly be weak? Even the leaders of the guides, who were at the brink of mortality, hadn't been able to form contracts as apostles. Though their values and actions didn't align with the gods, it also meant their power wasn't enough. Unless one was completely aligned with the gods, as Taesan did, the standards were exceptionally high. It's rather amazing that you, master, reached this level in such a short time without an apostle's contract. It's unheard of. Looking around, Minerva asked Taesan, "So what's the matter? Doesn't seem like there's a fight." "I have something to ask you." Taesan waved the leaf stained with blue blood. "What do you know about divine blood?" Minerva, as a spirit king, possessed innate knowledge. It was possible she had information about divine blood. "Ah, so that child possesses divine blood. It's my first time seeing it in person." Looking at the child curiously, Minerva spoke. "I don't know much. Even my knowledge about that is vague." Even the Spirit King's knowledge lacked information on divine blood. It manifests very rarely. Possessing divine blood doesn't necessarily mean surpassing human limits. What Minerva knew wasn't much different from what the ghost had explained. Does someone with divine blood ever affect their surroundings, like desolating a place after staying there for more than a day? Taesan explained the curse the child described. Minerva refuted his words. "That's impossible. Divine blood is a power humans can't interfere with. If it's a case of power running wild, the user wouldn't remain unharmed. If it truly rampaged, it wouldn't just devastate a place, it would obliterate an entire country." The curse the child described was impossible with divine blood. Taesan organized the information. "That's enough. Return for now. Got it. Call me again if you need me." Minerva disappeared. The child remained quietly asleep. "Damn it, a creature that should never have been born. You're ruining our world." The people gritted their teeth and quickly fled. Only the child and Taesan remained on the plane. The child sat down on the plane, looking deeply sorrowful. "It's a natural reaction. This place is famous for its beauty. If I settle here, the land itself will wither, so of course they hate me. How many trials are there in total?" "There are 7 in total." The child stared blankly at the plane, as if trying to take in the scenery one last time. Then, as if a thought had suddenly occurred, the child kept glancing at Taesan. "What is it?" "Ah, and no, it's nothing." The child hesitated before cautiously opening their mouth. Can I hold your hand? Do as you like." Taesan extended his hand to the child. The child was momentarily flustered, perhaps not expecting such an easy acceptance. Thank you." The child carefully held Taesan's hand tightly, as if determined not to let go of the warmth. The child fell asleep, still holding onto Taesan's hand. Gentle, rhythmic breathing could be heard. Time passed and the day soon came to an end. It was the moment when the curse the child mentioned was supposed to manifest. At that moment, Taesan could sense it. Something was activating beyond the space around them. Centered on the child, a force began manifesting with tremendous ripples, seeking to realize itself in this world. The power was composed of divine energy. Crack, the earth began to fracture. The manifested force attempted to destroy everything except the child. Taesan raised his aura. His immense energy engulfed the space. The manifested power was forcefully suppressed and crushed. The divine energy dissipated under Taesan's overwhelming presence. The child remained asleep. Taesan looked beyond the space. The force centered on the child did not originate from the child. It was the influence of a powerful being far away. So that's how it is. He was starting to get a sense of things. The next day, the child woke up. The plane was still as beautiful as ever. The same happened during the next trial. The child stayed in one place for a day. Divine energy manifested from beyond the space, and Taesan crushed it with his power. Thus, nothing around the child was destroyed. "What's going on?" That night, the child muttered while staring at the campfire. "Why? Why isn't anything happening?" The child didn't realize that Taesan was nullifying the curse as it activated. From the child's perspective, the curse had simply stopped. If it happened once, it could be dismissed as a coincidence. But by the third time, doubt began to creep in. The child started to wonder if their curse had disappeared. The child wanted to believe it, but they couldn't. Conflicting emotions stirred within the child. Why is this happening? Is someone toying with me? If it was going to vanish like this, it should have happened sooner. The child broke into sobs. Crying uncontrollably, they eventually fell asleep from exhaustion. Even as they slept, the child held tightly onto Taesan's hand. Taesan gently stroked the child's hair with his free hand. How many years had it been since this child had held someone else's hand? The child spoke often while traveling with Taesan, but none of those stories were about their parents. It seemed they were consciously avoiding the topic of their parents. Minerva had said that even with divine blood, the kind of curse the child described was impossible. And Taesan had identified the force manifesting around the child. When the child stayed in one place for more than a day, divine energy manifested from beyond the space and devastated the surroundings. In the gaze that watched over the child, someone was deliberately causing the curse to manifest. Taesan released the hand the child was holding. "You have activated servants of the wolf. Keep watch." Two wolves quietly nodded. Since they were created from Taesan's energy, he would immediately know if anything happened. Taesan launched himself. "You have activated leap." His body soared through the night sky. "You have activated reconnaissance. Where would you like to search?" The location the child mentioned, the cave the child claimed had been devastated by their curse, that was his destination. Taesan reached it shortly. Although he had been traveling slowly to match the child's pace, it was a distance that took him mere minutes. Tap. Taesan landed on the desolated ground. Around the small cave, all vegetation had withered and died. The lake had dried up and the land was barren, unable to sustain life. "You have activated labyrinth's territory detection." Magical energy spread across the desolate land, bringing information back to Taesan. The results revealed the truth. A land deliberately killed by someone. The land had been purposefully devastated, and within it traces of divine energy were present. It was almost certain now. Taesan spoke. "Show yourself." Clank. With the sound of metal, a golden knight emerged from the ruins. "I warn you, unworthy infidel," a scraping metallic voice rang out. "Stay away from the cursed child. If you don't, divine punishment will descend upon you." "Who are you?" "I am the first knight of His Majesty the Emperor." The knight spoke proudly. Taesan stared at him quietly. The knight was quite powerful. Not just in words, he could likely descend beyond the 50th floor, but he's distorted. The power wasn't the knight's own, but something granted by another. "Leave this world at once, unworthy infidel." "What if I refuse?" Taesan replied. The knight drew a golden sword with a metallic clang. "Then die by my hand." In an instant, the knight's body vanished. Even a trained knight or a seasoned mercenary couldn't track his speed. For an outsider, death would come before they could react. The knight was confident that Taesan wouldn't survive his sword. That's why he was shocked. His sword, aimed at Taesan's neck, was caught in Taesan's hand. The knight panicked and tried to pull his sword back, but it wouldn't budge. It didn't move, as if embedded in solid rock. Crack, the sword shattered. The knight hastily retreated. Taesan tossed aside the broken fragments and asked the knight, "Why is the Emperor targeting the child with divine blood?" Chapter 364, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood, Part 4. The power that manifested beyond the space converged at the child. It contained divine energy. To exert such power across space was an extraordinary feat, impossible for ordinary mortals. There was only one such being in this world. "You blasphemer!" The knight gritted his teeth and stomped his foot. Light enveloped the knight's entire body. "It seems you're not willing to answer." If so, he intended to extract answers by force. The knight, cloaked in divine energy, charged at Taesan. A golden sword materialized in his hand. The blade targeted Taesan's neck. Taesan raised his sword. Ka-ga-kak, the grinding sound of blades rang out. Taesan deflected the knight's sword and stabbed his chest. Koang, erg, the knight spewed blood as he was pushed back. His armor, pierced by the sword, had caved in. My armor. Not breaking, huh? The knight was shocked that his armor was dented, and Taesan was surprised it hadn't shattered. The difference in strength between Taesan and the knight was overwhelming. The knight should have fallen in a single blow, yet he endured. The reason was the power granted to the knight by someone else. Taesan stomped his foot and his body disappeared. The knight's instinct screamed in alarm. He reflexively turned and swung his sword. Koang. Taesan applied just enough pressure for the knight to barely parry his attacks. The knight sweated profusely, struggling to defend himself. This is fun, Taesan calmly observed the knight's power. The knight's own strength wasn't exceptional, comparable to sword masters Taesan had met in the world of Vekveda. However, the divine power granted to him elevated his abilities to the equivalent of the 50th floor of the labyrinth. Can a god's apostle bestow this much power without being a transcendent themselves? Taesan muttered as he struck with his sword. Koang, the ground beneath the knight's feet caved in as he blocked the attack. Monster, the knight was horrified. Even while using the power granted by the emperor at full strength, he was being overwhelmingly suppressed. But Taesan was letting his guard down. The knight targeted an opening in Taesan's defense. Kakak. Taesan swung his sword, blocking the knight's attack. The knight's eyes gleamed as he stepped forward aggressively. Dai Kaiaying, a radiant light like the sun, enveloped the knight's sword. He poured all his power into the blade for a decisive strike. The sword was aimed for Taesan's chest. Kagagagak, but it couldn't pierce through. The golden light touching Taesan disintegrated. What? There's a gap in our level of power. Taesan grabbed the knight by the neck and slammed him into the ground. Even with bestowed strength, one couldn't surpass the inherent gap in rank. No matter how much effort was made, the knight couldn't even force Taesan to use his first attack nullification. I have some questions to resolve too, so how about answering me? The power of the three proofs activated. Taesan's very presence materialized, crushing the knight. The knight's face turned pale. His spirit was being overpowered by Taesan and his body trembled like a leaf. He could do nothing. The sheer disparity in rank suppressed even his will to act. As Taesan was about to extract information from the knight, Kaiaying, a pillar of light descended from the sky. Containing power potent enough to scorch the earth, even Taesan couldn't disregard it. You activated restricted blink. Taesan swiftly exited the pillar's range. The pillar pierced through the knight. Arg, the knight screamed as he was incinerated. The power within him flowed away through the pillar of light to somewhere unknown. When the pillar disappeared, nothing was left behind. Cold-hearted, it seemed they preferred to deal with him themselves rather than let Taesan extract information. Taesan returned to the child. Dismissing the wolves, he looked at the child. The emperor was targeting this child. The obsession was intense. No matter what, the emperor was determined to obtain the child. Taesan retrieved a leaf stained with divine blood. This divine blood was the most critical clue. Now that he had confirmed this, there was no reason to hesitate. You activated Beyond the Boundary. You activated Magic Overlay. You activated Focus Detection. Focus Detection activated. Previously, he couldn't discern the information contained within the divine blood, but now it was different. With Beyond the Boundary, he forcibly accessed power beyond mortality. Even power surpassing Taesan's level could now be deciphered. The information and energy within the leaf flowed into Taesan's mind. I see. Taesan pressed his forehead, suppressing the pain. Accessing power beyond mortality meant processing information beyond his current capacity, leading to immense mental strain. This was why he had postponed using Beyond the Boundary. But the value of this knowledge was undeniable. He didn't uncover everything, but he grasped all the crucial information. So it's truly the power of a god. The divine blood was literally godly power. Flowing through blood, it surpassed mortality. However, simply possessing divine blood didn't grant one godly power. That's why most who inherited divine blood lived ordinary lives and died. To be precise, they were closer to sealing the divine blood within their bodies. Even so, it was power that transcended mortality. Upon reaching a certain level, one could wield it forcibly, like Helia. Helia, at the pinnacle of mortality, became this powerful. Someone stronger could handle it more freely and powerfully. For instance, someone at Taesan's level. The boundary referred to a state straddling mortality and immortality. Stronger than mortals but clearly weaker than immortals, it was an ambiguous state. If someone in such a state obtained divine blood, they might cross the boundary. Taesan looked at the child sleeping quietly. The child had said, unable to endure the pain, they went to a temple and received an oracle. Cursed by all things, only the emperor could lift the curse. The method to lift the curse was for the child of divine blood to willingly offer themselves as a sacrifice to the emperor. When a being with a sense of self becomes an offering, forcing them doesn't work, does it? It greatly diminishes the meaning. An offering means willingly giving oneself. The will of both the offering and the receiver is crucial. They must mutually agree and accept it. The ghost spoke. Taesan shook his head. Why did the god of choice send him to the child? Now he felt he understood what she wanted. The child moved to the next trial's location. Another day passed there, but when Taesan blocked the curse again, nothing happened. Haha, what is this? The child shook their head. At this point, it was absurd. Why on earth? The child, after enduring long despair, had ultimately decided to become the emperor's sacrifice. That was the purpose of the 7 trials. But as soon as they entered the trials, the curse suddenly disappeared. The child couldn't understand. Could it be? Because I decided to take my own life that the curse vanished, then now the child muttered continuously. Eventually, they arrived at a small rural village. Huh, the child's eyes widened. The village was bustling. Many people were laughing and talking, and various foods were displayed on stalls. A village festival, it seems. A small festival unique to a village, it seemed to be in full swing. The child blankly stared at the festival. Taesan asked the child, do you want to join? No, I can't. I'm a cursed child. If I join something like a festival. The child couldn't finish their sentence. They hung their head deeply. Your curse takes a day to activate, doesn't it? And right now the curse isn't active. So there's no issue. But the child wanted to join the festival but seemed too afraid of their curse, retreating timidly. Taesan spoke quietly. It's your choice. Do you want to enjoy the festival? Yes, then let's go. Taesan led the child into the heart of the festival. The child looked around the festival with wonder. Covered by a robe, the villagers seemed to think Taesan and the child were travelers. Hey there. Is that your son? A sturdy man asked Taesan with a laugh. Taesan nodded and the man chuckled as he handed over a skewer. You're outsiders, huh? Hey kid, this is on the house. Enjoy your time here, thank you. The child hastily accepted the skewer with a word of thanks. They took a small bite of the skewer, then exclaimed in amazement. It's delicious. The child, who had lived alone, was overwhelmed by the taste of the seasoning carefully crafted by people. The child, staring at the skewer in awe, finally handed it to Taesan as if they had made a big decision. This tastes good. You should try it. I'm fine, you eat it. Thank you. The child devoured the skewer quickly. The festival continued. A clown appeared and a talking bird captured everyone's attention. The child was no different. They walked among the crowd, their eyes sparkling as they took in the sights. Even so, they didn't let go of Taesan's hand. This is nice, the child muttered. Though short, the words carried a myriad of emotions. Taesan spoke. Do you long for a normal life? Yes. The child's gaze shifted to a boy their age, holding hands with his parents and laughing as they walked together. If I had been born normal, if I hadn't been born with blue blood. What would it have been like? Could I have lived happily too? The child's voice carried a despair unbefitting their age. Taesan responded, if you could live such a life, what? If your blue blood was just that, a trait that didn't affect your life much. Even if people around you persecuted you for it, if you could still live alongside them, would you have made the same choices you've made now? What do you mean? The child looked confused, unable to understand Taesan's words. You'll find out soon enough. Taesan looked toward the sky. From beyond the space, a force surged forth. It was about to manifest in the world with tremendous intensity. Crack. The ground began to crack, space distorted. The child's expression hardened. Based on their experience, they knew what this was a precursor to. There's no way, it hasn't even been a day. They must be getting impatient, seeing you finding hope. How pathetic. We need to leave quickly. If we don't, the village will. The child clung desperately to Taesan's arm, but before they could move, a deafening roar echoed, space twisted, and the ground trembled. Villagers screamed, collapsing in fear. The child's face filled with despair. People were going to die because of them. Taesan stomped the ground. His power erupted and clashed with the divine energy. The distorted space began to stabilize rapidly. The force from beyond the space collided with Taesan's, the two powers opposing each other. The panicked child's pupils widened. Until now, they hadn't realized the force beyond space was there. It had been suppressed so quickly in previous encounters that they hadn't noticed, but this time was different. The force beyond space clashed with Taesan's power in a confrontation so immense that even the unaware child could sense it. Taesan sneered at the force beyond. No matter how far away you send your power, it won't work on me. The force resisted but was gradually crushed by Taesan's power. Just wait, I'll come to you soon. Crack. The space was closed. The villagers groaned as they got back on their feet. What just happened? What's going on? No one had died. The ground had shaken a bit, but the damage was minimal, only a few collapsed stalls at worst. The child looked at Taesan with trembling eyes. Sir Taesan, let's leave for now. Taesan took the child out of the village. The child staggered and collapsed into a bush. The child bit their trembling nails. What was that? This time it was clearly strange. The curse had activated even though a day hadn't passed. This had never happened before. And then, the power beyond the space I saw at the end, no matter how I think about it, it didn't feel like a curse. The child was deeply confused. You are not cursed just because you possess blue blood. Events like this should not happen. What, the god of choices had said. They respected all choices, even those that lead to death. But they strongly disliked paths that were forced upon someone where no choice existed, dictated entirely by another. Taesan began speaking slowly, explaining to the child. A few days later, the child, with a lifeless expression, looked up at the golden temple. Their face was filled with every negative emotion imaginable. Everything is your choice, Taesan spoke. The child, as if resolute, began walking toward the temple. The knights guarding the entrance thrust their spears toward Taesan and the child. Halt, this is the temple where His Majesty resides. Who goes there? I am. The cursed child. The child removed their robe. The guards, recognizing the child's identity, were visibly startled. Suppressing their emotions, the child spoke. I have completed all the trials His Majesty bestowed upon me. I have come here to meet my end. Chapter 365, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood, Part 5. The guard hurriedly escorted Taesan and the child. After a moment, a middle-aged man in splendid attire appeared. You are the child cursed by all things, correct? It's an honor to meet you. Yes, the child curtly nodded. The man smiled faintly. I am the saint who serves the great god of order, Hore. And so, cursed child, I hear you have passed all the trials. The trials bestowed by His Majesty for me, I have passed them all and arrived here. Truly remarkable, the saint suddenly shouted in a loud voice. You must have endured your pain and sins to come here. His Majesty's mercy will surely be upon you. The child suppressed the grimace, trying to take over their face. Unaware of the child's reaction, the saint clapped his hands. Well then, come this way, the saint glanced at Taesan. I apologize, but this is His Majesty's residence. Outsiders are not permitted entry. Please return. No, the child shook their head. I will go together with him. Otherwise, I won't go either. It was a small but firm voice. The saint's expression wavered for a moment. He looked between Taesan and the child, deliberated, and made a decision. Very well. Since this is your final request, I suppose it can be allowed. Normally, it would be impossible, but I will make an exception. The saint spoke as if granting a great mercy, raising his chin high. He led the way, with the child following with a gloomy expression. The temple was overwhelmingly ornate. Contrary to the name of the god of order, it was covered in gold to the point of being blinding. As they walked through the corridors, devotees they encountered bowed. Upon noticing the child, they flinched, trembling and instinctively retreating. Calm yourselves, he has come to offer himself. The saint reassured them as he led the way deeper into the temple. When the massive door opened and they entered, the emperor was there. A young man, appearing barely 20 with a cold expression. Sitting on the lofty golden throne, he gazed down at the child impassively. Your Majesty. Apostle of Hore, the saint knelt, crying out, the cursed child, he has passed your trials and come here to offer himself. Please absolve his original sin. The emperor nodded silently. The saint clasped his hands in awe. A divine power began to manifest. Kang, devices resonating with the divine power activated before the child. You are cursed, the saint shouted at the child. Cursed by all things, you kill life merely by existing. Even great magic cannot control it, nor the power of faith suppress it. Tragically, even your parents died because of your curse. The saint spread his arms wide. But His Majesty is different. The Great One can contain your curse. His voice, filled with madness, suddenly softened. Of course, the cost is your life, but it cannot be helped. If you were to continue living, the entire world could fall under the curse. Truly a noble sacrifice. Before the child, a pillar of light formed. Enter it, His Majesty will contain your curse, then everyone can be happy. The child had passed the trials and arrived here for this. Yet they only stared at the pillar of light, making no move to enter. Taesan, the child spoke slowly. Could you explain it to me once more, if you wish? Taesan opened his mouth. You said you're cursed if you stay in one place for a day, but that's impossible. The blue blood you possess is divine blood, a power beyond human control. Such a curse cannot exist. The saint's face hardened. Taesan continued. But you've suffered and your life has been twisted by this so-called curse. Who are you to spout such nonsense in His Majesty's presence? Leave now, silence. Zhejiang, at Taesan's brief command, the saint's mouth snapped shut. Startled, the saint attempted to speak, but his lips refused to part. You, tormented by pain, sought a solution from the emperor and an oracle was given. I must offer myself as a sacrifice for the emperor. The child glared at the emperor seated on the throne. The emperor gazed down at them with calm indifference. Your curse is the emperor's doing, the oracle was also his. He is the root of all evil. Why would he? Your blue blood is a power beyond mortality. If someone as strong as the emperor were to acquire it, they might become even stronger. Of course, it was only a possibility. There was no guarantee that obtaining divine blood would lead to greater power, yet the child's life had been distorted for this faint possibility. If the emperor hadn't interfered, you could have lived an ordinary life even with your blue blood. Targeting those around me wasn't. To obtain your power, you must offer yourself willingly, Taesan responded. The child stared blankly at the emperor, their face twisting in anguish. Your Majesty. Is what he says true? The emperor did not reply. As if the child didn't matter, as if he could control the outcome regardless, he only stared at Taesan. The child's face contorted further. So the ones who killed my parents. Wasn't my curse, but you, your Majesty. Only the child's voice, filled with rage, echoed through the throne room. The emperor remained silent. That alone confirmed the truth of the child's words. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha, the child burst into mad laughter. No longer was there a child seeking love and blaming themselves. Only a being consumed by boundless rage remained. You, their anger erupted. Taesan spoke quietly. You now know everything. From now on, whatever you choose is your decision. If I make my choice, will you help me? Taesan nodded. The child, with a twisted expression, shouted. I don't want to die. It was the child's true feeling, buried deep within their hearts, suppressed by the belief that they were cursed. I want to take revenge on the emperor. If that is your choice, Taesan raised his hand. Following the content of the quest, he made his own decision. This was Taesan's choice. The force holding the saint's mouth shut released. The saint shouted urgently, You. What have you done? You have activated Xeppar's black storm. Kyung, the space split open, unleashing a storm. A powerful force descended upon the earth, sweeping everything away. Oh no, the saint, his face pale, unleashed his divine power. However, the black storm devoured even that, consuming it entirely. Kugugu. As the storm subsided, the temple was completely destroyed. The only things left intact were the emperor and the golden throne he sat on. The emperor had protected only himself from Taesan's storm. You let everyone else perish. It doesn't matter, the emperor replied impassively. They were nothing more than crude humans and their tools. With time they can be restored. The human beside you is no different. No matter what that worthless tool says, break their spirit and cause enough pain and they will eventually submit. It's just a minor inconvenience. The emperor's gaze never left Taesan. You are what matters. To be honest, I was initially surprised. I thought another god had intervened to disrupt my plans. But as he observed more, he realized Taesan was not an apostle of another god. He was merely a powerful being. I don't know how you came to my world, but I'll crush you and resume my plans. The emperor's power began to emerge. The child's face turned pale. The overwhelming power began distorting the very fabric of space. Stay back. Why yes. Taesan used his power to shield the child, who hesitated but slowly retreated, glancing at Taesan. Taesan drew his sword. For the first time, he was facing a true transcendent apostle without any restrictions or conditions. The emperor, wielding immense power, raised his sword. Die under the power of the great god. The power exploded. The emperor's divinity surged toward Taesan, threatening to engulf him. Taesan stomped the ground. You have activated apostle transformation, stained chaos. You have activated avatar of nature. You have activated King's Vessel. Taesan's power and aura momentarily reached a transcendent state. He unleashed his energy against the surging divinity. Kyung, the shockwaves from the clash of powers engulfed the surroundings. Taesan pointed his sword fiercely at the emperor. You have activated Apostle Slayer. Even the emperor could feel his own stature diminishing. You're interfering with my authority, the emperor grimaced and clenched his fist. The emperor's body leapt toward Taesan. Taesan raised his sword. Kang's sword and fist collided. The power radiating from the emperor's fist was something even Taesan could not underestimate. Taesan understood. The emperor, like him, was straddling the boundary. Taking a breath, Taesan moved his body. Kakakak, sword and fist clashed. The emperor used a domineering martial art. His movements were rough, but each strike carried immense power. However, that was all. The martial art itself wasn't extraordinary. It could easily be overcome. Taesan's eyes sharpened. Zhejiang. Taesan pressed his sword against the emperor's fist, driving it back. As the emperor tried to counter, Taesan blocked every move and swung his sword downward. Quajik. The emperor barely blocked it but couldn't avoid being pushed back. As Taesan moved in for a deeper strike, so you are a being of the labyrinth. Kang, the light surrounding the emperor suddenly erupted. It was a divine amplification so overwhelming that even Taesan struggled to withstand it. He quickly retreated. I acknowledge it. You are strong, you possess exceptional talent and have conquered the labyrinth created by the gods, gaining the power to challenge me. The emperor lowered his fist, and the divine energy surrounding him grew even more intense. The intensifying divine energy took form. It was a kind of domain. The emperor was a god's apostle, and gods each possessed their own domain. But even so, it's merely a mortal power. Even if you straddle the boundary, you haven't obtained the power beyond it. The emperor smirked arrogantly, his expression dripping with pride as he gathered his strength. I am the apostle of Hore, the god of order. I wield divine power. With your meager strength, it's impossible to reach me. Foolish human, I will show you the power of the gods. Kang, the divine energy exploded. The transcendent domain of an apostle materialized in the world. The law of order is imposed upon you. Chapter 366, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood, Part 6. The domain of the transcendent devoured the space. Taesan tried to distance himself, but the entire world had already been engulfed. You have activated essence identification. You have activated focus detection. You have activated reconnaissance. He attempted to discern the power manifesting in the world. However, nothing was revealed. As when detecting divine blood, only jumbled letters chaotically flooded into Taesan's mind. The domain of the transcendent was incomprehensible, even with Taesan's power. Boom. The Emperor leaped forward. Taesan blocked the swinging fist with his sword. Clang, Taesan's body was slightly pushed back. As the domain unfolded, the Emperor had grown noticeably stronger. However, the increase in power was not overwhelming. If he chose to counter, he could handle it well enough. For a divine authority, it wasn't particularly extraordinary. You have activated Starlight Arrow. An arrow of light collided with the Emperor. The divinity enveloping the Emperor consumed the light. Taesan swung his hand again. Magic of all kinds manifested. The earth crumbled and frost blanketed the world. The magical power Taesan wielded was immense. Even someone of the Emperor's caliber struggled to endure it and approach. Taesan continued to unleash his magic, pressuring the Emperor. The Emperor, however, regarded Taesan with an arrogant expression. How rude. To dare wield such profane magic in the sacred land of a god. The Emperor raised a finger. I shall establish a rule. In this divine Horai's domain, every time magic is used, you must clasp your hands and offer a prayer. As soon as the Emperor finished speaking, the magic that was manifesting abruptly cancelled. What? Taesan's face briefly twisted in a frown. Magic cancelling midway, that had never happened before. Taesan quickly gathered his mana. You have activated Starlight Arrow. Mana was consumed and the power should have manifested. But it did not work. It was like trying to ignite a flame underwater. The activation itself failed. The Emperor stepped forward, thrusting a foot at Taesan. Taesan defended against the storm-like onslaught of attacks. Clang. Taesan clicked his tongue as he was pushed back. He manipulated Magi instead of mana. You have activated Asmodeus's Chains of Decay. A newly acquired black magic skill, its effect, suppression, crack. Chains ripped through space, binding the Emperor's body. The Emperor thrashed, shaking his limbs violently. The chains groaned and began to break. You have activated Arrows of Unreasoning Tempest. Black arrows formed and shot toward the Emperor. The Emperor shattered the chains binding him, swung his fist, and counterattacked. Boom! The clash of black and golden forces created a destructive explosion, reducing the surroundings to ruins. To dare wield black magic in this holy place, the Emperor scowled as he made another declaration. Here's a new rule. Every time black magic is used, you must bow your head to the ground in reverence to the god. The black magic that had been manifesting was cancelled. This is absurd. What the hell is that? The ghost muttered, astonished. It wasn't just a restriction on Taesan alone. The world itself was imposing a prohibition on black magic. The Emperor relentlessly drove Taesan back. Crack. Taesan, keeping his distance from the Emperor, clasped his hands in prayer and cast magic. Thankfully, simply clasping his hands was enough for the magic to manifest. Crack. The frozen world unfolded properly. Taesan's eyes narrowed. The Emperor's declarations were not lies. By abiding by the rules, he could exert his power, but without compliance, it was impossible. Your swordsmanship is reckless. The Emperor smirked as he declared again. Before wielding your sword, you must kneel on one knee and offer respect to the god. Taesan, poised to swing his sword, hesitated. The altered laws of the world prevented his sword from moving. Quickly, he knelt, then rose and swung his sword. Clang, damn it. Taesan clicked his tongue and summoned Minerva. The summoned Minerva unleashed wind, pressing the Emperor. To dare summon a spirit in the land of a god, this is a sacred domain. A spirit summoned without proper tribute is not allowed. Begone. Minerva's form disappeared with a scream. Taesan, deflecting the Emperor's attacks, made a quick assessment. Rules. A power that interfered with the laws of the world itself. It was similar to partial world alteration, but on a higher level. The power of the god's domain was partially drawn in, engraving unilateral rules onto the world. Horai was the god of rules. These oppressive regulations were forcibly imprinted to disadvantage Taesan. Taesan realized this was a power only apostles chosen by gods could wield. Clang. Your first attack nullification has activated. The attack was erased. As his body returned to its state before the attack, the Emperor scowled and charged again. This is ridiculous. Boom, the Emperor rushed in with clenched fists. While his techniques were simple, Taesan easily responded. But the restrictions on Taesan were severe. Magic, black magic, spirits, and even swordsmanship couldn't be used properly. Victory was possible as long as you discerned the possibilities. Taesan moved his body, slowly analyzing the Emperor's power. However, for the moment, it meant merely enduring. Taesan allowed the Emperor's attacks, and as a result, damage gradually accumulated on him. All his attack nullifications were consumed, and his stamina began to dwindle. Boom! The Emperor's fist smashed against Taesan's sword, pushing him backward. "You cannot defeat me," the Emperor declared arrogantly. "The power of your true self is indeed stronger than mine, I won't deny that." If they were to fight with everything, the Emperor knew he would lose. But before great power, the strength of one's true self is utterly meaningless. A power that rendered everything a mortal built meaningless, that was the power of a god. It was an absolute authority mortals could never reach. "Do you understand, lowly tool?" Ah, the child, who had been watching the battle from afar, trembled. Even though the combat was beyond the child's perception, it was clear Taesan was being overwhelmed. "This weak one faces death because of your stubbornness." No, the child's face turned pale. Taesan was going to die because of the child. I don't want this." The child staggered forward, unable to bear the weight of knowing that many had already died because of them. "There's no need for that," Taesan interrupted, blocking the child. "So you truly desire the divine blood that much? The power is far too great for a lowly tool like you to handle. Shouldn't the one who takes it be someone worthy?" The Emperor laughed, his twisted smile filled with greed. "Yes, I will absorb the divine blood, transcend mortality, and become an apostle seated beside the one true deity." With a mad laugh, he charged. "Become my stepping stone, lowly being." Taesan raised his sword. "You have activated mental acceleration." Blocking the oncoming attacks, Taesan calmly sorted his thoughts. The enforcement of rules. Utterly one-sided rules favoring only the Emperor, but the opponent was not a god. At best, he was an apostle merely borrowing divine power. There had to be limits to those laws. Even the fact that the Emperor couldn't completely seal magic or black magic, but only impose preconditions for their activation proved it. He can impose conditions, but he cannot seal the abilities themselves. "You have activated concealment." The ground collapsed under the Emperor's assault, obscuring Taesan's form. His presence vanished momentarily. Taesan moved behind the Emperor and knelt. Clang! The Emperor hurriedly twisted his body to block Taesan's attack. "You possess far too many unpleasant abilities," the Emperor remarked, but did not impose a rule against concealment. He hasn't imposed rules on attack nullification either. Although irritated and flustered, the Emperor hadn't blocked those powers. The same applied to flow, which Taesan had activated during combat. Taesan sheathed his sword. His fist collided with the Emperor's. Boom! Taesan had never specialized in martial arts. However, with his swordsmanship restricted by the rules, fighting bare-handed was a better option. Since his attack power was integrated through the Arak weapon technique, the damage itself was not a significant issue. Fist clashed with fist as Taesan defended against the Emperor's strikes. The Emperor's martial arts were not particularly sophisticated. By contrast, Taesan had fought countless opponents in the labyrinth, some of whom specialized in bare-handed combat. Knowing how to counter meant knowing how to act. While it was far from his swordsmanship and precision, it was sufficient to endure. Due to the gap in experience, the Emperor struggled to break through Taesan's defenses. "Lowly creature, you don't even know shame. You should quietly accept your death," the Emperor mocked Taesan, but he did not take further action. Even though he could have imposed rules on martial arts to suppress them instantly, he did not. Taesan was certain now. The rules had limitations, so what were those limitations? If the rules are not one-sided but also apply to himself. All the rules imposed so far targeted magic, black magic, spirits, and swordsmanship, areas unrelated to the Emperor's martial arts. If the rules applied to him as well, he likely wouldn't enforce them. Or perhaps there's a limit to the number of rules. There might be a restriction on how many rules could be enforced simultaneously, explaining why martial arts weren't included. Testing it was not difficult. "You have activated Spark of Calamity." Raging flames of destruction manifested in the world. The power contained within was stronger and denser than anything Taesan had wielded before. Having defeated the core members of the Guides, he could now fully control the power of destruction. "What is this?" The Emperor scowled, retreating. Taesan focused his mind. The Spark of Calamity, which burns all things in the world, could not be controlled if the user lacked either sufficient strength or qualifications. Until now, Taesan had lacked both. But now he had them. The flames surged. True flames capable of burning the world tore through the Transcendence domain. Due to the inherent high level of destruction, even the Emperor struggled to withstand it. Taesan seized the moment to clasp his hands in prayer. "You have activated Starlight Arrow." Zing, magic and black magic activated. The rules did not block their use outright. As long as the preconditions were met, they could be wielded. Power surged toward the Emperor. Though he wanted to counterattack, the flames chasing him left little room for action. Clicking his tongue, the Emperor spoke. "To dare wield such a base power in Horai's domain. Flames that burn the world cannot exert their full force outside their original realm." New rules were imposed upon the world. At the same time, Taesan noticed the initial rule restricting magic had disappeared. The number of rules that could be enforced simultaneously was limited. The limit was 4. The test was complete. Taesan had also devised a response. Now it was his turn. Taesan gathered his strength. Chapter 367, 76th Floor, The Child of Divine Blood. Part 7. Ice, earth, and starlight surged forward. The Emperor hastily opened his mouth to speak, but by now Taesan understood. For the Emperor to enforce order in the world, he must declare it aloud, and the time required for that declaration was by no means short for Taesan. In an instant, dozens of spells materialized in the world. As if destruction itself had been unleashed, the force exploded, engulfing the Emperor. Grrrk, the Emperor amplified the divinity, cloaking his entire body. The divinity clashed with the spells, gradually eroding away. In the sacred domain of Horai, one must clasp their hands in prayer each time magic is invoked. The Emperor declared again while enduring the spells. Dozens of spells simultaneously lost their power and vanished. But Taesan had anticipated it all before the Emperor could finish his declaration. Taesan closed the gap with a restricted blink and unleashed Starlight Arrow. The divinity surrounding the Emperor was nullified by the arrow, and Taesan placed his hand on the Emperor's body. You have activated Branch of Despair. A torrent of overwhelming emotions surged through the Emperor's mind. Negative feelings sought to dominate him. Taesan immediately activated another skill. You have activated Forced Descent. The Emperor's movements visibly slowed. Seizing the opportunity, Taesan swiftly widened the distance and clasped his hands together. Crack, 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 magic raged violently. Taesan invoked magic and black magic according to the rules. Though the Emperor's movements were sluggish, he couldn't exploit the gaps. Urgh! The Emperor's face contorted under the torrent of emotions. Don't be ridiculous, he roared angrily. I am the Emperor, the Apostle of God. Such petty emotions cannot stop me. With fierce determination, divinity surged within the Emperor, but the torrent of emotions did not vanish. Deep within his mind, the assault continued, eroding his psyche. The Emperor gnashed his teeth. What is this? Why won't it disappear? Branch of Despair was a skill directly bestowed by the god of despair. It was an evolved version of Seed of Despair, ranking among the most valuable of Taesan's skills. In terms of potency, it stood equal to the Emperor's power. Even the Guides of Sin could only endure the effects of Seed of Despair with sheer willpower. Likewise, the Emperor, racked with pain, couldn't focus on the battle. Taesan didn't miss the opportunity. You have activated acceleration. You have activated skill acceleration. In an instant, Taesan closed the distance to the Emperor. After dropping into a kneel, he leapt forward with full force. Bang! The Emperor barely managed to defend and shouted with a distorted face. I declare I belong to Horai. As long as Horai does not permit it, mental interference with me is impossible. With the imposition of this rule, the effect of Branch of Despair vanished. The restriction on black magic was also lifted. Taesan quickly gathered dark energy. Rumble black magic manifested consecutively. Chains bound the Emperor, arrows of the storm tore through space, and black waves engulfed the world. You have activated Ammon's pitch-black spike. Crack. The spike struck the Emperor, sending him sliding backward with a powerful impact. Gnashing his teeth, the Emperor declared once more. With the new rules, the power of black magic waned. You insolent pest, the Emperor charged Taesan, brimming with anger. Given the rules, it was nearly impossible to block the Emperor's attack. Therefore, Taesan had no intention of blocking it. You have activated Designated Mark Acceleration. Taesan's body instantly moved backward. The speed resembled a spatial leap, causing the Emperor's pupils to widen in shock. How is this possible? Taesan kicked the ground. Using Designated Mark Acceleration, he moved freely through space. The Emperor, caught off guard, struggled to respond. It was a power he had never encountered before. After a moment of hesitation, the Emperor roared. This is the domain of Horai. To leap through space, you must first declare your position. A restriction was imposed on spatial movement. The Emperor charged forward aggressively. You have activated Designated Mark Acceleration. Once again, Taesan moved to the mark's location. It wasn't a spatial leap but rapid movement through space. Thus, the restriction didn't apply. The Emperor's face twisted in frustration. I imposed the rule, why isn't it working? As the new rule applied, the restriction on spirits was lifted. You have summoned the Wind Spirit King Minerva. What's the big idea? Summoning me just to chase me away, that's too much. Minerva, seething with anger, unleashed a tempest. The divinity surrounding the Emperor gradually thinned. Taesan smirked mockingly at the Emperor. The Emperor was undeniably strong. In pure power alone, he wasn't inferior to Taesan. The authority of his rules was overwhelmingly selfish, capable of restraining all of Taesan's actions. Had he wielded it effectively, he could have nullified most of Taesan's efforts. But the Emperor failed to do so. His use of the rules was overly simplistic, and his grasp of Taesan's power was so poor that he wasted energy. His lack of combat experience was glaring. It wasn't surprising. Even the strongest in the outside world barely reached the level of the 30th or 40th floor. The emperor, standing at the boundary, couldn't possibly match someone of equal footing. Perhaps he had never truly fought since becoming an apostle. Honestly, the guides of Sin were tougher. If they, with their vast experience, had wielded the power of rules, they might have defeated Taesan. Such was the potential of the rules. Power alone meant nothing. One must learn how to wield it effectively, counter an opponent, and manage unforeseen variables. This understanding was why the gods created the labyrinth. Power without experience wasn't frightening at all. The emperor dismissed Minerva with a declaration. Seizing the moment, Taesan closed in on the emperor. "You have activated acceleration." He thrust his sword fiercely. The emperor opted to evade rather than block. "You have activated sure hit." Crack, the sword's trajectory twisted, piercing the emperor's shoulder. "What is this? What is happening?" the emperor shouted angrily. He couldn't comprehend Taesan's abilities. His ignorance led to confusion, and confusion slowed his actions. Crunch, Taesan swung his sword with force. "You have activated Call of Ruin." The power of ruin burst into the world. Startled, the emperor cloaked himself in divinity. Call of Ruin was a power obtained after defeating the demon king in the ghost realm. It was far stronger than the Ember of Catastrophe. Though Taesan had yet to master it, he could now wield it to some extent. Ruin, which devoured all, consumed the divinity surrounding the emperor. The divinity visibly diminished. The power of ruin cannot exert its full strength outside its original world. The emperor barely managed to shout, but this resulted in the restriction on swordsmanship being lifted. Taesan swung his sword violently. "You have activated Blade of Will." The emperor struck with his fist. Boom, fist and sword collided. Divinity was eroded. The emperor widened his eyes and drew upon his strength. Die, boom, the exploding divinity engulfed Taesan. But Taesan was already gone from that spot. Having moved to the side, Taesan gathered dark energy. He had already prepared for the black magic. The emperor, gritting his teeth, charged forward. His anger clouded his judgment as he intended to ignore Taesan's black magic, relying on the divinity cloaking his body to attack. Until now, Taesan's black magic had only chipped away at his divinity without causing any direct damage. The emperor rushed toward Taesan. Taesan unleashed his magic. "You have activated Beyond the Boundary. You have activated Arrow of the Unthinkable Storm. You have activated Forced Amplification." An arrow imbued with power beyond mortality hurtled forward. The emperor instinctively recognized it. That power could pierce through his divinity, but it was too late to respond. He hastily tried to amplify his divinity further, but the arrow shattered it before he could. Thud. The storm arrow pierced the emperor's heart. Rumble, cough. The emperor spat out blood. Staring blankly at his pierced chest, he looked dazed. He was Horai's apostle. Even with his heart pierced, as long as his divinity wasn't fully consumed, he could recover. But the heart pierced by the storm arrow wasn't healing. The power contained within the arrow surpassed the level of his divinity, which existed on the boundary. "Ha!" The emperor let out a hollow laugh. With time and focus, he could recover fully. But his opponent wasn't going to just stand by and let that happen. "Is this all you've got?" The emperor withdrew the transcendent domain he had spread across the world. Screech. The apostle's power concentrated entirely into his fist. All the rules that restricted Taesan were lifted. This was the power the emperor reserved for dire situations. It was his trump card. If Taesan could block this attack, everything would end. There was no need to hold back anymore. Taesan gripped his sword. Tap. The emperor leaped, throwing a fist meant to obliterate everything. Taesan met it head-on with his sword. Black energy coated the blade, then gold overlaid it. The result was a hue of gray. Boom. The power of the apostle and the boundary collided. The mingled gray force gaped open, devouring the apostle's power. "What is this?" The emperor was horrified. As an apostle, he recognized the gray force. It was a power beyond mortality. No, perhaps even beyond that. His thoughts were cut short as the gray exploded, engulfing his entire body. "I've lost." The emperor, his body mangled, admitted defeat. His face showed neither great rage nor despair. "To think I'd return to Horai like this. I'll have to meet and apologize." An apostle was a being who offered their soul to their god. For them, death wasn't the end. It's merely shedding their physical form and returning. The emperor's soul emerged from his lifeless body. Ah! The heavens opened, a colossal presence appeared. Its power felt cold and devoid of warmth. It was the god of order, Horai. Oh my god. The emperor gazed at Horai with a hazy look. Horai stared at the emperor with an indifferent gaze. The light in that gaze was utterly merciless. "Gee god," the emperor was flustered. Horai's gaze was anything but benevolent. Suddenly, the emperor felt fear and tried to flee, but there was nowhere to escape. Yeah. Horai's power forcibly devoured the emperor's soul. There was no compassion, no kindness, no mercy. It crushed him like a tool that had outlived its usefulness. The emperor disappeared with a scream. "Your soul ascension has activated." The soul ascension system notification appeared. Taesan calmly drew in the remaining divinity to heal his body. "It's over now." Ah, the child shuddered. Even during the battle, the Emperor had ensured the child wasn't harmed. As a result, the child remained unscathed amidst the ruins. Taesan spoke to the child. The curse tormenting you is gone now. The curse had been something imposed by the Emperor. Now the child was merely a bearer of the divine blood, an ordinary child. The child stared at Taesan blankly, unable to grasp the reality. Everyone I knew is dead. The child's family had perished by the Emperor's hand. The world will still hate me. To the world, the child remained accursed. People might believe the destruction of the temple and the Emperor's disappearance were due to the child's curse and persecute him further. I'm still a cursed child, that hasn't changed, but the child looked at Taesan. Taesan had fought the Emperor for him, for no one else but him. Even so, I'll live. The child decided to live no matter what trials awaited, at least for Taesan's sake. It was the choice the child made in the end. Taesan nodded. If that's your choice. With those words, Taesan's body vanished. The quest's conclusion transported him back to the labyrinth. Sir Taesan, the child stood still for a moment, then slowly began walking. He would live despite the pain and suffering. The child had made his decision. But there was a problem. What purpose would he live for? He didn't have one. He had wanted an ordinary life, but that was now impossible. And he no longer wished for normalcy. After some thought, a place came to his mind. The labyrinth. The child recalled the stories Taesan had shared about it, a place where warriors from all worlds gathered. A place to grow stronger if one could survive. Taesan had said he was descending into it. Perhaps. The child decided his goal in life. With unwavering steps, he moved forward. It is finished. You could have waited just a little longer. Do you not think this ending is acceptable? The voice of the god of choice was filled with satisfaction. That child will live on, they will face countless choices, and eventually they will come here. It will be an entertaining time. Maria chuckled. You did very, very well. You showed me everything I wanted to see. And so an appropriate reward would be given. With those words, Maria waved a finger. A crystallized force took shape and began materializing in Taesan's hand. Chapter 368. The world, community, the crystallized power materialized as a blue jewel before Taesan. The jewel slowly descended into Taesan's hand. With a cold sensation, the jewel settled in his palm. You have obtained crystallized divine blood. Divine blood, it is a fragment of my power. How you handle it is entirely up to you. Maria spoke leisurely. You can implant it into your body and control it, or you can use it as material to craft a weapon. However, at least for now, it will be impossible. Taesan gazed at the crystallized divine blood. The blue jewel-like divine blood was stable but contained an overwhelmingly terrifying power. Even in his current state, Taesan appeared incapable of handling such power. Crystallized divine blood cannot be found anywhere else in the world. It is a unique reward meant solely for you. Thank you, Maria was right. Divine blood was a power that no one could obtain unless they were born with it. The Emperor had sought to acquire divine blood in the form of sacrifices, but whether he truly succeeded was unknown. He had obtained a power that could never be acquired through conventional means. That alone made it invaluable. This is both a reward and a kind of expectation. Become strong enough to wield it and then you'll truly understand its value. Maria chuckled softly. This is your reward for successfully passing my trial. You must have questions, feel free to ask. Then, if I may, Taesan opened his inventory. In his hand was a small flower-shaped ornament. Its 7 petals shimmered in vibrant rainbow hues. Maria's gift. A gift bestowed upon a human favored by a god currently has no effect. What is this used for? It was the reward Maria had given him when they first met, a long time ago. At the time, he was only on the 12th floor, weaker than both Lee Taeyeon and Kang Junhyuk in their current states. Yet even now, he had not figured out how to use Maria's gift. Whenever he thought about it, he activated essence perception or focus detection, but nothing was revealed. So that's what you're asking, then I'll answer, Maria spoke slowly. That is a gift that cannot be used on its own. It can only be activated when you meet someone with whom you are connected. Someone I'm connected to? Everyone he had connections with was dead. He had turned back time, and Maria also knew that. When she first met Taesan, she had said so that he had reversed time after making a fatal mistake while entangled with ancient gods. Yet she mentioned someone he was connected to. Taesan's gaze darkened. Maria smiled quietly. Let's save that for a later surprise. With those words, Maria's domain began to recede. I'll be waiting for you in a deeper place. Come down quickly. With that soft voice as the last echo, Taesan returned to the labyrinth. A person I'm connected to. His mind was slightly muddled. Taesan fiddled with the flower ornament. Some questions arose, but one thing was certain: he had cleared the 76th floor. Crystallized divine blood. Stabilized divine blood in crystallized form. If an unqualified individual attempts to control it, it will run amok. It was more a warning than an explanation, and Taesan felt the same. While it was a reward, he could not use it yet. For now, he could only hold on to it, but considering its power, it was far from a trivial reward. Just as Maria had said, he needed to grow stronger before addressing it. And then there were the rewards for clearing the 76th floor. Armor refined by deep darkness, strength plus 900, defense plus 900, black magic plus 30, black magic resistance plus 1. An armor crafted as a hobby within the domain of the creator of black magic. Despite its playful origins, it contains immense power. If the creator of black magic was a demon, then this equipment seemed to be crafted by one. Appropriately, it enhanced both black magic and resistance to it. Rough-cut anklet of raw stone, strength plus 500, attack power plus 400, defense plus 500. A mysterious raw stone fell to a planet one day. Countless blacksmiths tried to refine it but died simply by striking the stone a few times, overwhelmed by its power. After uncountable lives were lost, it finally became an anklet. The default clear rewards, as always, did not disappoint. And after defeating the Emperor, Soul Ascension activated. Your Soul Ascension has activated. Divine Power Mastery has increased by 3%. The 3% increase in divine power seemed insignificant at first glance. However, to Taesan, who understood the value of divine power, it was a substantial improvement. When divine power reached 81%, progress had halted entirely. Despite the considerable number of Earth's players worshipping Taesan, there was no movement. Once it reached 100%, he could potentially gain his own divinity, making the progress painfully slow. A 3% increase was monumental. It was more valuable than acquiring most skills. And then the newly obtained skill, Special Activation Skill, Law of Regulation, Consumption, Proficiency. 1% summons the domain of regulation and enforces its laws. However, the user currently lacks the rank and qualification to wield this power effectively. A soul-based skill. The description resembled that of the King of Machinery, making its nature clear. This was an authority granted exclusively to the apostle of the god of regulation. Through Soul Ascension, Taesan had acquired it, even an apostle. It's genuinely hard to accept. Soul Ascension disregarded the opponent's nature, be it an immortal, an ancient god, or an apostle, and seized their power. It was a skill that defied understanding. It was a considerable reward. Although it couldn't be used immediately, if Taesan gained the necessary qualifications, it meant he could wield a portion of divine authority. Its value was immense. Perhaps because he had defeated an apostle, his apostle transformation underwent changes. While the name remained the same, its effects had slightly strengthened. With these rewards, it was time to proceed. Taesan ascended the floor. Hafren greeted him as though he had been waiting. "You're here. I've been wondering when you'd arrive. Is everything ready?" "Yes." Taesan had previously entrusted Hafren with the pure light crystal obtained from the spirit realm. It seemed the crafting was complete. Hafren handed Taesan a shimmering fragment of light. "I struggled to decide what to create, but nothing seemed appropriate, so I opted for something simple yet powerful. Pure white powder of blessing. A powder of blessing. Can be applied to a weapon to imbue it with power. Attack power plus 200. Can activate Light of the World once per hour. Light of the World. Summons the primordial light of radiance. Dispels darkness and repels unholy beings. You can use it on the relic of Calvert that you have." Not bad. The pure attack power was significantly high. While he didn't know the exact effects of Light of the World, if it was similar to forced amplification, it would prove quite useful. The powder more than compensated for the stats lost due to the release of the maddened spirit. Taesan sprinkled the powder onto his sword. "Is that all you needed?" "No. I have a question." Taesan displayed the black and white rings on his fingers. How exactly were these rings created? To use both rings together, he needed a thorough understanding of their creation. Hafren looked puzzled but answered. "What do you want to know? Was the crafting process of the rings designed as a pair from the beginning?" "No, they weren't." Hafren shook his head. "Initially, I attempted to craft them as a single piece of equipment. However, the materials were so overwhelmingly powerful that they repelled and resisted each other. I almost died because of it. The materials contained within the rings were beyond even Hafren's control. After much contemplation on how to stabilize them, he reached a conclusion. I crafted 2 rings through identical processes. Although the materials differ, resulting in external variations, the crafting methods are perfectly equal. By making them resonate with each other, their power is amplified and stabilized. That's how these rings were completed. So the process was exactly the same, not a single deviation. Twins are by definition such creations. I see. Rings crafted to be perfectly identical. That made it possible, not immediately, but the potential was there. That's all I needed to know. Thank you. You provided the materials and requested the equipment. It's only natural I answer. Is that all? There's one more thing. Taesan showed Hafren the crystallized divine blood. Can you refine this? Hafren examined the divine blood briefly before grimacing. You bring something that wouldn't be obtainable even on the 90th floor. Do you think it's possible? Figured as much. Taesan hadn't expected much to begin with and returned the divine blood to his inventory. I may be great, but I'm still mortal. I hope you understand that. Hafren grumbled. Taesan bid him farewell and descended the floor once more. As he was heading toward the 77th floor, a flood of system windows suddenly obstructed his vision. They were all related to the community. Taesan opened the community. Amelia Aaron Solo, why are you already back? Lee Taeyeon Solo, because we finished early. Amelia Aaron Solo, what about China? Something definitely happened over there. Kang Junhyuk Solo, oh that, explaining it would take a while. Oliver Kahn Hard, let's hear it, we've got time to rest anyway. The community was abuzz with conversation. Taesan realized that players from other countries had finally completed their trials and returned to the labyrinth. Chapter 3, 69, 77th Floor, The World on the Brink of Destruction. Part 1. While Taesan descended the labyrinth, what progress had others made and what events transpired? First, Lee Taeyeon and Kang Junhyuk began to speak. Lee Taeyeon Solo. We've made it down to the 40th floor. Kang Taesan Solo, as expected you're fast. Amelia Aaron Solo. Already, Amelia quietly expressed her astonishment. While she had been completing Earth's quests, Lee Taeyeon and Kang Junhyuk had rapidly caught up to her. Kang Junhyuk Solo. The things you taught us have helped a lot in many ways. There were some dangerous encounters, but we managed to make it down without much trouble. It seemed they had entered a stable phase. Unless they became overconfident or careless, they could likely continue descending without major difficulties. Kim Hweon Hard. We've also made considerable progress. Some of the faster players have cleared up to the middle of the 60th floor. Kang Taesan Solo. Not bad. Kim Hweon Hard. But things are starting to get tough. It seems like it'll take quite some time from here. Just as the deeper levels of solo mode were known for their sudden difficulty spikes, the same was true for hard mode. They were likely to be stuck for a while. Amelia Aaron Solo. I need to hurry, at this rate they'll catch up to me. Daniel Darman Hard. We just got back so it can't be helped. Kang Junhyuk Solo. By the way, when do you think the next return quest will appear? It feels like it's about time for one to show up. Oliver Kahn Hard. But we've only just returned to the labyrinth. I doubt a quest will appear so soon. Lee Taeyeon Solo. Taesan, do you know anything? Kang Taesan Solo. I have no idea. Taesan didn't know either. With so much having changed from his previous life, his memories were no longer as reliable. Kang Taesan Solo. It could come right away or it could take a long time, just be prepared. Lee Taeyeon Solo. Understood. Kang Junhyuk Solo. Oh, by the way, how far have you gone? Hyung. Kang Taesan Solo. The 77th floor. Amelia Aaron Solo. Seriously, the community buzzed with excitement. Oliver Kahn Hard. Wow, I can't even imagine what that's like. How strong are you at that level? Lee Taeyeon Solo. Aren't you close to clearing it? Kang Taesan Solo. There's still a long way to go. The remaining floors might take even more time than everything he'd experienced so far. Kang Taesan Solo. But I'll probably finish before you all. Lee Taeyeon Solo. So will you return to Earth first or wait for us at the 100th floor? Kang Taesan Solo. Not sure. Even Taesan was undecided about that. After exchanging more words, Taesan closed the community. If anyone could return quickly, it would be Taesan. How would he bridge the gap in time, and how would he revive the broken earth, the polluted air, the decayed land, the desolate ground, and the dried-up seas? In his previous life, he hadn't cared much. Their sole purpose had been survival. Protecting a small area and surviving against the monsters was their goal. There was no need to worry about anything else, but not anymore. What Taesan now wanted wasn't mere survival, but to drive out the ancient gods from Earth and live there again. Rebuilding civilization, cultivating the land, and having children. That was the fundamental reason he had turned back time. Players from the labyrinth could endure the polluted air with their enhanced bodies. While the decayed land couldn't support large-scale farming, limited subsistence farming was possible. However, the newborn children wouldn't survive in the polluted air. Subsistence farming also wasn't a perfect solution. With no living animals, consuming meat was impossible. To truly live on Earth again, not just survive, many issues needed to be resolved. While labyrinth items could provide temporary solutions, they were only localized powers. With Earth's very foundation destroyed, they couldn't solve everything. What should I do? Taesan was lost in thought. He believed he might find answers as he descended the labyrinth. Taesan reached the 77th floor. 77th floor quest initiated. Stabilize a world driven to the brink of destruction by the ancient gods. Reward, the cruel one's blood-stained hammer. Secret reward. Depends on your performance. Reading the quest conditions, Taesan narrowed his eyes. A world on the brink of destruction. After a moment of thought, Taesan nodded. As soon as he accepted the quest, his body leaped through space. Thud. Taesan landed on the ground. What he felt was polluted air, and the sensation of decayed land, and the faces of people deeply shrouded in despair. Taesan realized this place was identical to Earth just before its destruction. The polluted air pierced the lungs. For someone of Taesan's strength, it wasn't a significant issue. Even for an ordinary human without any special powers, there wouldn't be immediate harm. But over time, as the pollution accumulated, the body would deteriorate and the mind would become corrupted. Is this the quest? You know about it. You know the high gods want to destroy this world, right? And that many planets with life were destroyed as a result. Taesan nodded. After clearing Vekveta's quest, the demon god had mentioned this to him. A total of 258 worlds had been destroyed by the ancient gods. Time had passed since then, so the number was likely even higher now. The gods don't sit idly by during the high gods' attacks. They try to protect the attacked worlds and drive out the ancient gods. You've done a similar quest before, haven't you? The quest from Zelbando, the god of magic, the world of the arrogant giants. That world had been invaded by the high gods. That's how the gods protect each world. Sometimes they succeed without issues and other times they fail, resulting in the destruction of the world. And occasionally they manage to protect the world, but it remains desolate and devastated. This place is one of those, then. There wasn't a hint of hope on the faces of the people roaming about. The ghost confirmed it. This quest isn't focused on combat. The goal is to restore and stabilize this broken world. Taesan gathered his magic and activated Larrage's territory detection. Information about the planet flowed into him. The land where people lived was about the size of a single city. A significant number of people were residing there. The detection extended beyond the city. No creatures of the ancient gods were detected. Considering his substantial detection range, it was safe to assume they didn't exist nearby. The quest's objective was to stabilize this place. How should it be done? While pondering, someone called out to Taesan. "You there, young man?" An old man waved at Taesan from a shabby tent. Following the gesture, Taesan approached the old man. "Who are you? I don't recognize your face. Did you come from another city?" "Another city? You don't know?" The old man's eyes widened. "Don't tell me, are you someone who came from outside?" He was likely asking if Taesan had survived outside the city and arrived here. Taesan nodded. The old man chuckled and stroked his beard. "Ha, I thought all survivors outside the city were dead, but there's still someone alive. Meeting you must be fate, come with me. I'll tell you about this place." The old man led Taesan to a tattered shack. "Will you eat?" The old man handed Taesan a rusty bowl filled with a murky broth containing unidentifiable chunks. Taesan shook his head. The old man chuckled and sat on a broken chair. "You must be a rare survivor, but you're unlucky. After all that struggle to survive, you ended up in this broken city. There are multiple cities." "Yes." The old man ate a spoonful of the broth and continued. "This is one of humanity's last cities, a gathering place for the forsaken Baraziak, a city where people survive because they can't die." The old man spoke bitterly. From his words, Taesan understood. "So the other cities are in better condition? There are 5 cities in total." The old man slowly began explaining. "Each city is controlled by a different group and they're all at odds with one another. The strength of the 4 is nearly equal except for us." As the old man spoke, faint footsteps approached. A young boy entered the tattered tent. "Grandpa, I'm back." The boy widened his eyes when he saw Taesan. "Who's that?" "A visitor from the outside." The boy's eyes widened even further. "An outsider? There's a survivor outside." "I was surprised too. Why'd they come to our city? If they had to come, why not go to another city?" "Such bad luck." The boy opened a bag, revealing a moldy piece of bread. "Here, Grandpa, I was lucky today and found some bread buried deep underground." The boy handed the bread to the old man as if it were a great fortune. The bread was so thoroughly covered in mold that it was hard to find an edible part. "Sorry, but I can't give you any of this," the boy said, glaring at Taesan. His stance was firm, as if losing this bread would threaten his future. Taesan spoke. "You're a group cast out by others. Old people and children are useless to them, so we were abandoned. Even those who resisted and rebelled against them were all exiled here." The old man rubbed his back. "We have no power, but we can't let the lives we barely held on to go to waste. We're doing our best to survive." Taesan quietly listened to the old man's words. Taesan parted ways with the old man and began exploring the city. The state of the city's interior was more dreadful than he could have imagined. There was no proper food, clothing, or shelter. People were merely scraping by, trying to survive day by day. It was hard to find intact land. Without the ability to produce proper food, they were barely holding on by consuming the remaining supplies they had. "How should I go about this?" Taesan contemplated silently. His quest was to restore stability to this place. Stability didn't simply mean surviving day to day. It meant being able to produce sustainable food, raise children, and dream of a better future. To achieve this, Taesan realized he would need to take the lead in managing the city. He would need to figure out how to expand their territory, cleanse the polluted air, and create livable land. Taesan came to a realization. This quest wasn't just about stabilizing the current situation, it was also a test to determine how he would go about restoring Earth after everything was over. Chapter 370, 77th Floor, The World on the Brink of Destruction, Part 2. There's no definitive answer for this quest. Your rewards will change depending on how you handle it. How did you clear it? In my world, I drove out the ancient god, but monsters remained. Survivors were being hunted down by those monsters. I gathered them, built a city, and eradicated the monsters. It took about half a year. Lee Tion had also spoken about the 77th floor before. She said that people there distrusted one another. Not just simple mistrust, she described it as a level where people no longer saw each other as human. As if it were kill or be killed, she said it was a chaotic world where everyone sought to kill everyone else. It was probably because the high god had corrupted their minds. He remembered her grumbling about how many items she had to use to clear it. Usually, people solve it with brute force. The quest's purpose is stability. As long as you can create a situation where people can somehow survive, even if their numbers are low and their minds are wrecked, it counts as cleared. Their lives didn't matter, only the quest's clearance conditions did. What will you do? I don't plan to do it that way. The world Taesan visited was almost identical to Earth on the brink of destruction. It was a rehearsal for how to revive a devastated Earth. Taesan wasn't only concerned with clearing the quest, he was planning to experiment with different methods. You should leave. As Taesan wandered around the city, a child approached him. This is a dying city. You look young and strong, so you'll probably make it to another city somehow. They'll accept you there. I'm not leaving, Taesan answered calmly. The child shook his head in disbelief. You won't be treated well. The city of the abandoned was slowly dying with no visitors. In such a situation, someone young and strong like Taesan attracted attention. Before long, everyone in the city knew about Taesan. The people of the city looked at him with unfriendly eyes. This was a place that couldn't produce anything, only consume day by day, a discarded city. In such a place, a strong, able-bodied man was unwelcome. Instead, he was seen as someone who could pressure others with his strength and consume more food, making him an object of suspicion. However, they didn't drive Taesan away. Everyone here had been deemed useless and abandoned. Thus, the people of the city were tightly bound together. While they distrusted Taesan, they didn't exclude him. But that didn't mean they got along with him. The people kept their distance from Taesan. Only the elderly and the children spoke to him. Standing in a vacant lot on the outskirts of the city, Taesan stared at the ground in silence. The land was contaminated. Even makeshift farming wouldn't work on this soil. In his previous life, there were items to neutralize soil contamination which allowed limited cultivation, but those items weren't available now. What are you doing? An old man approached, patting his back. Seeing Taesan holding a seed and staring at the ground, the old man guessed his intentions and shook his head. A seed? That's a rare thing to have, but unfortunately it's impossible. It wasn't as if they hadn't tried. After driving out the monsters, they had planted leftover seeds in the soil, but nothing sprouted. The poison in the contaminated soil was too much for any seed to endure, thus they abandoned all their seeds. Don't be stubborn and leave, young man. This is our grave. There's no reason for you to bury yourself here. The old man spoke bitterly. Taesan didn't respond. He merely thought and reached a conclusion, kidding. A golden light radiated from Taesan's hand. The old man, who had been watching absent-mindedly, widened his eyes. That is, the old man, who had lived through the war against the ancient god, remembered. The terrible monsters that swarmed the sky, and the mighty golden light that trampled them. What Taesan held now was the same golden light. Encasing the entire city would be difficult, but this small vacant lot could be easily covered in divine power. The divine power expanded, blanketing the lot. The small space became Taesan's domain. Any foreign energy not permitted by Taesan was expelled. The contaminated soil was purified, beginning to regain its vitality. Oh, Taesan scattered the seeds. When he had embarked on the quest on Earth, he had brought several seeds. The old man's already wide eyes grew even larger. The seeds sprouted rapidly. Shoots emerged, followed by leaves. Yellow kernels began to form, their green husks enveloping them. In less than a few minutes, dozens of corn stalks filled half the lot. In the gray, lifeless city, vibrant green plants grew proudly. Taesan nodded. It works. He maintained the divine domain in a small area and activated makeshift farming there. The cultivation was a success. With this, the city's food problems could be resolved. Since the soil itself was being purified, expanding the domain could also make their living spaces safe. Bring the people here. Taesan spoke to the old man, who stood frozen in shock. The old man didn't move. Fortunately, he didn't need to. People who had seen the golden light began approaching cautiously. They gasped when they saw the corn. What is this? It's corn, corn, the people rushed at it wide-eyed. Taesan didn't stop them. Word spread rapidly and soon everyone in the city gathered. They tore at the corn with desperate fervor. Though the small lot couldn't feed everyone, it didn't matter. As soon as the corn was harvested, more grew in its place. "Oh, oh," a boy who arrived late to the scene exclaimed as he tore into a cob. He hastily peeled it and shoved it into his mouth. Since the corn wasn't cooked, it was hard and dry, making it difficult to chew and swallow. But it was fresh. It wasn't moldy or half-rotted like the food they were used to. The boy, who barely remembered the time when he was an infant, felt something long forgot. The boy chewed through tears. The others weren't much different. Everyone wept as they devoured the corn. Not long after, their hunger subsided, and only then did their reasoning return. Why is there corn growing in a place like this? No, more importantly, what is that golden light covering the land? Their confused gazes turned toward the old man and Taesan, who stood blankly before them. "Old man, what's going on here?" The old man looked at Taesan instead of answering. The people's attention shifted to Taesan. Ignoring their stares, Taesan opened his inventory. "Let's see if this one works." Taesan scattered black seeds over the remaining space. The observer's pupils dilated, vines began to grow, the fruits expanded rapidly. Before long, the remaining half of the lot was filled with large, sturdy watermelons. The people's expressions mirrored that of the old man, utter disbelief. A silence filled with astonishment enveloped them. Afterward, the atmosphere shifted rapidly. Taesan was no longer just a suspicious young man who had appeared out of nowhere. Taesan became the master of the abandoned city. In a place that had produced nothing and was slowly dying, the sudden resolution of the food problem made it impossible not to follow him. "Makeshift farming, that's quite an intriguing skill. How did you even come up with getting something like that?" The ghost sounded amazed. The labyrinth wasn't a place to live, it was a place to conquer. Basic sustenance was sold in shops, so the ghost had never needed to cultivate anything. Only players in the unique situation of returning to Earth had acquired such skills. Taesan asked the boy, "Are there any livestock here?" This way." The boy hesitated as he led Taesan. Along the way, he kept stealing glances at Taesan before finally asking, "Did you really come here to save us?" After seeing Taesan produce food, some people began to whisper cautiously that he might be the savior of the world. They speculated that he was a savior sent to guide them in this desolate world. Some even whispered that he might be an emissary of the gods. The elderly especially supported this idea, claiming to have seen similar powers in the past. Taesan replied, "Something like that." The boy's face lit up. "Knew it." The boy seemed thrilled that his thoughts were confirmed. Inside the small animal pen he led Taesan to, there were two emaciated pigs. Too weak to move, they simply lay there, barely breathing. "Oh no, nobody's been taking care of them." The boy hastily threw some corn to them. The pigs, their noses twitching, wobbled over and began devouring the corn. "We've been feeding them scraps just in case, but they were reaching their limit. We were planning to butcher them soon. But now that we have corn, maybe we can get some meat." The boy's eyes sparkled. Taesan also had something in mind. Makeshift farming only worked on plants, it didn't apply to raising livestock. In his previous life, he hadn't paid much attention to this. Survival had been too challenging to be picky about food. But to ensure a sustainable future, meat would be essential, and in large quantities. As he stared at the pigs, Taesan pulled out various materials from his inventory: blue flowers, green leaves, and other diverse ingredients. Taesan had collected materials for alchemy and small-scale environmental alterations whenever he had a chance. While most of them were used in battles, some were left unused because they had no combat applications. Among them were materials with growth-accelerating effects which he had kept unused until now. But now things were different. Taesan prepared the materials. The boy looked on in surprise as the materials seemed to combine, drawing out a mysterious power. Taesan focused. The alchemy he had learned from the gremlin was now being properly applied. Kidding, the harmony of the materials completed and the power of alchemy enveloped the pen. The pigs, which had been slowly nibbling on corn, suddenly let out piercing squeals. "Squeak! The boy covered his ears in panic at the ear-splitting noise. The pig's flesh began to grow rapidly. Their eyes turned a glowing red. One pig let out a bellow and tackled the other. The boy grew even more flustered. What's happening? This seems to work. I just need to refine it a bit more." Taesan confirmed that alchemy could aid in the reproduction and growth of livestock. The only problem was sourcing the livestock. With Earth in ruins, finding proper animals was nearly impossible. "Maybe I could get them as a reward from the labyrinth." No one's ever asked for something like that. "But if you want it, they'll probably give it to you. Try asking as a service after clearing it." The possibility of livestock reproduction was confirmed. Taesan summoned Minerva. "Wow, this place is practically dead. Can you purify the air here as well?" Contaminated air impacted life itself. While labyrinth players could endure it with their strengthened bodies, newborns couldn't. Minerva, the king of the wind spirits, governed nature itself. The possibility seemed high. It depends on the situation, but since the power of the high gods is mostly gone, it should be possible. Minerva closed her eyes and focused her power. Slowly, the wind and air currents began to change. At that moment, the people realized it. The polluted air was clearing and breathing suddenly became easier. The contaminated air was being purified. It's working, but I can't do this on a large scale. The pollution is too severe. At most, I can manage this city. For now, that's enough. People gradually began to learn about the various things Taesan had done. They started following him even more. The city, once on the brink of destruction, was now being restored entirely by Taesan's hands. Chapter 370, 177th Floor, The World on the Brink of Destruction, Part 3. Resolving the food crisis, breeding livestock, purifying the air, Taesan devised various other methods as well. Taesan focused his mind, be constructed. Boom, pillars rose from the ground. The land warped, twisted, and houses made of soil were formed. Taesan knocked on one of the houses. Despite applying considerable strength, it did not shake. Not bad. The people were ecstatic about the houses. They eagerly explored the new homes. Wow, so spacious. The houses made of soil were empty inside, but even so the people were satisfied. No longer would their bodies get drenched by rain leaking through the gaps in tent roofs. No longer would they have to endure poorly made tents full of holes that failed to block the wind. They were overjoyed. Taesan continued to do many things. He treated the injured and patrolled the city surroundings. The people's trust in Taesan grew deeper and deeper, yet Taesan was not satisfied. The city had found stability, but only because of him. It was merely a temporary fix. Simplified cultivation couldn't be used on contaminated land. The soil first needed purification with divine power or special items. The land available for cultivation was limited. The current population wasn't a problem, but if it grew, the story would change. Sooner or later, food would become scarce. Purifying the air was also impossible without Minerva. Since he couldn't stay here forever, problems would arise again once he left. What Taesan wanted wasn't mere survival, but an environment that would continue to grow and thrive. A world that collapses without him held no meaning. What should I do? Taesan kept pondering solutions. Of course, this was only Taesan's dissatisfaction. The city's people were greatly satisfied. The food problem was resolved. Given more time, they could even have meat. The air was purified and sturdy homes had been built. This place quickly became a paradise. Is there something you need? An elderly man, the one Taesan first met, cautiously approached him. Smiling kindly, he handed over a worn-out bowl. Take this. Inside the bowl was a small piece of bread. You shouldn't have any wheat left. It's what we had stored. It's nearly spoiled, but still edible. People used the last of their flour to bake this for you. Taesan accepted the bread and placed it in his mouth. The elderly man watched him with a peculiar gaze. Are you aware that some people have started calling you a messenger of the gods? I know. Divine energy was already flowing into Taesan little by little. Since he had received quests from the gods and came to this place, he didn't deny it, finding the claim not too far from the truth. Faith, huh? A thought flashed through Taesan's mind. As he organized his thoughts, the old man spoke again. Are you truly a messenger of the gods? But the elder swallowed his words. Before the world fell, their world had gods who protected them. Everyone worshipped those gods, but when the monsters appeared, their gods vanished. Though they were slain by high gods, the people did not know this. They believed their gods had abandoned them. Other gods appeared to block the monsters' invasions, but all of them disappeared without a trace once the monsters were gone. Once again, the people felt forsaken. Under such circumstances, for the gods to send a messenger to save them seemed rather strange. Thank you. In the end, the elder could only express his gratitude. Thanks to you. We have hope. The elder knew he wouldn't live much longer. He had always worried whether his grandson could survive in such a harsh world. Thanks to Taesan, much of that worry was gone. But I'm uneasy, the elder muttered with a worried expression. If the other cities find out about this, they won't remain idle. He had mentioned it before. There were 5 cities in total, each ruled by a faction. Apart from the city of the abandoned, the powers were balanced, each in a state of tense opposition. Taesan asked, how exactly are they divided? Come to think of it, I didn't explain in detail before. The elder began to explain. There were 5 cities in total. Each city was ruled by a faction. The red incarnate, the blue do. Kaliat, the martial god, the forsaken. The other cities are in slightly better conditions than this one. They have livestock, albeit few, and some degree of food cultivation. Though not substantial, the few could live without worrying about survival. And each faction has individuals with special powers. Special powers, some can manipulate invisible forces, while others have physical capabilities far surpassing ordinary people. The elder glanced at Taesan. People like you. The elder seemed to believe Taesan was one of those people. Taesan didn't deny it. After the monsters appeared, those with such powers began to emerge. Since it happened after the monsters appeared, it was highly likely to be related to the gods. The elder continued. Those with such powers dominate ordinary people and treat them as slaves. Those who refuse to accept this or are deemed useless are cast out and end up in this city. The elder frowned. They are still opposing each other. Even in this ruined world, they fight for their interests, trying to kill each other when they should be working together to survive. The elder couldn't understand. If they find out about this place, it could be dangerous. Is that so? Taesan muttered. His indifferent attitude made the elder's face grow grim. They are immensely powerful. You may possess a special power, but yours is ultimately non-combative. Taesan had not demonstrated any combat-related abilities to these people. At most, he had shown them how to cultivate food and purify the air. Naturally, the people assumed Taesan's abilities were limited to such domains. In contrast, their power is focused on force. They can shatter boulders the size of houses with ease. The elder spoke with a tone that emphasized the danger. Even you shouldn't let your guard down, you need to be prepared. Understood, Taesan replied. His persistently disinterested attitude left the elder flustered. Taesan then asked him a question. You mentioned 5 cities, are there no other survivors? When asked if the remaining survivors of this world were limited to the 5 cities, the elder replied with a bitter expression. At least as far as we know, that's all. Only 5 cities remain, that's the reality of this world. The elder's answer was firm. All the survivors of this world were gathered in these 5 cities. Taesan considered a possibility. Who? A bronze-skinned, muscular man slouched on a plush sofa, exhaling a languid breath. He was Malber, the master of the Red Incarnate, one of the 5 cities. How boring. He was utterly bored. It had been a long time since the stalemate between the factions had begun. Unless one side acted first, no conflict would arise. There were no food issues. As the city's ruler, he could eat whatever he desired. Many people had died because of it, but he didn't care. Though the world was on the brink of destruction, he lived an extraordinarily luxurious life. For him, this world was better than the one before the fall. Back then, he had been at the bottom of society, a man trudging through a wretched life. But during the world's collapse, he had suddenly gained immense power. What could he do to stave off this tedium? Perhaps I'll capture some slaves. Pitiful creatures who crawled on the ground without power, yet clung to life like desperate fools. Still, the emotions they displayed as they died were entertaining to watch. As Malber settled on his decision and was about to rise, the ornate door swung open. A man entered. What is it? I bring news for your majesty. The man bowed deeply. It was all because of Malber's orders. Malber demanded to be addressed as emperor and forced those around him to comply. Malber lifted his chin. Speak. I have returned after scouting the other cities as per your command. The man, like Malber, had gained special powers during the monster invasion. His greatly enhanced speed made him nearly impossible to catch. Malber had entrusted him with reconnaissance. What is the situation in the other cities? 3 of the cities showed nothing noteworthy, however. The city of the abandoned was different. At the unexpected mention of the abandoned, Malber frowned. The city of the abandoned, a place where useless people, mere drains on resources, gathered. It was a barren land where survival was impossible, and thus Malber had ignored it. What did you find there? The man hesitated to speak. Malber scowled, urging him on. Finally, the man spoke. They were eating corn. Corn, not just corn, I also saw watermelons. What? Malber's eyes widened. Corn was a rarity in this world. As for watermelons, it had been a long time since he'd even seen one. And there wasn't just a little. Everyone I saw was holding either corn or watermelon. What is this nonsense? Malber's face twisted. The man quietly added, I overheard their conversations in secret. They were saying that a messenger of the gods had descended to them. A messenger of the gods? Malber sneered. He didn't believe in gods. His strength was entirely his own, and he had defeated monsters through his power alone. While there were events beyond his understanding, he dismissed them all as coincidences. Someone with production-oriented powers must have entered the city of the abandoned. Malber bared his teeth. Summon the executives. We're going to crush the city of the abandoned. Understood, the man replied swiftly. Upon Malber's command, the Red Incarnate's executives gathered. Malber addressed them, explaining that someone with the ability to produce food was in the city of the abandoned. He ordered them to crush the city and bring that person to him. If they refuse to obey, you may kill everyone else in the city, but do not harm that person. The executives answered in unison. Malber stepped outside with his officers. The slaves, who were working with haggard faces, recoiled and hid upon seeing him. Malber relished their fear. He was an emperor. No one could challenge his power. Malber believed this without a shred of doubt. Before long, Malber reached the city of the abandoned. Chapter 372, 77th floor, the world on the brink of destruction. Part 4. Is it there? Malber muttered while observing the city of the Forsaken. Watching the city from a distance, he frowned. What are those buildings? The houses caught his attention first. Small, sturdy houses made of thick wood were scattered throughout the city. and the movements of the Forsaken who scrambled at the sight of him. They should have looked emaciated, unable to produce anything, but instead they appeared well-fed. Although their appearances seemed unkempt, they didn't seem to lack food. It's certain someone with production abilities resided here, pitiful creatures. Malber twisted his lips into a sneer. He stepped forward, followed closely by his subordinates. The people of the city panicked at the sight of them. What do we do? They were thrown into a state of chaos. The happiness they had indulged in until now made them forget the harsh reality. They had no power of their own. If another group decided to intervene, there was nothing they could do to stop it. The reason for Malber's visit was obvious. It was to take Taesan away. Protect the messenger of God. We can't let them take him. People raised crude weapons and shouted, desperately trying to resist. But not everyone agreed. A man quietly spoke up. Do we really have an obligation to protect him? What, are you saying we should abandon the messenger of God? No, the man shook his head. It's the opposite. Claiming we can protect him is arrogance. Think about it. Would that man be oppressed if he went to another city? The crowd hesitated at his words. The ability Taesan possessed was extraordinary, unmatched in this world. Other cities wouldn't exploit him as a mere tool. They would offer him countless benefits to bring him to their side. On the contrary, it was detrimental for Taesan to stay here. Trying to keep him here is our selfishness. That's what I think. The people couldn't answer him. Reaching a conclusion was not easy. They hesitated, lost in confusion. Meanwhile, Taesan brushed past them and walked out of the city. Ah, messenger. People tried to stop him hastily, but Taesan had already left. Malber, noticing him, brightened with recognition. That must be him. Distinct black hair and eyes. His outfit was unusually clean, unlike the Forsaken. Malber instinctively knew. Are you the one who revived the city? Yes, Taesan replied curtly. Malber scrutinized him, no markings and an unfamiliar face. He didn't belong to another group. The most likely scenario was that he came from outside, so there are still survivors out there. Slightly surprised, Malber spoke again. Your power is too precious to be wasted in a place like this. Malber extended his hand to Taesan. Join me even in this ruined world. I'll ensure you lack nothing. The Forsaken watched anxiously. Malber never considered the possibility of Taesan refusing his offer. No, Taesan's reply was brief. The unexpected rejection made Malber scowl. No, I have no intention of leaving here. Go back. The Forsaken sighed in relief and collapsed. Malber clicked his tongue. I wondered why you were in such a place. Turns out you're a fool. He had seen people like this before, back when the world was still somewhat livable, those who possessed great power but used it for others instead of themselves. Malber thought such people were incredibly foolish. In this world, consideration for others was useless. The only thing that mattered was oneself, as the outcomes had shown. Those who cared for others were exploited and killed, while those like him survived. Malber believed Taesan was one of those foolish people. Malber laughed. Such behavior, while stupid, would make him easier to control. If I kill these Forsaken one by one, he'll come around. For now, subduing him was the priority. Malber gave his orders to his subordinates. Capture him without injuring him. The subordinates sneered as they stepped forward. The Forsaken tried to rush out to protect Taesan, but Taesan stopped them. Stay put. Ah, the Forsaken froze in place. The command seemed to compel them with an unshakable force. The subordinates lunged. Their coordinated attack was sharp, so much so that even Malber would struggle to block it. Since Taesan's abilities were related to production, his combat strength must be weak. Malber was certain Taesan would be captured without resistance. Malber watched leisurely. Even as the subordinates rushed at him, Taesan didn't move. His gaze, detached and indifferent, fell on Malber. It was the gaze of someone looking at an insect. Malber shuddered instinctively. His senses screamed a warning. He tried to shout for a retreat, but it was already too late. The subordinates reached Taesan. Taesan's fist moved. Crunch. With a scream, the subordinates were sent flying. One staggered back to his feet behind Malber. What is this? Even controlling my strength to avoid killing you is too easy. Taesan stomped the ground. His body surged forward at incredible speed. The subordinate, barely standing, flinched and tried to move. A surge of power enveloped him. An unseen force swept over Taesan. Flames engulfed everything around him and a sharp blade pierced his chest. Taesan moved his hand. The blade shattered, the flames extinguished, and the unseen force dissipated. Even the Forsaken stared blankly at the scene. What? What is this? One of the subordinates screamed. It was overwhelming, pure domination. Their strength was utterly crushed. I've come up with a method. Taesan murmured as he casually deflected the subordinates' attacks. What methods existed to stabilize the corrupted land? The answer wasn't hard to find: a sanctuary. A sanctuary imbued with divinity was something even the current Taesan could create, but the problem lay in its maintenance. Divinity was consumed rapidly, and once Taesan left, the sanctuary would soon vanish. Thus, Taesan needed to create a sanctuary that could sustain stabilization even after his departure. He already knew the method. The sanctuary of the god of regret, as seen in the ruined world of the ghost. Even though the god of regret had long abandoned interest in it, the sanctuary was maintained by the faith of its followers. If he could create a sanctuary sustained by the people's faith, it would persist even after Taesan left. Faith was based on people's beliefs. The stronger that belief, the more powerful the divinity became. Therefore, he would make sure to imprint his power clearly in their minds. Taesan drew his sword. Crunch. Erg. One subordinate's stomach was pierced. Taesan kicked the corpse aside and waved his hand to extinguish the flames, grabbing another's neck with a firm grip. Oh, oh, the Forsaken erupted into cheers. The subordinates began to fall one by one. Malber's face turned pale. Wait, Taesan was far from weak. Judging by his movements, he was overwhelmingly stronger than Malber himself. No way, among the remaining survivors, Malber had been considered one of the strongest, but even his strength wasn't exceptional. During the era when monsters began invading in earnest, there had been many far stronger than him. Yet they all perished in battles against the monsters. It was their deaths that allowed Malber to dominate the city. Now, the strength Taesan displayed rivaled those who had once fought monsters. Could a survivor like this have existed? Malber made a swift decision. Escape, Thud, you coward. He abandoned his dying subordinates and fled. One subordinate, seeing this, muttered a curse before being struck down by Taesan. I have to escape. Whenever Malber found himself in unwinnable situations, he would flee and hide in a safe place. He had done the same whenever monsters appeared, staying far from the front lines. It was how he had survived. But this time escape was impossible. Suddenly Malber's body was seized by a powerful force and hurled into the ground. Boom, cough, ack, where do you think you're going? Taesan's leisurely voice reached him as he stomped down on Malber. Malber was horrified. All of them are already dead. Taesan grabbed Malber and examined him. What kind of unique power did they possess? You have activated Essence Insight. Upon inspecting Malber, Taesan understood. Divine power. Though it was nothing more than scraps, fragments of transcendent power were embedded within Malber. The reason was not hard to guess. The invasion of the high gods had been too much for even the gods' power to repel. The god of magic had even assigned a quest to a much weaker Taesan to fend off the high gods. It seemed that in this world, divine power had been scattered among random individuals to grant them strength so they could aid the gods. So divine power can be used this way. Instead of granting it to specific individuals like apostles or saints, it had been distributed to the masses. This was a use of divine power currently beyond Taesan's capabilities. The more he learned, the more limitless the potential of divine power seemed. Nothing impressive. Malber's strength was unimpressive. While he might handle weaker monsters, even B-grade monsters would overwhelm him. He was nothing more than a disposable pawn. Unworthy individuals gained strength only to fall short in the end. Taesan had gleaned all the information he needed. He pressed down on Malber, who scrambled desperately. Spare me, you've killed relentlessly up to now, haven't you? Accept your fate. Taesan's calm voice was followed by a decisive blow. Taesan returned to the city. The people who had been watching blankly erupted into cheers. "Oh, messenger of God, you have descended to save us." Taesan looked at them. Their intense and unwavering faith surged toward him. The people began to worship Taesan. He provided them with food, built shelters, and even purified the air. And he had defeated those who sought to oppress them, wielding overwhelming strength. All of this he had done without asking for anything in return. To the people, his actions were nothing short of saintly, and their worship came naturally. Amidst their reverence, someone shouted, "No, he isn't just a messenger of God. He descended himself to save us. He is our savior. Savior, our savior who will deliver us." The people began calling Taesan their savior. They gathered daily, praying to him, and their faith in him grew ever stronger. But it was still not enough. This level of faith was insufficient to create a stable sanctuary. Taesan, accompanied by a few people, headed to the city once ruled by the Red Avatar. It was in chaos, its ruler dead. Taesan announced that he had defeated Malber and his followers and that the people were now free. Initially skeptical, the people believed him when they saw him produce food and houses. Unlike the Forsaken, they had suffered under Malber's tyranny, and their faith in Taesan grew explosively. Those who followed Taesan began to praise his greatness, and soon 2 cities began worshipping him. Deep, fervent faith continued to converge on Taesan, but it still wasn't enough. Taesan considered a possibility. What if I could gain the worship of every human on this planet? Normally, such a feat would be impossible. A planet typically has a deity, and the diversity of its inhabitants makes unanimous worship nearly unattainable. But this world was different. The main deity had perished at the hands of the high gods, and only a few survivors remained. With survival itself under constant threat, universal worship might just be achievable. That, even I don't know. The ghost couldn't provide an answer. Faith from all living beings, that was Taesan's goal. Chapter 373, 77th Floor, The World on the Brink of Destruction, Part 5. The two cities worshipped Taesan perfectly. Then the rulers of other cities grew impatient. It wasn't as if they hadn't done anything. They had already sent scouts to monitor Malber's movements. As a result, they witnessed the one-sided battle between Taesan and Malber. Taesan single-handedly defeated the Crimson Avatar. This meant he was a powerful foe they could never hope to defeat individually. They were terrified. Someone with such power would not remain idle. They believed he would surely crush them and flatten their cities. However, they had no desire to submit to Taesan. They weren't willing to abandon their positions as rulers of their cities. They made their decision to form an alliance and bring down the tiger named Taesan. The rulers of Azure Mist, the martial god, and Kaelyart joined forces united. They moved toward the city that had been under the control of the Crimson Avatar. I've heard the rumors, but they were true. Upon arriving in Taesan City, the rulers frowned. The city was brimming with vitality. The people's faces were flushed with life, and the structures appeared remarkably sturdy. Let's go, they entered the city. The residents, noticing their arrival, flinched in fear. What's going on? As the rulers and their subordinates from the three groups entered en masse, the people trembled with unease. The intruders reveled in the fearful gazes of the citizens as they sought out Taesan. Are you the one who defeated Malber? The ruler of Azure Mist spoke arrogantly, addressing Taesan. They surrounded Taesan as though to encircle him. I have a proposition for you, join hands with us. The ruler of Azure Mist declared boldly. They already knew Taesan was strong, but they were not weak either. They believed that if the three groups united, they could inflict considerable damage. Thus, they proposed an alliance. We acknowledge the two cities you've conquered as yours, so don't interfere with our cities. They were convinced Taesan would not reject their offer. After all, they believed they had enough strength to back it up. Taesan responded, "What if I refuse?" The man's face contorted. "In that case, regrettably, there's no other option. Kill him." A thunderous roar erupted as leaders from each group ordered their attacks, charging at Taesan. Taesan watched them with an expressionless face. The citizens, who had been anxiously observing Taesan from the buildings, screamed and ducked as the noise erupted. Looking up, they saw Taesan engaged in battle with the other groups. Die, the ruler of Kaelyart roared, unleashing his power. Simultaneously, an invisible force struck Taesan, pushing him back. Ha ha ha, the ruler laughed maniacally, waving his hands roughly. The unseen force continued to press on Taesan. Is it a power similar to telekinesis? The invisible force wasn't magic or black magic. There was no precursor to the power, and its source was hard to discern. It was a highly unique ability. Not only the ruler of Kaelyart, but also his subordinates exhibited similar powers. Crush him. Following their leader's orders, the subordinates slammed their hands down. Taesan's body was forced to the ground. The earth beneath him cracked and collapsed under the pressure. This is fun. It was an intriguing power. Watching it was entertaining. The ruler of Azure Mist also used his power. Suddenly, a sphere of water enveloped Taesan's face. The water obstructed his vision and cut off his breathing. Taesan shook his head to dispel it, but another water sphere quickly formed. That wasn't all. Columns and walls of water surrounded Taesan, trying to restrict his movements. The ruler of the martial god also took action. He was exceptionally fast and powerful. His sword strikes were sharp and his movements showed no waste. However, it wasn't his own strength. Observing him carefully, Taesan realized that something was attached to the man's body, forcing him into efficient movements. Even the subordinates possessed unique abilities. As Taesan observed them, he understood the reason. The god who scattered divinity across this world wasn't alone. Multiple gods had bestowed divinity to protect this world. The abilities varied depending on which god's divinity one obtained. I wonder what kind of power I would gain with my divinity, he became curious. Though it was impossible now, if he eventually obtained complete divinity, it might be possible to wield it in a similar manner. The onlookers groaned in despair. From their perspective, Taesan seemed unable to withstand the attacks, continually pushed back. They closed their eyes and prayed desperately. The ruler of Kaelyart grinned, baring his teeth. We can win. Even though they had never fought together before, their coordination was perfect. The thrill of glimpsing a higher realm dominated him. They pressed Taesan even harder and faster. The invisible force fiercely gripped Taesan. The ruler of Kaelyart shouted, "Kill him!" Sensing an opportunity, they all charged at once. The ruler of Kaelyart rushed in with an invisible sword. Taesan nodded. Impressive. They were quite strong. To Taesan, their strength was like scraps, but they wielded it almost perfectly. They must have fought desperately. They likely endured bone-crushing hardships. They had survived battles that cost them dearly, sometimes gambling everything on a single stroke of luck. Such strength couldn't be obtained otherwise. Though they were merciless tyrants, their efforts and struggles were genuine, but overwhelming power crushed all that effort. As they closed in, Taesan flicked his hand. You activated Marba's pitch-black wave. In an instant, darkness engulfed them. Huh, the ruler of Kaelyart opened his eyes. He blankly lifted his body and looked around. Everything around him was destroyed. Everyone? There was no one. His trusted subordinates who had followed him loyally were nowhere to be found. All that remained was himself and the equally dazed rulers of Azure Mist and the martial god. What happened? You're alive, a voice resonated. Even without opening the passage you survived, more impressive than I thought. Taesan stared at him with a calm expression. Upon seeing Taesan's face, the ruler of Kaelyart recalled the events. He had used his power to restrain Taesan, and they had judged it as the perfect opportunity. Everyone charged in unison, and even he had aimed to pierce Taesan's chest with his invisible sword. Just as they reached him, Taesan lightly flicked his hand. At that moment, darkness materialized. The sight of the darkness sent chills down the ruler of Kaelyart's spine. Terrified, he enveloped his entire body with his invisible power. Then he lost consciousness. When he regained his senses, everything was buried in darkness. What? He swung his hand violently. The power he expelled in denial contained every last ounce of his remaining strength. Taesan neither dodged nor blocked. He simply flicked his fingers lightly. That alone nullified the ruler's power. You did well enough, let me make this easy for you. Taesan advanced forward. The ruler, overcome with fear, unleashed his power wildly, but every attack that collided with Taesan's body vanished without a trace. Desperate to flee, the ruler tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Move. I said move, in that state you can't move. What? As the ruler of Kaelyart thrashed, he belatedly realized his body wasn't moving. Half of his body had been engulfed by darkness, and the sensation in it was fading. The same was true for the other surviving rulers. All of them were dying. Only then did he realize, it wasn't that Taesan couldn't counter their attacks, it was that their attacks weren't even worth responding to. They had foolishly deluded themselves into thinking they could win. The ruler ceased his resistance. Taesan effortlessly finished them off. Ooh, the people, finally understanding the situation, erupted in cheers. They cried out praising Taesan. Savior! The beings they had once feared as monsters, those who had oppressed and tormented them, had fallen helplessly under Taesan's hand. The groups that had ruled through tyranny and terror were utterly annihilated. The people wailed Taesan's name. Ooh, God. No one referred to Taesan as the envoy of a god anymore, nor did they call him a savior, they called him a god. They believed he was a deity who had descended to this land to save them. With his work in the city finished, Taesan moved. Many people followed him. He traveled to the remaining cities. There he planted crops in makeshift fields and built shelters. At first, the people doubted Taesan. But as those who followed him showed unwavering faith, and as Taesan demanded nothing in return, the people quickly began to worship him. More than half of the surviving population in this world now worshipped Taesan. At that moment, Taesan felt it. Something within the faith directed toward him was changing. What is this? It was difficult to describe. Perhaps it could be called influence or presence. Something had shifted. He couldn't yet pinpoint exactly what it was. He resolved to figure it out after addressing the issues in the remaining 2 cities. Taesan resolved the problems of the last 2 cities as well, planting crops and providing shelters. All the inhabitants of the 5 cities now worshipped Taesan. Every surviving human revered Taesan as a god. At that moment, Taesan realized the faith directed toward him had qualitatively changed. You have fulfilled the proper qualifications. You have acquired the conceptual skill. Master of Faith, your proficiency in divine power has increased by 3%. Minerva, walking beside Taesan, widened her eyes. Even the ghost faltered. Master, something about you has changed. Taesan was already aware of it. A strange sensation enveloped his entire body. It was an unfamiliar yet incredible feeling he had never experienced before. You suddenly feel so distant, Minerva murmured with a blank expression. She meant it literally. Though Taesan stood right beside her, it felt as if he was in an entirely different dimension. Taesan opened his skill window. Conceptual skill, Master of Faith. Proficiency 1%, worshipped by all beings of a world. The description was incredibly simple. Taesan raised his hand and expressed his will. In that instant, the flow of the air changed. Even Minerva, the spirit king, could only purify a single city due to the contamination caused by the ancient gods. That limitation spoke volumes about the extent of the planet's corruption. Oh no! Minerva was astonished. The air was being purified. The contamination caused by the ancient gods dissipated and countless plants turned green along with the air. People realized that breathing had become much easier than before. What is this? The purification itself wasn't extraordinary. Even Taesan could purify a small area using his influence over nature. But this time, it wasn't just the city that was purified. The purified air spread beyond the city, reaching the entire world. Taesan understood. He had become the god of this planet. Chapter 375, 77th Floor, The World on the Brink of Destruction, Part 6. Master. What is this? Minerva was visibly flustered. She realized why Taesan felt so distant to her. It was simple. Taesan had far surpassed her realm. Master, don't tell me, have you transcended? No, Taesan denied it. Not that far. Even Taesan couldn't fully grasp his current state. An overwhelming presence emanated from him, flowing in all directions. Oh, the legs of those watching him trembled. They bowed their heads and chanted Taesan's name. However, it wasn't entirely their will. It was an instinctive reaction to being overwhelmed by a being vastly superior to themselves. If this continued, they would all turn into fanatics, worshipping only him. Taesan suppressed his presence, and only then did the people gasp for air. Just by not restraining himself, he had a profound impact on their minds. Taesan decided to move to a place without people. In an instant, his body vanished. As he pictured the location in his mind, his body appeared there. What? It wasn't a skill. His body had literally transcended space, moving according to his will. Minerva, who followed shortly after, asked with a shocked expression, "What kind of realm have you reached?" "I don't know either." Taesan narrowed his eyes. A sense of omnipotence dominated his entire being. It felt as though he could achieve anything he desired, as if his limitations had vanished. What realm had he reached? He tried to understand himself. Observing his own power, he analyzed his state. Taesan closed his eyes and delved into his inner self. The ghost and Minerva silently watched him. Taesan's contemplation didn't end quickly. It was only after a full day that he opened his eyes. "I see now," Taesan let out a faint chuckle, "a limited transcendence achieved by the collective faith of the people." That was his current state. "Ah," Minerva let out a gasp. "Minerva, you mentioned this before. It was not impossible to reach transcendence solely through worship. However, it required the faith of the entire world, making it practically unattainable." It was something Minerva had said long ago, believing it irrelevant to her. She had dismissed it from her thoughts, never expecting it to happen this way. Minerva groaned. "The surviving population of this world is confined to 5 cities. If all of them worship the Master, maybe it's not impossible. Normally, it would have been outright impossible. Humanity was diverse, with each individual holding their own beliefs. For everyone to worship a single being without a trace of doubt was unthinkable. But here, only a small number had survived, and they were all pushed to their limits, broken and desolate. In such a situation, with Taesan saving them without asking for anything in return, they had come to worship him. And there are no gods here, not even the planet's will. This place was abandoned. The planet's deity had been killed by ancient gods, and the gods who defeated those beings had also disappeared. Thus, the conditions were met for the collective faith of the world to be realized. As a result, Taesan seemed to have temporarily transcended mortality. "What, so you've truly ascended to the seat of transcendence?" the ghost asked in shock. Taesan shook his head. "I'm not at that level." He looked at his hand. Though omnipotence filled his body, there was a clear limit. There are too few survivors. It was just 5 cities, not modern metropolises but medieval ones. Taesan estimated that at best there were no more than 100,000 people. Even if all of them worshipped him alone, it wasn't enough for full transcendence. Perhaps because of that, the power felt highly unstable. It was a limited strength that could vanish the moment their faith wavered. If I had to categorize it, I'd say it's closer to immortality than transcendence. Even so, he had undeniably reached a realm far beyond his previous limits. As Taesan contemplated his newfound power, he realized something else. This power is confined to this world. It was like the native deity Harmon of Vekveta. Vekveta was Harmon's domain. Though it had been a misunderstanding on the ghost's part, Harmon could wield overwhelming power within his territory, enough to even challenge a demon god. Taesan would similarly lose this state if he left this world. Still, as long as the faith of the world remains intact, it should be partially possible, but I can't be sure, Minerva groaned. Regardless, Taesan was now in a state he couldn't normally achieve. Thus, what he needed to do was clear. Taesan held the crystallized divine blood in his hand. Crystallized divine blood, the divine blood itself has been stabilized through crystallization. If an unqualified individual attempts to control it, it will run wild. Maria had once mentioned that mastering this was one of her joys. Taesan focused his power on the crystal. Crack, the crystal trembled under Taesan's will. Its power began to seep out, spreading into the world. However, it was controllable. As Taesan's eyes gleamed and he tried to harness more power, crack, a fissure appeared in the crystal and its energy started to run rampant. Crack, crack. Space distorted and the surroundings began to collapse. Taesan quickly gathered his strength and will, declaring, "Be sealed." "You have activated the declaration of sealing." Screech. The runaway crystal was suppressed by a mighty force. The fractured parts were restored. The crystallized divine blood barely regained stability. Taesan clicked his tongue. "At my current level, it's impossible." It wasn't a matter of insufficient power but of instability. Taesan's current state was an overlap of special circumstances, allowing him to temporarily transcend mortality. As such, his power was unstable, making it difficult to control. In his current state, Taesan couldn't control the divine blood. Unexpected, but he wasn't disappointed. On the contrary, it meant that the power contained in the divine blood was exceptional. There was no need to rush, this power would be his eventually. In that case, I can't touch the rings either. Using a skill he acquired in his battle with the guides, Taesan had fused the twin rings into one. But he decided to hold off for now. In his current unstable state, mishandling the rings could damage them. Taesan took out the floral ornament Maria had given him. At least he should be able to analyze this. Focusing his contemplative gaze on the ornament, Taesan read the power within it, his eyebrows twitching slightly. He had assumed the ornament was an item meant as material for equipment. He had planned to use it once he became strong enough. But the ornament's ability, as revealed now, was entirely different. It wasn't meant for him but for someone else. The ornament would activate its effect when given to a specific person. However, Taesan couldn't discern who that person was. Even when he tried to analyze it further, no additional information came to light. What is this? Taesan put the ornament away. He cleared his mind. It was time to focus on what could be done. In this world, he was essentially a god. With that power, certain actions should be possible. Taesan concentrated his will and declared, "Gather. You have activated the declaration of gathering." The world responded to Taesan's command. Power scattered across the entire world began converging, swirling like a vortex. Minerva stepped back, her face pale. Even if it's limited, this is no different from full transcendence. This was a power beyond her reach, only attainable by those who had transcended. With a hum that resonated across space, energy from the entire world coalesced. In front of Taesan, a colorless orb materialized. "You have obtained the essence of the world." Taesan stored the orb. The essence of the world itself, accessible only to its master. He hadn't yet decided how to use it, but its value was undoubtedly immense. Now then, he had completed all he could for the moment. It was time to handle his final task. Suppressing his presence to the utmost, Taesan called the people together. As they bowed their heads, Taesan spoke, "I will soon leave." Despair clouded their faces instantly. "No, please don't abandon us. Don't leave us," they cried out, their voices filled with desperation. The flood of negative emotions overwhelmed Taesan. He let out a faint groan. In that moment his realm wavered. So this is how it works. A state sustained by people's faith. If their faith faltered, so too would his power. Suppressing the surging force, Taesan opened his mouth. "I have no choice, there are things I must do." Woo! Tears streamed down their faces, but they no longer tried to hold him back. Taesan continued, "But do not worry. Even if I'm not by your side, I will always protect you." He channeled his power. The suppressed presence expanded across the entire world. Taesan gathered divine energy, creating a golden pillar that pierced the sky. The people gazed at it in awe, their eyes dazed. The omnipotent force that could move the world according to his will enveloped Taesan. Controlling the power, he activated a skill. "You have activated the inner world." A skill that expanded his power and realm into a domain inner world. Though the skill's description was impressive, he had never used it since acquiring it. The energy and power required were disproportionate to the small domain it created, but now it was different. The inner world expanded, enveloping all 5 cities and more. Taesan unleashed divine power. He knew how to proceed. The sanctuary of the god of regret he had seen in the ghost's world, it was possible now. The expanded pillar of light spread across the land. As its radiant waves engulfed the world, people cheered and prayed. Taesan guided their faith into the pillar of light. The inner world filled with divine energy, manifesting Taesan's sanctuary in this world. You have created your sanctuary. You have acquired the unique divine skill, sanctuary creation. Taesan caught his breath. Though brief, the effort had taken a significant toll on his divinity reserves. He turned his gaze. The sphere of light encased the people, drawing their faith to further solidify its presence. "It's done." "Oh, this is..." The people murmured in awe, looking around. The pillar of light warmly enveloped them. The barren land began to regain life. The colorless world became vibrant. Dead roots deep within the earth were revived. Green sprouts emerged, painting the world in shades of life. The divine light shone upon them like the sun, warming them. It was a miracle truly befitting a god. Overcome with emotion, the people cried out to Taesan. For a moment, an overwhelming surge of faith engulfed him. "As long as you do not forget me, the light that protects you will never fade." With those words, Taesan's figure vanished. Yet the people continued to pray to him. Taesan returned to the labyrinth. At the same time, a system window appeared. "You have acquired the transcendental skill, eternal and immortal faith. 77th floor clear. You have obtained the bloody hammer of the cruel one. Your secret reward has been adjusted based on your performance. Checking, complete. The labyrinth's administrator Balbabamba appears, rumble. The labyrinth floor collapsed, revealing Balbabamba's figure. Chapter 374, Side Story, The Dying Earth, Lee Tion, Part 4, Pain, 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 My Arm. The screams and groans of people filled the space. Lee Tion clenched her fists with a hardened expression. They had barely won against the monsters, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Nearly half of the players had died and many of the survivors were gravely injured. The sanctuary she and the others had desperately built was completely destroyed. Lee Tion suppressed the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She had seen countless tragedies. She thought she was used to it by now, but that was her delusion. The stench of death and fear still carried an overwhelming intensity. Grinding her teeth, Lee Tion moved. She retrieved the items she had and began purifying the toxic energy of the land, reorganizing their territory. She treated the injured and cleared out the remaining monsters. After an exhausting effort, she barely managed to finish. What is this? What on earth? But the chaos had not subsided. The people who had clung to hope through her existence fell into despair once more with the appearance of a monster she could barely fend off. As Lee Tion hesitated, unable to comfort them, Taesan spoke coldly. Get a grip. You've risked your lives to survive and now you want to die in despair. His icy voice struck the ears of the survivors. Stand up, we are the last survivors of Earth. After overcoming so much death, are you really going to give up because of this? The people clenched their teeth. Despair and sorrow slowly began to subside. Taesan stepped back. Your turn. Ah, yes. Lee Tion calmed the people down and began rebuilding once more. They reconstructed the broken buildings and made the protective barriers stronger and wider than before, ensuring they could better withstand future monster attacks. The methods to deal with monsters were also reassessed. Until now, if strong monsters appeared, they had left everything to Taesan and Lee Tion. However, against S-rank monsters, even the two of them could not guarantee victory. While they dealt with the monster, the others needed a way to hold their ground. There were countless discussions. There was a wave before I came, right? Once, many died that time too. Then this is the second. Time continued to pass. Players returned continuously from the labyrinth. As much time had passed, there were especially many who had survived hard mode. They were much stronger than during the second wave. Thus, the third wave began, the monster invasion. Hundreds of A-rank monsters and several S-rank ones attacked. Ahhhhhhhh, Lee Tion let out a scream of rage. Die, she spared no effort, using all the precious items she had. People and monsters killed each other. In the end, they achieved another Pyrrhic victory. Damn it. Lee Tion collapsed, spitting blood. This time it had been far too close. Even with meticulous preparation, she had barely survived. She forced herself to her feet, leaning on her trembling knees. The survivors struggled to cheer. Despite losing so many and having their defenses shattered, they tried to celebrate their victory. Crunch. The space distorted. Lee Tion looked up at the crack in the sky with a pale face. From there, she could feel a presence. Ah, Lee Tion's body shuddered. Goosebumps rose all over her. A horrifyingly powerful force emanated from beyond the crack. She was not the only one who felt it. Easy and normal mode players collapsed, unable to withstand the gaze. Even hard mode players trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, the gaze vanished. The people exhaled deeply, collapsing to the ground. What was that? Taesan's grim voice lingered in the air. They barely managed to recover from the damages. The territory was reorganized and the buildings were repaired. Using their past battles as experience, they began even harsher training. But no one smiled. Most of those who had once looked at Lee Tion with trusting eyes when she first returned were now dead. The survivors held no hope of survival. They had resigned themselves to death, struggling against the inevitable. Ha ha. Lee Tion let out a hollow laugh. After repelling the wave, she remembered the gaze she had seen beyond the crack. It would likely be the next monster to invade Earth. As someone who had cleared the labyrinth, she knew exactly what that monster was. An apostle, an existence that surpassed mortality. Even if she died and resurrected hundreds or thousands of times, it was an enemy she could never defeat. The others may not have been as certain, but instinctively they must have known. The power they felt beyond the crack was utterly unreachable. There was no hope in sight. Death loomed over everyone. What's the point of this? Taesan frowned at the sight of the people. If you want to die, go outside the barrier and do it. Don't drag down those desperately trying to survive. But what, are you saying you want to give up just because you can't win? Is that why you cleared the labyrinth? Hyung, calm down. Yeonjun hurriedly approached Taesan. Taesan spoke coldly. I have no intention of dying. I'll do everything I can to win. Taesan's voice was chilling, but it wasn't wrong. They hadn't conquered the labyrinth to die, they had done so to survive. Giving up now because of an unbeatable foe would be an insult to the lives they had risked. Grinding their teeth, the people moved their bodies. From a distance, Lee Tion watched with a bitter smile. Originally, this should have been her role. She was the only player who had cleared solo mode, the leader responsible for guiding people. Yet this role was now being filled by Taesan, an easy mode player. The person who truly fits as a leader is not her but Taesan could never be their leader, he was just an easy mode player. Lee Taeyeon bit her lip. Time continued to pass. They restored the damage and worked with players returning from the labyrinth to expand their territory, but the monsters scattered across the world grew stronger. Surviving without being a hard mode player became increasingly difficult. As a result, the number of people continued to dwindle. Ugh. Lee Taeyeon glanced at the crack in the sky with a grim expression. It had been some time since the third wave. The fourth wave might begin soon. Guess I'll go. Lee Taeyeon leaped gracefully into the air. Youngjun, I'm heading out for some reconnaissance. Taesan's off chasing that runaway hard mode player, right? Yes, he'll probably come back alone as usual. GM Youngjun replied with a bitter smile. Lee Taeyeon shook her head. I'll be back. Safe travels. Lee Taeyeon concealed herself completely and exited the barrier. She looked at the massive wall protecting the people with a bitter expression. Massive though it was small enough to fit entirely within her sight. Humanity had dwindled so much that a single barrier could protect everyone who remained. Suppressing her emotions, she propelled herself forward. As before, she arrived beneath the crack in the sky. Thanks to her experience, she could estimate when the next wave would begin based on the energy emanating from the crack. As she quietly examined the energy, her eyes wavered. The energy from the crack was fluctuating uneasily. Her legs trembled momentarily. She recognized this fluctuation. It was a sign that the wave would begin in less than a week. Suddenly, she felt a gaze from beyond the crack. Lee Taeyeon's breath caught. Even with all her stealth skills activated, skills so advanced that not even a single-digit S-rank monster could detect her at close range, the gaze beyond the crack was clearly fixed on her. The gaze lingered briefly before vanishing. Ha ha ha. After a long time, she let out a laugh. It was a hollow, despair-filled laugh. Staggering, she returned to the shelter. The people waiting for her cheered at her return. Oh, Taeyeon. You're back. How was it this time? Looking at them briefly, Lee Taeyeon spoke. Where is Taesan? Taesan, he's probably training the newly returned hard mode players. I see. She passed by slowly. The man who had answered her called out in confusion. What's wrong? Nothing. After some hesitation, Lee Taeyeon spoke. Tell Taesan to come see me tomorrow. The ticking of a desk clock echoed in the room. With hollow eyes, she stared at her room. It was filled with all sorts of decorations and paintings, tools she had prepared to mask her emotions. They were meaningless now. It was all coming to an end anyway. I can't win. There was no chance of victory. She knew this, yet she activated her skill. You have activated 10,000 possibilities. Was there a possibility of defeating the apostle? The possibilities were sought. Every result ended with her death. You have activated 10,000 exclusions. You have activated 10,000 possibilities. You have, she continued to use the skill. Over and over, she tried to find an answer through hundreds, thousands of deaths. But none came. Even after exhausting all her mana and being unable to activate the skill any longer, the only result was death. Her trembling hand pressed against her chest. In a week she would die. Her breathing grew ragged. The fear she had been suppressing overwhelmed her. She reached into her pocket and touched something hard, the Ouroboros relic. It could turn back time once. Using it would allow her to survive for now. But she couldn't bring herself to use the relic, to go through that labyrinth again, that hellish place. If time were reversed, all her powers would reset. She would return to her weak, fragile self. There was no guarantee she could clear it again. Barely scraping through the first time had required luck and miracles. Even if she cleared it, she would eventually return to Earth. She couldn't abandon the survivors and live in the labyrinth alone, but she didn't want to die here either. She couldn't decide. Time continued to pass and she remained in place, trapped in endless deliberation. Should she meet her end here? Or return to the labyrinth? Her thoughts were tangled. Neither option seemed viable. While she was lost in thought, she sensed someone approaching. Lee Taeyeon realized the presence belonged to Taesan. Didn't I say to come tomorrow? She hurriedly checked the time and realized she had spent an entire day deliberating. No, she couldn't meet Taesan in her current state. Quickly, she composed herself. Creak. The door opened and an exasperated voice rang out. Seriously, still haven't fixed that weird habit of yours. I don't need to hear your opinions about my hobbies. Her mouth moved instinctively. Through her years of acting, she had become a skilled performer. Though she hadn't reached a decision, her outward appearance perfectly masked her turmoil as she greeted Taesan. Chapter 376, 78th Floor, The Library of All Things. Part 1. The Lion King exhaled deeply. His entire body felt crushed and mangled. The energy he was expending with all his might barely shielded him, but the unstable fluctuations made it seem like it could shatter at any moment. The Lion King lifted his gaze. In the endlessly stretched gray space, black spheres floated like stars. The Lion King gritted his teeth and moved forward. Kugaguk. A fierce pressure engulfed him. The space itself distorted, twisting his entire being. The Lion King unleashed his power. It was the strength of one standing at the edge of mortality, but it was meaningless. Like a single drop of water falling into the ocean, only a faint ripple spread before disappearing. The gray space remained eerily silent. The Lion King pressed on with a hardened expression. He had spent all his gold on defense-prioritized equipment to protect his body, but one by one they were destroyed. Struggling to protect his crumbling form, he finally reached a massive black sphere. "O great one," the Lion King dropped to his knees and cried out. "You who yearn for the collapse of all things, who despises all laws, this lowly one calls upon you in your domain." With his cry, the Lion King pulled numerous jewels from his bosom and cast them forward. The jewels were swallowed by the massive sphere and vanished. The Lion King bowed his head to the ground. What would happen from here was unknown. Swallowing drearily, he waited in silence. Kugung, the sphere trembled. A violent force pressed down on the Lion King's entire body. The turbulence threatened to dissolve his mind, but he barely held on. Slowly, the turbulence subsided, and then it descended upon the place. "Lowly creature," a voice filled with irritation echoed. The vibration in the voice alone caused the space to tremble. "You've made the effort to crawl into my domain, I'll grant you that. But how dare someone like you summon me?" The Lion King's body began to crumble. His resistance and power were utterly meaningless. The difference between them was insurmountable, yet the Lion King remained unmoving, his head bowed. Gradually, the crushing force subsided. "Answer, for what purpose have you crawled into my domain?" The first step was passed. Suppressing his pounding heart, the Lion King spoke. "O great transcendent, I have an offer for you." The moment his words ended, a force beyond comparison to before overwhelmed the Lion King. His consciousness flickered for a moment. "How dare someone like you propose an offer to me?" The emotion in the voice was singular. Rage. The Lion King opened his trembling mouth. "Do you not wish to disrupt the plans of the other gods?" At those words, the force crushing the Lion King vanished instantly. Without even a moment to catch his breath, the Lion King immediately continued. "A certain adventurer is descending the labyrinth. He possesses extraordinary power. Many gods favor him, intending to claim him as their servant upon his death." This was his chance. The Lion King didn't stop speaking. "If there's no major obstacle, he will clear the labyrinth. The other gods will delight in witnessing this, satisfied that their efforts to create the labyrinth were worthwhile." The Lion King's eyes gleamed fiercely. "Do you not wish to shatter their expectations, to render their hopes and faith meaningless, to crush their assured actions?" The voice was quiet. The Lion King waited. After a moment, the voice spoke again. "That would indeed be an amusing endeavor." It worked. The Lion King clenched his fists. "I will assist your will. I will be your instrument, carrying out your intentions. Why should I bother with someone like you? Because you cannot directly interfere with the adventurer." One of the laws binding the gods of the labyrinth was that they could not directly meddle with its adventurers. This was why many gods disliked the guides of sin but refrained from acting against them. However, this limitation isn't exclusive to the guides of sin. Many gods existed within the labyrinth. And to gods, concepts like good and evil held no meaning. They acted based on the principles of their domain. There were undoubtedly gods who disliked Taesan. "So," the sharp voice softened slightly, "you're asking me to accept someone like you because I cannot intervene directly? No, this is merely a plea for mercy." The Lion King bows quietly. He feels its gaze on him. The Lion King closes his eyes. The outcome was beyond his control now. He simply repeated a prayer to whoever might hear it. "Very well." The Lion King looked up. "For the sake of your meager efforts, I will permit it, but it will not be in the manner you desire. Do not regret this, mortal." A force enveloped the Lion King. Balbabamba appeared, silently staring at Taesan before speaking bluntly. "You give me a headache." Balbabamba spoke wearily. "You really make my head ache. What went wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. The clear itself has no issues. Among all adventurers who cleared the 77th floor, yours was the most perfect." The 77th floor. A quest to stabilize a world destroyed by the ancient god. Most adventurers solved it through violence and brute force. As long as the surviving inhabitants of the planet could barely live, they fulfilled the bare minimum and cleared the quest. In contrast, Taesan completed the quest flawlessly. Even Balbabamba hadn't anticipated it could be resolved to this extent. His headache, however, comes from something else. You've reached a level of immortality, even if only partially. And you haven't even stepped onto the 80th floor. You knew about this? As the overseer, I know most of what happens here, Balbabamba spoke in a troubled tone. Well, it's not unprecedented. Occasionally, immortality is achieved through contracts with gods, but this is the first time someone has reached it entirely through their own power. Balbabamba, deep in thought, shook his head. "The wizard will handle it. I won't concern myself further." This was beyond his scope of authority. Balbabamba gave up. He decided to leave all future matters concerning Taesan to the wizard, confident it was the choice that would give him the least headache. Now for the reward. This too posed a problem. Taesan had cleared the quest perfectly, far beyond Balbabamba's expectations, thus the reward needed to match his accomplishment. However, Taesan had already reached a level of immortality, even if only partially. Ordinary rewards wouldn't satisfy him. After some deliberation, Balbabamba made his decision. At times like this, simplicity is best. Power flowed into Taesan. You have obtained the title Savior of the World. You have obtained the Ring of the Savior. Your level has increased. Your level has increased. Your level has increased. Check the rewards yourself. Balbabamba's form began to dissipate. Just before disappearing completely, he spoke. You are unstable right now. If you ever achieve full immortality, the wizard will come to find you. Got it. With those words, Balbabamba vanished. Taesan checked his rewards. Title: Savior of the World, given to those who perfectly saved a world. Plus 2,000 health, plus 500 mana, plus 200 magic power, plus 200 attack power, plus 200 defense. Taesan realized what Balbabamba meant by simplicity. It was a title that significantly boosted stats, just raw power. Not bad. Titles, unlike equipment, activated their effects simply by being owned. With performance like this, it rivaled D-player equipment. Ring of the Savior, a reward given to those who restored a world on the brink of destruction, plus 500 mana, plus 100 magic power, plus 300 attack power. All the attached stats were highly beneficial to Taesan. It was a remarkable item. As for the default clear reward, the bloodstained hammer, Taesan didn't use it as a weapon and planned to sell it in the shop. And then there were the skills. Special Divine Skill, Sanctum Creation, Proficiency. 1% Consumption of Divinity. Creates a sanctum by materializing your divinity into a domain. The size and traits of the sanctum depend on the amount of divinity consumed and the method of manifestation. It was the first divine skill he had acquired. This skill was more suited for Earth than for the labyrinth. It was ideal for use on a ravaged Earth. It could also be maintained indefinitely as long as it was sustained by people's faith. Lesser monsters wouldn't even be able to approach the sanctum. And then there was the Transcendent Skill in black text. Transcendent Skill, Eternal and Immutable Faith. Proficiency 1%, Cost. Faith and Dignity. You receive faith from all living beings in one world. They will send you unwavering, eternal faith. By consuming their faith and your own dignity, you can obtain complete divinity. Taesan had a general understanding of the skill's effects. You have activated eternal and immutable faith. In an instant, Taesan's inner self expanded. Faith from people who worshipped him transcended space to flow into him. A powerful strain accompanied the surge as his body and mind reached a higher realm. The omnipotence he had felt in the world on the brink of destruction dominated his entire being. Oh, the ghost let out an unintentional exclamation. Taesan had now surpassed mortality. Is this for real? No, Taesan deactivated the skill. The sense of omnipotence vanished, replaced by exhaustion. I'm not quite there yet. It was true that he could temporarily transcend mortality. The duration and stability were the main issues. Given the strain, it was challenging to maintain even for a few minutes. Moreover, faith was being consumed at an abnormal rate. The number of people who worshipped him didn't exceed 100,000, forcing the skill's usage risked collapsing sanctums sustained by faith, so it's limited to that world. In a way, it was natural. In the world on the brink of destruction, he had become a god by receiving everyone's faith. It was a realm he had reached through unconventional means. This meant his divine power was usable only in that world. Attempting to use such power elsewhere came with significant strain. Still, it's unbelievable. You've definitively surpassed mortality, even if only temporarily. Do you know what that means? The ghost spoke in a slightly excited tone. It means no one who hasn't also transcended mortality can defeat you. This was unlike anything before. Even those who had approached the boundary of transcendence could never defeat Taesan. That was an unchanging fact. It's still an unstable power, but the upcoming Earth Return quest. Already players from China, Japan, and Korea worship Taesan. What would happen if people from other countries began to worship him? As Taesan's stories spread widely through the community, his name was starting to be mentioned in other countries as well. Although many people had died while fighting monsters or descending the labyrinth, the number of surviving players still far exceeded that of the world on the brink of destruction. If he could receive faith from them, if he could gain the qualifications by receiving widespread faith on Earth as well, he could potentially maintain the effects of the skills stably. There was even a good chance of achieving 100% proficiency in divine power. The return to Earth was something to look forward to. Taesan started making his way to the 78th floor. A quest window popped up in his view. Quest for the 78th floor begins. Successfully complete the librarian's request in the Library of All Things. Reward: the Book of Knowledge. Secret reward.